I exhausted my lifelong cultivation to eradicate the Demon Ancestor, yet due to the excessive demonic energy I absorbed, I not only plummeted from grace to become a cripple, but I was also regarded by the sect as a cursed omen. Now the sect leader and the elders have even falsely accused me of slaughtering an elder just to restore my cultivation. They claimed I conspired to steal the sect's supreme treasure. Such a clumsy scheme, I saw no point in even offering an explanation. The person framing you knows better than anyone just how innocent you truly are, do they not? With this thought, I finally spoke. I had nothing more to say, and with a calm gaze I looked toward my master. Since that is the case, you shall leave the sect tomorrow. Our connection ends here. Do not speak of the past again. After speaking, Taoist Vang Ting ignored everyone, stood up, and departed from the grand hall. The crowd erupted into whispers while the sect masters and the elders who had already foreseen this outcome remained silent. I had long anticipated this result myself. I did not mention the shifting tides of fate. Instead, I bowed deeply to Trang Trong-han and said in a low voice, I offer my gratitude to my master for the many years of nurturing. From this day forth, I bid you farewell. May we never meet again in this life. May our paths never cross again. Behind the hall, Taoist Vang Tin's body stiffened slightly. He knew that what he had done today was a betrayal of his disciple, but he had no choice. With my cultivation ruined, a demonic soul lingering within, and a background that could compromise the very fortune of the Than Van sect, a person such as this could not remain. For the sake of the Than Van sect, he had to tacitly permit the trap set by the enforcement elder. Not only was I expelled from the sect, but my reputation had been completely tarnished, leaving Taoist Vang Tin to simply turn a blind eye. I could only wait until his lifespan reached its end to eventually prove my innocence. On the narrow path beside the cliff, I stood alone. I arrived at the Than Van sect with nothing in my hands, and today I leave with nothing as well. We owe each other nothing. With a few swift movements, I leapt from the heights, my body landing gracefully upon a tree branch. As my sleeves fluttered, a strange surge of power welled up within my body, as if a long-dormant spiritual energy was finally awakening. I closed my eyes, quietly sensing the ebbs and flows of this power, as if my soul had become one with the universe. My mind gradually stilled, and I could feel every cell in my body greedily absorbing this surge of spiritual energy. Following the Great War, my cultivation base and foundation were utterly shattered. I exhausted countless methods, yet none yielded the slightest result. 30 years ago, in the final battle, I slew the Demon Ancestor with a single strike. Countless lives within the demon sect were extinguished that day. To prevent the lingering malevolent spirits from seizing the opportunity to wreak havoc upon the world, I bore the consequences alone. Never did I imagine those countless souls would converge within my body, birthing a demonic spirit. Half a year ago, I attempted to utilize the demonic spirit within me to absorb spirit energy, hoping to mend my grievous wounds. At the very beginning, the agony was excruciating. The demonic spirit inside me was screaming. But as time passed, I gradually grew accustomed to the pain, sensing my body slowly beginning to mend. For the first time in 30 years, I caught a glimpse of hope, yet I could never have anticipated that before I could fully recover, I would be cast out of the Qingyun sect. I bear no hatred for the Qingyun sect, nor for the master who orchestrated this, nor for those who mocked me. It is simply that I have no desire to forgive them. In the first half of my life, I devoted myself entirely to cultivation for the sake of the Qingyun sect and for the sake of all living beings. In this life hereafter, I wish to live for myself. At the foot of Qingyun Mountain, in a bustling city, I sipped tea while listening to a storyteller drone on and on. The story he told spoke of how Xuanxiao, to save his junior sister, charged alone into the demon star with only his sword, sweeping away 6 demon kings. Hearing this, I paused in a daze, then turned back. I had not expected the tale being told to be my own. Hearing others recount my own experiences, the sensation is truly surreal. Just then, the sound of a sword ringing out echoed across the sky, causing everyone in the room to look upward. That sound was the Qingyun sword. When the Qingyun stirs, the world trembles. Peace had reigned for only 30 years. Could another great calamity be upon us? I watched as the Qingyun sword streaked toward the heavens like a bolt of lightning, releasing a dance of sword light upon the sky. It is finished. With the power of this blade, an entire city could be reduced to ruins in an instant. The people stood in awe of the sword, unaware of the impending catastrophe. Whoosh, a flash of sword light, a surge of invisible force descended, intercepting the strike. The overwhelming sword intent collapsed, the mountainside wind turned into rain, and the sword energy rapidly dissipated, transforming into droplets that descended upon the earth. The commoners in Qingyun City looked up, and as the heavy rain fell, it did not soak their garments, but instead transformed into streaks of white mist, dissolving into the world. The rain intensified, accompanied by a distant, thunderous roar, as if the sky were slowly splitting open, followed by a long, heavy sigh. Inside the tea house, I traced a sword sign in the air with my fingers, then set my teacup down and let out a long breath. The back of my robe was soaked in cold sweat. I was 17 when I first mastered the Qingyun sword, and I had achieved perfect resonance with the sword spirit. Even after only half a year of bodily recovery, I was still able to exert control over the Qingyun sword. I simply do not understand why the Qingyun sword would erupt into such a frenzy on its own. This thought flashed through my mind, then vanished as quickly as it had appeared. I couldn't help but smile. This was not something I should be concerning myself with at this moment. As for the Qingyun sect, I am utterly disillusioned, but how could I abandon the tens of thousands of common folk in Qingyun City? If I were to remain idle, I would no longer be the Li Xuanxiao who sought salvation through rebirth. With a single strike, Taoist Wangqing quickly regained control of the Qingyun sword. He stared at the spring rain in disbelief, standing frozen in mid-air, his hand trembling as he gripped the sword. This is the spring breeze turns to rain technique, my master's signature move. He, more than anyone, knew the signature techniques of his own disciple. Everyone in the Qingyun sect gazed into the distance toward Qingyun City at the foot of the mountain. They watched helplessly as the Qingyun sword plummeted toward the city like a falling star. Yet, in the next instant, the overwhelming sword intent transformed into a torrential downpour. The spring breeze turns to rain technique of my master. Within the Qingyun sect, there is hardly a soul who does not know of this technique. After 30 years, the spring breeze turns to rain has finally reappeared. In that moment, Taoist Wang Qing scoured every inch of the area within a 100-mile radius, taking Qingyun City as the center, but that familiar aura had already vanished. Sectmaster, where is that person? The great elder of law enforcement also swept his divine sense through the area, but found nothing. Despite his frustration, he dared not press Taoist Wang Qing further. Wang Qing pondered for a moment before flicking his sleeves and departing. Regardless of the cost, that person must be found. As you command, Sectmaster. The night was deathly silent. Moonlight filtered through the dense canopy, casting silver rays upon the deep forest like a layer of delicate silk, enveloping the treetops in a cool, ethereal glow. At this moment, everything in the world seemed pure and pristine. I sat cross-legged at the base of a tree, a current of spiritual energy hovering above my hand, emitting a peculiar radiance. A mysterious power circulated within me, faintly reminiscent of the demonic soul energy dwelling in my body. I began to refine and separate the spiritual energy. A moment later, I guided the purest essence of that energy into my body to circulate. The Changsheng Dao Sutra began its slow process of restoring my physical form. The Changsheng Dao Sutra was a technique I stumbled upon years ago in a mysterious realm. At first, it seemed to have no effect, but over time, I gradually came to realize the profound wonders of this manual. To recover my body, the Changsheng Dao Sutra remains the finest choice. Over the past half year, I have been cultivating while observing the subtle changes taking hold within me. Ever since my parents and younger sister passed away, I have not returned to my hometown for a long time. Returning this time, I intend to visit their graves, marking this as the first stage of my journey. 3 days later, the reeds along the riverbank swayed gently in the evening breeze, emitting a soft, rustling sound. Hidden within these reeds lay an old, dilapidated ferry landing. It was once the transportation hub of this region, a vital crossing point for all those traveling between the rivers. Now this ferry landing has lost its former splendor, leaving behind only a few remnants of decay. Upon the river surface, a small boat drifted slowly toward the bank. As the boat emerged from the reeds, 3 people stepped off. 2 men and 1 woman, among whom was a young master of extraordinary bearing, with a fire-red squirrel perched upon his shoulder. The boatman waved his hand, saying, "We have waited here for several hours only to see a single boat. There are hardly any people left here. I was simply idle with nothing to do, so I came to pick you up." The boatman was an elderly man who navigated the vessel. Peng Yun was a smooth talker, capable of striking up a conversation with anyone. "Boatman, why has this ferry landing fallen into such disrepair?" "It became this way ever since the river changed its course. My father used to tell me that in the past, this landing was bustling with activity and prosperity." I lowered my head to observe the water. It flowed murky and thick, revealing almost nothing beneath the surface. At 10 years old, when I left home with my father to join the Qingyun sect, I had crossed this river, but back then the water sparkled like a ribbon inlaid with precious gems. The water's surface was sometimes as smooth as a mirror, reflecting the trees on the banks and the deep blue sky, and at other times it rippled with gentle waves. At that time, my father sold our 2 pigs and borrowed quite a sum from our relatives to cover my travel expenses. He said, "Son, you must bring honor to the Li family." The scenery remains, yet the people are gone. The mist on the river slowly condensed until finally one could not even see one's own fingers when reaching out. In the chaotic times of war long ago, this river claimed the lives of many who drowned within it. Have you ever heard of the water ghosts? At the mere mention of such spectral matters, Peng Yun's eyes immediately lit up. Legend says that those who jump into the river to end their lives or drown, their souls remain tethered to the place where they died. Fueled by the yin energy of the river water, these souls transform into water ghosts. They wait patiently to lure the living underwater or directly force them beneath the surface to drown so that they may act as their substitutes. This is their way to seek reincarnation and become a replacement ghost. Only by such means can a water ghost be reincarnated and escape the suffering of hell. Peng Yun's throat bobbed as he asked, "What do these water ghosts look like?" "That thing is covered in long fur with eyes as red as blood and a black striped face. Once it enters the water, its supernatural powers are vast and it is truly unstoppable. However, once they reach the shore, they are left without even the strength to strike back." Seeing the boatman speak with such conviction, Bon Van could not help but ask, "It is as if you have seen this before, old master." "I have indeed seen it," he replied. As the boatman remained motionless and turned his head, Ban Van's expression stiffened. His pupils contracted sharply and his face turned deathly pale in an instant. It was as if he had just laid eyes upon something truly terrifying. He saw that the boatman's face was completely covered in thick black fur. A pair of blood-red eyes stared back at him with a mocking gaze. Sudden fierce winds began to howl, accompanied by grotesque guttural growls. As if to tear the vessel asunder, Bon Van collapsed onto the floor of the boat. His forehead pressed tightly against the side of the deck. Sweat poured down him like rain, and his entire body trembled like a leaf in a gale. The composure of a master he once held had vanished entirely. Xiaohuang screamed in tandem, "Heavens, it is a malevolent spirit." I glanced at the creature and thought to myself, and you yourself are a monster that has achieved cultivation. The young maiden in white stood at the side of the boat, her form swaying gently with the vessel, her expression void of emotion as she stared into the murky water. "Young master, give me your sword." Trembling, Bunvan unbuckled the sword from his waist. Here it is." The maiden accepted the sword and turned to me, asking, "Do you know how to row a boat?" "I do." "I leave the rowing to you," she said, and I nodded in reassurance. The winds were violent and the waves were terrifying, yet I quickly clasped my hands together, chanting incessantly. "Amitabha, Infinite Celestial Venerable, Nine Heavens Responding Thunder Puhua Celestial Venerable, protect us." I couldn't help but smile, thinking that my prayers were truly a jumbled mess. I looked toward the maiden again. The surface of the sword in her hand shone as bright as a mirror. It appeared the hilt was crafted from peach wood. Engraved upon it were intricate patterns and archaic symbols. Along the blade was a line of ancient script, still distinct despite the passage of time. These characters seemed to be either a powerful incantation or the name of the sword itself as the maiden grasped it with both hands and plunged the blade into the murky depths. A moment later, a massive pillar of water erupted, the gale ceased, and the turbulent ripples upon the surface gradually vanished. "Continue rowing," the maiden said, sheathing her sword. The small boat glided across the river as the surrounding fog began to dissipate. Bon Van, still gripped by terror, tried to look back, but there was nothing to see. It was as if nothing at all had happened. The maiden returned the sword to him and resumed her seat, falling into her usual silence. It seems there was no need for this young master to take action personally. Bon Yun offered a reluctant smile and stood up. Xiao clapped his hands in delight. "Big brother, that was truly impressive." Bon Yun patted my shoulder. "Brother, with us on this journey you may rest easy. There is no need to fear any demons or specters." "Then I am truly troubled. I do not know how I might ever repay your kindness. Once we reach Yun City, a simple home-cooked meal will suffice." "A home-cooked meal?" I narrowed my eyes slightly, recalling just how delicious the osmanthus rice my mother used to make tasted. Yun City is home to many osmanthus trees. When I was young, the osmanthus tree before our house always seemed so tall and vast, as if its branches could reach the heavens themselves. Back then, I loved to stand beneath the tree, gazing up at its boughs, my heart overflowing with infinite imagination. "Very well, I shall invite you to enjoy osmanthus rice in the future." As the small boat docked and his feet touched the solid earth, Bong Yun finally felt at ease. Late that night, I returned to the riverbank alone. "Supreme Edict, transcend the wandering souls and restless spirits, grant salvation to all living beings, grant transcendence, grant salvation to all living beings, grant transcendence." Under the moonlight, the river water remained murky and stagnant. In the forest not far away, the sound of insects chirping echoed through the air. Their voices became even more distinct in the stillness of the night. Following my incantation, rays of light emerged upon the river's surface, appearing like a torch burning amidst the darkness. Signaling that hope was near, the chants from my lips grew clearer and more resonant. That path of light gradually converged into a glowing orb, growing brighter and larger with each passing moment. Its radiance illuminated the entire river and cast a glow upon my face. Such pitiful souls, all of them. "Go now," I murmured, turning to depart. "Thank you, immortal master. Thank you for saving our lives. In our next life, we shall serve as beasts of burden to repay the great kindness and virtue you have shown us. We shall never forget it." Dozens of voices resonated from within the river, and I flicked my sleeve before returning to the campfire. The fire illuminated a small clearing where Bon Yun and Xiao Huang lay upon a sheepskin rug fast asleep. The young maiden sat by the fire, her expression unreadable, lifting her head slightly as I returned. "Where have you been?" "Just taking a walk," I lied, and I did not offer any further explanation. Sitting down beneath the withered tree, individuals of unknown origin are inherently dangerous. My young master is not quite right in the head. That is the only reason he would so carelessly choose to travel with strangers. I chuckled softly. "If you speak of your young master in such a manner, his heart will surely ache." The young girl spoke with solemnity. "My young master is not intelligent, and he is quite cowardly as well. I only hope you harbor no ill intentions, for I am very strong." "I understand, and I hope you understand that all the better." I replied, "I am not the person you hope I am." The girl closed her eyes once more. As the smoke from the evening hearth stretches toward the horizon, I look out, yet I cannot see my home. Standing before my homeland at this very moment, my eyes are filled with sorrow. I left as a youth and return as an old man. Time waits for no one, passing as swiftly as a white horse leaping past a crevice. When I first departed, Yun City was not nearly as prosperous as it is now. In those years, it was merely a small town, yet the closer I draw to home, the more I find myself wanting to speak. My family were farmers for generations. Had things gone as expected, I too would have been a farmer. Bong Yun continued, "Then what are you doing now?" "As of now, I am perhaps nothing more than a wanderer with nowhere to call home." I smiled bitterly. Bang Yun nodded, as if he could already envision all that I had endured. Forced to leave one's family home and native land, deep within one's heart lies a mountain of regret and helplessness. Arriving in a foreign place to seek a living or to lead a life of aimless wandering, busy every single day simply to survive. Looking back, everything has changed. The stars have shifted and the world is not as it was. At this thought, Bong Yun involuntarily shook his head, nearly shedding tears of sympathy. The last time I returned home was when my younger sister passed away. Someone once told me that the great Tao is heartless. Once you step onto a certain path, it signifies that another path has been closed to you forever. I offered a faint smile. Bong Yun felt a flicker of doubt. His sister had passed away, yet looking at this man who was young and not much different in age from himself, it must surely have been due to illness, a life cut short. How truly pitiful. Very quickly, the group made their way into the city. The village where I once lived was located just outside the city walls. Later, when the city was reconstructed, our village was incorporated into its boundaries. Yet a village remains a village. The Li family within the village was a prominent household. After my parents, younger brother, and younger sister passed away, and after I learned of the news, I entrusted others to send wealth to the descendants of the Li family to help restore the Li family to prosperity. For their own safety, I commanded the descendants of the Li family never to reveal that they were the kin of Li Xuanxiao. By now, the Li family has long since moved into the city. The old house in the village is only occasionally cleaned by servants, but the ancestral graves still remain. Fortunately, the osmanthus tree before the entrance still stands. I gaze at the osmanthus tree. When I was a child, I often climbed its branches to pluck the flowers. My mother and sister would gather them below. Back then, we were poor and had little food. Using the harvested osmanthus flowers to make osmanthus rice was the happiest time of the year. So, is this your home? Peng Yun gestured toward the house in front of the osmanthus tree. It was once. I placed my hand upon the osmanthus tree, feeling the warmth of the sun and the coolness of the breeze. Listening to the rustling of the leaves, it felt as though the tree itself was telling a story. The squirrel Xiao Hong plucked a leaf and chewed on it, then leaped back onto Peng Yun's shoulder and whispered softly, "Why does a young man like him speak with such aged gravitas?" Peng Yun nodded in agreement. He did not resemble a youth of 20, but rather an old man who had long passed the age of Li Shi on the hillside. I stood before a row of gravestones. The original headstones from years ago had long been replaced by high-quality white jade tablets. I remained silent for a long while before speaking slowly. When I left home, my mother and sister wept uncontrollably. My mother, out of love for me, secretly borrowed silver from the village head and stitched it into the lining of my clothes. It was only many years later that I learned my mother lived to be 92 years old, a long and full life. I was unable to stay and care for her. After my mother passed, my younger sister sent me a letter, and it was then that I pointed to another grave. This is my younger brother. I only met him a few times. It was 3 years after I left home that I even learned I had such a brother. I had promised my younger sister that on the day of her wedding, I would surely attend, but I broke that promise. When I met her again, she was already an old woman lying on her sickbed. I gently brushed my fingertips across the name etched onto the tombstone. How many years have drifted by? In the vast expanse of time, where can I find the days of old? I shook my head and led Peng Yun and the others to my old home. There was no one in the house, and the doors had been locked countless times, but such a trifle could hardly hinder me. Peng Yun watched as I pried the lock open, the corner of his mouth twitching slightly. "Is this truly your home?" "It is, though I have not returned in a very long time." The house was kept quite clean. There were only a few weeds in the courtyard and a small supply of rice left in the kitchen. I looked left and right, searching here and there not to pluck osmanthus flowers, but to find a pot to cook rice. Soon enough, the fragrant osmanthus rice was ready, served with pickled vegetables, cabbage soup, and a cup of light tea, a meal beyond compare. The expressionless young girl was the first to take up her bowl and begin eating in large mouthfuls. I tasted a spoonful, yet it lacked the familiar flavors I remembered. I still recall how delicious the osmanthus rice my mother used to make was. Its fragrance was rich, reminiscent of both butter and honey. My mother's osmanthus rice was exceptionally fragrant. I would often sneak some to the blacksmith's daughter who lived next door. She once told me that when she grew up, she would become my wife. Later, the blacksmith family moved into the city, and I even snuck into the city to look for her. I paused in my thoughts. Had I not left home back then, perhaps I would have a house full of children and grandchildren by now. No, that is incorrect. I would surely be in my grave already. I was lost in my reminiscence. "Big brother, this person is truly strange." Xiao Huang whispered into Peng Yun's ear. Peng harbored a vague suspicion. Could this person be suffering from some form of mental ailment? Deep into the night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Since childhood, I have possessed a perfect memory. Everything that has ever occurred remains vivid in my mind. I can even recall the very first time I walked. It was a morning filled with beautiful sunlight. I cautiously took the first steps of my life. My tiny legs wobbled as if I might collapse at any given moment. My parents stood by my side. Suddenly, a chaotic commotion erupted outside. Moments later, the distant street illuminated with the glow of spiritual energy. I sat up while the young girl in the adjacent room stepped out, her expression unreadable. Outside the door, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed. I caught sight of several sect disciples in Taoist robes rushing past, followed by a squad of local constables. "There is demonic aura," the young girl remarked. "It will likely be resolved soon." I closed the door and returned to my sleep. The following day, under a clear and sunny sky, I counted the meager amount of silver I had left. I decided to invite Peng Yun and his maidservant for a meal at the only tavern in the village. After all, Peng Yun had generously covered all travel expenses along the way. Inside the tavern, we had barely settled in when 4 or 5 disciples clad in Taoist robes walked in, arms draped over one another. They shouted boisterously, demanding that the proprietor bring out wine and meat. The proprietor wore a pained expression, yet he could only offer them a fawning welcome. These Taoists had been lingering here under the guise of exorcising demons. They feasted on fine wine and exquisite food every day without paying a single copper. It had been over a month. If the demon were not eliminated, I feared this small tavern would be eaten into bankruptcy. The proprietor whispered that they were the same Taoists who had followed the constables to hunt the demon yesterday. Li Xuanxiao glanced at one of them. The aura emanating from his body was strikingly similar to the demonic energy from the night before. The young girl spoke. They do not look like good people. Young master, let us leave. Peng Yun was stunned, failing completely to understand what the young girl was implying. The young girl reached out to pull him away from those Taoists. We might encounter trouble. I am not leaving. Explain yourself clearly. Without another word, the young girl scooped Peng Yun up, intending to carry him outside. Peng Yun's face flushed crimson as he flailed his legs wildly. Put me down. Put me down. Oh, this young lady is quite strong, isn't she? What is this young lady doing? Why are you carrying your husband away like that? A group of drunken men, seeing this scene, gathered around. Once their eyes landed on her, they could not look away. This young lady is truly exquisite. The young girl stepped back half a pace, seemingly repulsed by the pungent smell of alcohol clinging to them. A Taoist slammed the table and stood up in anger, shouting, "Watch your tongue. If it were not for us, you would have already been devoured by the demon." My Taoist master, what is the meaning of this? Hearing the commotion from within the room, the innkeeper hurried over. Please, Taoist masters, there has been a misunderstanding. They are not from around here. Let us prioritize peace and harmony, move aside. Before his words could fade, he was shoved to the ground by one of the Taoists. The young woman set Bai Yun down and spoke once more. Move. Several Taoists blocked her path, their gazes filled with mockery. Little lady, give us a smile, flash a smile, and we might let you pass. Bai Yun stepped forward, his hand tightening around the hilt of his blade. In broad daylight, you dare harass a lady of the Liang family? If you continue to persist, do not blame this young master for being discourteous. The young woman reached out a hand to shield Bai Yun. Young master, you cannot defeat them. Can you not give me some face before all these people? As both sides stood on the brink of conflict, the doors of the inn were pushed open once again. A woman stepped into the inn, dressed in a floral gown draped with a blue and white silk mantle, her feet clad in cloud-patterned shoes. Her hair was styled into an exquisite bun, and though her eyes held a trace of sorrow, she radiated an aura of elegance. In her hand she gripped a sword. Upon its hilt rested a luminous gemstone, emitting a mysterious ethereal light. Behind the woman followed a group of individuals who entered the inn one after another. They were all disciples of the sect. The commotion within the inn fell silent, as all eyes were drawn instinctively toward this group. Their arrival was like a stone cast into a placid lake, shattering the noise and stillness of the inn. Regardless of their appearance or attire, this group possessed an aura that seemed to originate from another world, standing in stark contrast to their surroundings. Senior brother. Moju spoke with an agitated voice, cupping his hands in a salute. The others behind him spoke in unison, senior brother. This scene felt to me both familiar and foreign. I am no longer your senior brother. Senior brother, I raised a hand to stop Moju from speaking. I know what you wish to say, but say no more. With so many of you arriving at once, I cannot afford to treat you all to a feast, but I can offer you a bowl of osmanthus rice. Mozu fell silent for a moment. Senior brother, your wounds had previously shown signs of improvement, but we did not wish to give you false hope. I had not yet spoken, yet I never expected it would truly prove effective this time. I had not intended to conceal it, and thus Moju quickly sensed that my body, which had once been filled with the stench of death, was at this very moment brimming with vitality. Within his dantian, a surge of spiritual essence had emerged. That is wonderful, senior brother. Senior brother, you have truly succeeded. Moju's emotions were like a cauldron of boiling water, her excitement threatening to spill over. All these years, she had witnessed everything her senior brother had endured. She watched as the once proud genius who grew up by her side fell from grace, slowly transforming from a hero into a harbinger of misfortune in the eyes of others. In the next moment, tears flowed uncontrollably from the corners of her eyes, her lips trembling, yet she made no sound, weeping silently as if to purge all the pain and sorrow of these past years. There, you silly girl, I am all right now. What are you crying for? I smiled and patted her head. Some of those standing behind were genuinely happy for Li Xuanxiao, bowing to congratulate senior brother Li on his recovery, while others harbored complex emotions. The junior sister Ning Ying bit her lip slightly, while junior brother Chen Ping forced a smile. Mozu was different. Though the two of them never went so far as to spew malice at their former senior brother, they had indeed distanced themselves from him, especially after I was afflicted by the demonic soul. During one of the Immortal Ascension gatherings, I was seated next to Ning Ying, which caused her to go to the sect steward's disciple and cause a scene for quite a while. Ultimately, she forced the steward's disciple to swap seats with her, and it was only after I took the initiative to apologize that the situation was finally resolved. Moju was so furious over this incident that she slapped Ning Ying. Thinking back to that year, if it were not for senior brother Li's unwavering protection, how could she have reached where she is today? It goes without saying that Ning Ying's very life was saved by Li. That year, Ning Ying provoked trouble and was struck by the poison of a dragon python. If senior brother Li had not ventured deep into the Sunset Forest to battle the violet gold dragon python for 3 days and 3 nights, forcing it to provide the antidote for Ning Ying, the grass on her grave would likely be 3 feet tall by now. The suffering has ended and the rewards have come. Congratulations, senior brother. Ning Ying bowed in salute, yet I said nothing, not even sparing her a glance. Ning Ying's expression stiffened and she bit her rosy lip. Fortunately, the others followed suit and bowed in unison. The suffering has ended and the rewards have come. Congratulations, senior brother. I waved my hand dismissively. I have already said it. From here on out, I am no longer your senior brother. If there is nothing else, I shall take my leave. Their expressions turned awkward and they collectively looked towards senior sister Mo Zhu. After a moment of hesitation, Mo Zhu bowed to Li. Wait, senior brother. Mo Zhu turned her head abruptly, staring at Li Xuanxiao in astonishment. Could it be that you have finally had a change of heart, senior brother? Those fellows intentionally released the beasts they kept in captivity to cause chaos, only to feign the role of demon hunters to extort money here. Deal with them, junior sister. The Qingyun sect is the undisputed leader of the righteous path. They have branch sects everywhere, working alongside other sects and the Imperial Court's Kenshin Bureau to maintain order within the cultivation world. This matter should have been handled by them or the agents from the Kentian Bureau. Mo Zhu stood stunned, her eyes filled with disappointment, before she immediately turned her head toward the direction I pointed, watching those alcohol-reeking Taoists being led away. By this time, the Taoists had sobered up significantly, and upon regaining their senses, they saw a man in cyan robes walking toward them. How bold we are men of the Zhengyang Mountain. One of the Taoists summoned his courage and shouted, only to be slapped by his senior brother until he spun around twice. The eldest among them hurriedly forced a smile. There must be a misunderstanding, esteemed members of the Qingyun sect. We are disciples of the Zhengyang sect, here to slay demons and eliminate evil. The local officials can bear witness for us. Mo Zhu, having no interest in these excuses, handed the matter over to the Imperial Kentian Bureau personnel stationed here to resolve. The Taoists were so intimidated by the aura of the man in the cyan robes that they dared not even breathe loudly, let alone attempt to flee. They could only obediently depart from the restaurant. A short while later, only our group remained in the once bustling restaurant. The young girl sat back down and calmly continued her meal. Now it is safe, as if nothing had happened at all just moments ago. Peng Yun, however, was struck as if by lightning, standing frozen in his spot. Those people were disciples of the Qingyun sect. I picked up a piece of candlefish to taste and could not help but nod. It was delicious. They called you senior brother? You are a disciple of the Qingyun sect. That was in the past. Peng Yun pulled up a chair and sat across from Li Xuanxiao. He stared intently at Li Xuanxiao, scratching his head vigorously, recalling the days he had spent interacting with me, and said with utter disbelief, your status within the Qingyun sect must be incredibly high. Just a moment ago, all of those individuals possessed an extraordinary aura, especially the woman in the lead, who looked more like a celestial maiden. This was the image of a cultivator as he had envisioned. At a glance, it was clear she was no mere nobody in the Qingyun sect, yet she behaved with such deference toward me. Li Xuanxiao spoke nonchalantly. I have already left the Qingyun sect. Then, are you acquainted with Li Xuanxiao? I have met him once or twice in passing. Peng Yun drew a deep breath and grasped my hand. Then could you introduce me to the Qingyun sect? I smiled and said, are you not a disciple of Li Xuanxiao? Are you not a member of the Qingyun sect? Seeing his deception laid bare, Peng Yun laughed sheepishly. You wouldn't understand. The reasons behind this are somewhat complex. In truth, I am a registered disciple of my master Li Xuanxiao. Once, while my master was traveling, he encountered me. Seeing that I possessed remarkable aptitude, he took me in as his disciple. Afterward, my master went off to slay demons and eliminate evil, so I have not yet entered the Qingyun sect. I pretended to understand and nodded. That is quite a story. Peng Yun lowered his voice. As long as you introduce me to the Qingyun sect, I will grant you whatever you desire. Let me share a secret with you. My family is the Peng clan of Dongyun. We have nothing if not wealth. Young Master Peng truly wishes to join Qingyun? Peng Yun scratched his head. In truth, I have a matter of great importance to discuss with my master, Li Xuanxiao. But if I could conveniently join the Qingyun sect in the process, nothing could be better. I shook my head. This one is incompetent and useless. As young Master Peng just heard, I am no longer a disciple of the Qingyun sect. Disappointment was evident on Peng Yun's face, but then he heard Li Xuanxiao say, however, but why? Peng Yun asked hurriedly, those people just now were all disciples of the Qingyun sect. Young Master Peng, if you wish to join the Qingyun sect or find Li Xuanxiao, you might as well go and ask them. While they haven't gone far yet, there is still time. I am going now. Peng Yun suddenly realized the truth, hurriedly stood up and dashed outside. Wait, do not run about blindly. The young maiden stuffed a steamed bun into her mouth and followed after him. Xiao Huang also quickly followed suit. Big brother, big brother. I could not help but chuckle. Looking at the spread of food, I realized I would have to enjoy it alone. It seems that senior brother Li's injuries have truly healed. Having just been expelled by the Qingyun sect, Chen Ping hesitated, and the group exchanged glances. The Qingyun sect possesses the status of the leader of the righteous path in the world, but today more than half of that prestige was earned by Li Xuanxiao's defeat of the demonic path years ago. Now that Li Xuanxiao has recovered, even a fraction of his peak strength would be enough to upend the current situation. With a single sword in his hand, who in this world could stop him? Since the Qingyun sect cast him out, it is inevitable that he might seek retribution in the future. Thinking of this, the group felt their hearts weigh heavy, especially Ning Ying and Chen Ping, whose faces were filled with dread. At that exact moment, someone came rushing toward them from behind. Wait a moment, wait a moment. The group turned their heads to see a young man dressed in white. I am Peng Yun. Are you all disciples of the Qingyun sect? Mo Zhu observed him for a moment. Peng Yun had been standing next to Li Xuanxiao at the restaurant, but Mo Zhu had been so preoccupied with her senior brother that she had not paid him any mind. Is there something you need? Peng Yun looked at the extraordinary woman standing before him, his throat bobbing. May I join the Qingyun sect? The Qingyun sect holds its grand recruitment once every 20 years. The next selection is still 10 years away. Even if you could wait 10 years, your age would no longer be suitable. Mo Zhu replied indifferently. Peng Yun immediately changed his tune. Then I shall not join the Qingyun sect. Can you tell me where the true person Li Xuanxiao is right now? Peng Yun did not notice that when he mentioned the Qingyun sect, the gazes cast upon him by the others became somewhat peculiar, but as long as the other party was still willing to listen, he hurriedly explained, you all do not know this, but back when the demonic cult slaughtered the city, my grandfather was the one rescued by Li Xuanxiao. True person Li. True person Li even passed down a sword manual to my grandfather before he departed. Before passing away, my grandfather's final wish was to express his gratitude to true person Li. I left home this time to find true person. Pan Yan had been by his grandfather's side since he was a child. His grandfather had passed down to him the sword techniques learned from Li Xuanxiao. Thus, ever since he left home, he had declared himself a disciple of Li Xuan. Pan Yun looked at the members of the Qingyun sect with great anticipation, but they returned his gaze with an increasingly strange expression. The person inside the restaurant just now was indeed Li Xuanxiao, senior brother Li. After a long, heavy silence, one disciple finally spoke up. What? By the time Pan Yun rushed back to the restaurant, Li Xuanxiao was no longer there. There was still plenty of food left on the table, as if it had been intentionally left behind for Pan Yun and his group. Pan Yun went to Li Xuanxiao's former residence, but he could not find a trace of him anywhere. Could he really be the world-renowned Li Xuanxiao? Did I really share a meal with him, sleep in the same room, and converse with him? The young girl beside him, who was expressionlessly eating a pastry, patted him on the shoulder. He had called him brother, promising that he would look after him in the future. He said that once he made a name for himself, he would allow Pan Yun to boast of their connection across the 4 seas. Pan Yun pressed his hands hard against his head, letting out a shrill cry. He was so mortified he wished he could find a hole to crawl into. The girl, still eating her pastry, covered her ears. As night fell, I lay on the hillside behind the house, where the starry sky slowly unfolded like a magnificent painting. The starry sky here is not as beautiful as the one at the Qingyun sect. A voice echoed from behind me, and I smiled. Since I was young, I always felt that the sky of my hometown was the vastest, the most beautiful, until that first night after I arrived at the Qingyun sect, when I finally understood what it meant to be a frog at the bottom of a well. Now, having weathered so many storms, looking back at my hometown sky carries a different flavor. Moju stood on the hillside looking at Li Xuanxiao's senior brother return to the sect. The Qingyun sect will restore the justice you are owed. Your injuries have healed and everything can return to how it once was. Li Xuanxiao smiled. Indeed, everything would return to how it was, provided that my injuries were truly healed. Moju fell silent. Li Xuanxiao's words left her with no room to argue. As long as senior brother Li's injuries were recovered, all the malicious rumors would crumble without a single blow. He would once again become a presence admired by thousands. Li Xuanxiao closed his eyes. I will not be returning. I am a little tired. If you leave the Qingyun sect, senior brother, what do you intend to do? I wish to wander through the mountains and rivers to traverse the world and see what it has to offer. While I am at it, I shall seek out a few old acquaintances to ease the minds of those currently living in fear. I, Li Xuanxiao, am not one to hold petty grudges. The Qingyun sect and I are finished. Li Xuanxiao changed his tone. Let us discuss something more pleasant. This topic is far too heavy. Tell me, has that youth named Ping Yun come looking for you all yet? Mo Zhu spoke. He claimed you once saved his grandfather when the demonic sect besieged the city, and even imparted your sword techniques to him. His grandfather's final wish before passing away was to thank you in person. It was for this reason he sought you out. I could not help but sink into my memories. 90 years ago, Dongyun City, a place that was once prosperous, had been reduced to ruins. Its walls collapsed. The warmth and vibrancy of that city were gone. In their place were piles of rubble, the sound of weeping, and a suffocating haze of smoke and deathly qi. The streets and alleys were thick with the stench of blood and decaying corpses. The bodies were piled high as mountains. The entire city was shrouded in darkness, as if it were a living hell on earth. As the demonic sect razed the city, a young boy clutching a wooden sword led a younger girl sprinting madly through the streets. Brother, big brother, I can no longer run. The girl stumbled and fell to the ground. The boy hurried back, gripping the wooden sword tightly, and let out a loud shout. Little sister, run! A massive three-eyed monster rested one hand upon a nearby building, smiling down at the two siblings. Its arm, thicker than a tree trunk, swiped toward them. The boy trembled uncontrollably, staring straight ahead, his eyes filled with fear and despair. His body felt drained of all strength, and he could hear his own heartbeat in his ears as if it were announcing his impending death. In the next instant, the boy let out a desperate cry, pouring every ounce of his life's courage into that scream. The wooden sword, which posed no threat to the three-eyed monster, swung from left to right. The grin on the monster's face only widened, whether mocking the boy's helplessness or rejoicing at the feast to come. Suddenly, the body of the three-eyed monster was sliced in two by an invisible force from left to right. Its smile had not yet faded, freezing stiffly upon his face. The boy stood stunned as a figure appeared before him, wielding a 3-foot blade, the cold light of the steel shimmering as if it could sever all evil in the world. The boy stared at the scene in astonishment. The man in green robes turned his head. You possess courage, lad. Do you wish to learn the sword? That was the first time the boy had ever witnessed a cultivator in action. One man, one sword, had slaughtered every demonic beast in the city. Afterward, he traveled across mountains and rivers, from the snowy Kunlun peaks to the scorching deserts, from the vast grasslands to the churning seas. As his swordsmanship progressed, he encountered many masters along the way. However, no sword strike had ever left him as astonished or as unforgettable as that one. Li Xuanxiao could not recall the young man's name, for he had only taught the boy sword techniques for a single day before urgent matters forced his departure, and he never crossed paths with him again. Now, hearing Moju recount the tale, those distant memories finally resurfaced. So it turned out that young man's surname was Peng. Since Pengyan is his descendant, why would he claim to be his disciple? Is there a need to meet with him? Moju said, "Help me pass on a message. I have acknowledged his favor, but from now on he must no longer claim to be my disciple." Li Xuanxiao has no shortage of enemies. Although the demon sect's pope is dead, the remaining remnants of the demon sect still lurk in the shadows. That is precisely why, throughout the 30 years my cultivation was crippled, I never descended the mountain. I stretched my limbs, brushed the dust from my clothes, and rose from the mountainside. The Tianquan galaxy shone brilliantly above. I waved my hand and took my leave. Mozu stood in silence, watching my retreating figure, her mind filled with chaotic thoughts, yet she knew not how to speak. Her gaze was brimming with concern and anxiety, as if she longed to say something, yet could not find the right words. Under the moonlight, my silhouette appeared unfettered, my footsteps light and carefree. Mose knew that at this moment I was undoubtedly filled with joy. I could feel her gaze upon me, and though I glanced back, I did not falter in my stride. My eyes were filled with warmth, wanting to say to her, "Little girl, the time for our parting has finally come." Half a month later, inside a mountain cavern, I sat with my eyes tightly shut, my breathing steady, my body enveloped in dense spiritual energy. This spiritual energy converged from all directions, swirling around my body like countless rushing streams. My skin shimmered with a faint ethereal glow. The radiance seemed to resonate with the spiritual energy surrounding me. My pores gradually opened, acting like tiny suction cups. They drew the surrounding spiritual energy deep into my body. As time passed, my body grew increasingly luminous, the spiritual light intensifying like a fireball on the verge of eruption. Within me, the spiritual energy flowed ceaselessly through my meridians, converging toward my dantian. The dantian is the vessel for a cultivator's spiritual energy and one of the most vital acupuncture points in the human body. As the spiritual energy gathered, my dantian grew scorching hot, as if a ball of fire were burning within. After a long while, I opened my eyes. The demonic soul within me was growing stronger, and I now existed as one body with two souls. My original soul had been severely damaged and could not withstand the energy of cultivation, leaving me no choice but to borrow the power of the demonic soul. As my cultivation base gradually restored itself, the power of the demonic soul within, I furrowed my brow slightly, sensing the surge of that power, and a trace of anxiety involuntarily rose within my heart. Is this rapid growth of power a sign that I am on the verge of falling completely into the demonic path? Am I destined to become a demonic overlord? Upon reflection, if the 18 demonic caves of that year could not force me to succumb to the inner demon, then this is merely a demonic soul. I let out a lazy yawn. The campfire in the cave illuminated the two black-faced sun bears beside me. One large, one small, the elder like a small mountain, the younger like a mere pup. They stared at me with wide eyes, cautiously observing me as I sat within the cave. The wind howled and shrieked as it plunged down from the mountain peak, tearing through the dense forest and sweeping across the grasslands, carrying a sense of sorrow, like a lonely traveler wandering the mountains, recounting his story to any who would listen. I closed my eyes as if listening intently. The small sun bear raised its head to look at its father. The large sun bear took a deep breath and asked, "Great virtuous one, what brings you to my humble abode?" For these past few years, I have lived on a vegetarian diet. Let alone humans, I have not even consumed other spirits or monsters. If you do not believe me, you may look at the cornfield behind the mountain. I planted it myself. Do not worry, I am not here to cause you trouble. I merely intend to sleep here for the night. The large sun bear muttered softly, "There are plenty of places to sleep, yet he chooses my cave without even a word of notice. Truly discourteous." "What did you say?" The large sun bear hurriedly replied, "No, nothing at all. I simply feel that for the great virtuous Li to lower himself to stay in my home is a supreme blessing." I smiled and said, "Now then, Big Bear, you are the master of this Fuyu Ridge, yet you know nothing of how to host a guest. But you have already consumed 38 ears of corn, 17 water-boiled eggs, 89 dried sweet potatoes, and 3 gin of fruit. Was that not all merely to satisfy my hunger for the moment?" Li Xuanxiao tilted his head slightly. "Your son looks quite adorable. Those legs look rather succulent. Do they not look somewhat like a human's?" The large sun bear hurriedly clutched his son, looking at Li Xuanxiao in terror. "What are you planning to do?" "I am only joking," Li Xuanxiao said with a laugh. "Rest assured, I shall be gone by tomorrow morning. I have an appointment with someone. If I do not depart, I fear I shall not make it in time." "An appointment? What kind of appointment?" Li Xuanxiao gazed at the sky outside the cave. "Big Bear, have you ever heard of the Jiuguang meteor shower?" "I have not." Li Xuanxiao curled his lips slightly, as if recalling something pleasant. "The Jiaoguang meteor shower appears only once every century. I happen to know of a small town where the view is magnificent. 100 years ago, I made a pact with several people that I would return to watch the Jiaoguang meteor shower with them again." The great bear beast gaped in disbelief, asking if anyone would truly remember a promise made 100 years prior. "They would." Li Xuanxiao paused, emphasizing that they would all remember. The great bear beast asked with lingering skepticism, "Great Saint Li, I have heard it said that since that great war, you suffered grievous injuries and your cultivation has been crippled. Li Xuanxiao raised an eyebrow. Would you like to test that claim? No, absolutely not. The great bear beast shook its head frantically. In its eyes, regardless of whether Li Xuanxiao's cultivation was crippled, even if he were nothing more than a dried-up skeleton, he would still be enough to frighten it to death. Why be afraid? I am no bandit, Li Xiao remarked. The following day, Li Xuanxiao gathered 3 caddies of corn, 4 caddies of dried sweet potatoes, 5 caddies of figs, and 2 caddies of eggs before departing from the fish subjugation ridge, turning back to wave farewell to the great bear beast. 10 Mile Spring Breeze Town is a small town nestled within the Jianan waters. Its scenery is enchanting, and its resources are abundant, and its people live simple, peaceful lives. In the center of the town lies an ancient well with water as clear as crystal. It is said that this well was dug by a general from a previous dynasty named Li Chunfeng. Thus the town was named 10 Mile Spring Breeze Town. Beside the bubbling stream, a young girl stood barefoot, clutching a sharpened wooden spear while staring intently at the water's surface. At that moment, a young man in white robes approached. He was a stranger, never seen in these parts before. The girl looked up, her clear dark eyes fixed upon the newcomer. Little one, may I ask you something? Are you acquainted with a man named Zhang Tianyu? The girl froze for a moment before nodding. Zhang Tianyu is my master. There was only one forge in 10 Mile Spring Breeze Town, run by a blacksmith named Zhang Tianyu, whose form had long since withered. Li Xuanxiao remembered a young Zhang Tianyu who, clad in brilliant armor of his own forging, would charge into enemy ranks like an unstoppable titan of war. It was a pity that his origin essence had been too severely damaged. Not only had his cultivation regressed, but his longevity was beyond recovery. Now his back was hunched and his vision clouded. He could no longer swing his hammer to forge exquisite weapons as he had in his youth. His hair had turned completely white, his face was gaunt, and the marks of time were etched deeply into his features. Li Xuanxiao carefully observed Zhang Tianyu from head to toe. I truly thought I would have to visit your grave to pay my respects. Zhang Tianyu leaned on his cane, coughing violently, yet a smile spread across his wrinkled face. Boy, you haven't died yet, so how could I possibly depart first? I was actually planning to burn incense for you. Li Xuanxiao remarked. It seems you are quite certain that you will pass before I do. The young girl stood at the door, gazing at Li Xuanxiao with suspicion. Who is this person? A Qi, go and fetch some food. The girl named a Qi gave a soft nod of agreement. Have those 2 unpunctual fools arrived yet? Li Xuanxiao asked. Zhang Tianyu sat on his rocking chair, squinting his eyes as he replied. They were not the ones who were punctual. You are the one who arrived at the right moment. Forget it, those 2 have been here for a long time. They have been eating and drinking at my expense, refusing to leave, and they have even devoured my entire pension. Then where are they now? One has gone to the edge of the village to play chess, and the other has gone to help someone slaughter a pig. Truly simple lives. Li Xuanxiao took a sip of tea that lacked any flavor, feeling the warmth of the afternoon sun spreading over him, looking out at the green mountains and the fishing boats in the distance, gazing at the willow branches as his thoughts drifted back to the distant past. The senior disciple of Tongshan Peak of the Qingyun sect, the leader of the sword path, Li Xuanxiao, whose divine weapons were all forged by the hands of Zhang Tianyu, the general of the Beiluo Seven Gates, Zhang Li, and the crown prince of the Yan Empire, who possessed the intellect to command the realm, Yanqing. But when they first set out upon the path, they possessed no such grand titles. Yanqing was a neglected prince, sent to an enemy state as a hostage. On his journey back, he encountered Zhang Li, who had been bitten by a poisonous snake while searching for alchemy herbs. At that moment, Yanqing believed he had encountered a fated romance. Little did he know that Zhang Li mistook him for a lecherous scoundrel, knocked him unconscious, and they unintentionally crossed paths with Zhang Tiru, who had descended from the mountains in search of a master. Shortly after, the 3 of them accidentally disrupted the formation array set up by Li Xuanxiao. In those years, an 18-year-old Li Xuanxiao had been ordered by his master to descend the mountain for his first mission. A 1,000-year-old demonic beast had slaughtered over a dozen disciples of the Qingyun sect, along with 2 elders of the Sword Pavilion. 18-year-old Li Xuanxiao, armed with only his sword, engaged the creature in battle for 10 days and 10 nights. Just as he was on the verge of sealing the beast, the sudden appearance of those 3 individuals ruined the formation. Thanks to that, the demonic beast managed to escape. In the end, the 4 of them pursued it for 6,000 miles, eventually joining forces to seal the monster away. Through this ordeal, the 4 became acquainted. They ventured into sword formations together, entered underground lairs, parted ways, and eventually met once more. The reigning emperor who once destroyed the demonic manor. It has been a long time since we last met. Li Xuanxiao's thoughts were pulled back to the present. He looked toward the door at an old man whose hair had completely withered away. Leaning on a cane with a kind, gentle expression, he bore none of the imposing authority one would expect of an emperor. Beside him stood a woman in white robes, elegant and noble, with refined features that exuded an air of grace from between her brows. Li Xuanxiao curled his lips into a smile. Indeed, it has been a long time. Life is full of partings, just as mountains and rivers eventually converge. Is the meteor shower truly tonight? Zhang Tiru asked Yanqing, who replied, I have consulted the grand astrologer of the heavenly observatory 3 times. There is no mistake. Zhang Tianyu looked at the bald-headed Yanqing, recalling the prince of years past, once possessed of sword-like brows, bright eyes, and a face like polished jade, now aged into a bald old man. Are you certain that old astrologer of yours, who is even older than you, made an accurate calculation? Of course. That old astrologer has served my Yan family for 3 generations. Tell me, how much further is this path? Zhang Li pondered for a moment. Back then, it took us half a month to walk this. Has it really been that long? Yan Qing asked in surprise, why do I feel so exhausted already? That is simply because you, old man, have grown too frail. Li Xuanxiao shrugged. Yan Qing slammed his cane hard against the ground and said indignantly, you know I am an old man, yet you offer no help to carry me. Who would want to carry you? Li Xuanxiao clasped his hands behind his head and said leisurely, Tianyu, why don't you carry our esteemed prince? Zhang Tianyu replied with annoyance, if I were to carry him, I fear I would be in my grave long before we arrive. Zhang Li was stunned. She remembered that these same words had been spoken many years ago. How many years had it been? She could no longer recall. At the time, such exchanges were simply everyday occurrences. If you refuse to carry me, then it seems I have no choice but to let Lady Zhang carry me instead. Yan Qing spoke. Li Xuanxiao replied with a laugh, you old man, you already have a house full of descendants, yet you still go about provoking others. You should go home and look in a mirror. What do you know? For a man, one's inner substance is what matters most. The 4 of them walked along, laughing and talking, eventually stopping on a mountainside to sleep in a dilapidated temple. They spoke of the past, the present, and the future. Occasionally, they would encounter carriage drivers traveling along the road. The camel bells chimed with a crisp, rhythmic sound. A merchant caravan passed by their side. A postal messenger on horseback galloped past them. The road beneath their feet felt infinitely long yet paradoxically short. It was so short that they barely had time to reminisce about the days of old. Finally, half a month later, they arrived at the lakeshore. In the cycle of life, where there is departure, there is reunion. Such meetings are a joy. Under the hazy moonlight, a faint mist began to rise. In the distance, mountains loomed in silhouette, and the lake mirrored the silver moon. A shooting star streaked across the sky, appearing exceptionally dazzling under the moonlight. It resembled a ribbon of silver, piercing through the dark night sky. Leaving behind a glowing arc, the meteor vanished. Zhang Li pointed toward the horizon, and the 4 of them looked up in unison. Li Xuanxiao remarked, this shooting star seems to have arrived from the distant past. With a flagon of murky wine to celebrate their meeting, all the tales of the past and present are dissolved into laughter. Zhang Li turned her gaze toward Li Xuanxiao, Yan Qing, and Zhang Tinyu. The icy beauty offered a gentle smile and said, thank you, all of you. Though he did not know exactly what she was thanking them for, Li Xuanxiao replied, it is nothing. Though a hug would have been better. Yan Qing spoke. Zhang Tianyu stared at the shooting star without blinking. How beautiful. It feels as though everything happened only yesterday. Yan Qing said, we are still very young. Pondering their own private thoughts, they drank the strongest wine while gazing at the most magnificent starlit sky. The distant starry sky blurred the passage of youth, obscured the days of their prime, and concealed the marks of their younger years, while illuminating the innocence of the past. One morning, without a single word of farewell, Zhang Li departed. At dawn, Yan Qing realized the absence of Zhang Li's ceaseless chatter. He lamented that the other party had never once offered a proper goodbye. It was the same during their previous parting and the time before that. This time, however, it seemed likely to be their final encounter. He truly is a stubborn old soul. Li Xuanxiao suddenly mused that Yan Qing himself was no different from such an old soul. Yan Qing waited until dusk to board the carriage and leave the town, saying, remember to pour some wine before my grave. Li Xuanxiao, do not forget to bring Zhang Li to visit me when the time comes. If you arrive alone, then there is no need to come at all. And another thing, do not forget to have Zhang Li dress well for the occasion. The voice of Yan Qing faded into the distance alongside the rattling of the carriage. Li Xuanxiao waved his hand in response, reminding him, remember to leave plenty of funeral offerings. It will make it easier for me to plunder them. Zhang Tianyu hunched his back and turned around, asking, when do you intend to leave? Where will you go tomorrow? I am heading to Ming Mountain to visit Zhang He. It is time to call upon an old friend. Zhang Tianyu spoke with blunt honesty. Since you have nothing else to attend to, you must do me a favor. A key, her small arms clutching a bundle of firewood, hurried toward the blacksmith shop from the other side of town. Passers-by greeted her and A Key nodded in acknowledgement. She had grown accustomed to running errands. Carrying such a heavy load of firewood, she did not even break a sweat. The clear, resonant sound of chanting echoed in her ears, and A Key casted an expression of deep admiration toward the only schoolhouse in town. She ran back to the blacksmith shop, first stacking the firewood in the kitchen before taking out the fish caught the previous day. We shall have fish stew today. You have worked hard, child. Zhang Tianyu sat on his rocking chair, his eyes gently closed. Li Xuanxiao asked, you wish for me to take this girl to Xiling? I am too old, I can no longer make such a journey. In any case, you are idle with nothing to do. Why must she be sent to Xiling? Once I have passed, she will have no one left to lean upon here. She has kin in Xiling, it shall be considered as such. The Tianqi mansion of Longhua Mountain in Xiling is recruiting disciples, and her father was a servant of the Tianqi mansion. A servant is not a true disciple of Longhua Mountain. Longhua Mountain maintained. With such a vast number of disciples, the Longhua Mountain sect had to adapt. They recruited individuals who were not true disciples of Longhua Mountain to serve as low-ranking laborers. Their status was equivalent to that of constables within a government office. They were not considered official members of the sect. They existed merely to follow orders and perform manual tasks. For 4 generations, a cheese family had served as laborers for Longhua Mountain. Passed down from father to son, even the disciples of the Heavenly Master's mansion had to show them a degree of respect. However, Achi's father stirred up great trouble in his final days, leaving his fate uncertain, and before he perished, he entrusted his daughter to Zhang Tianyu. Now Achi, a disciple of the Heavenly Master's mansion, carries the heavy burden of the legacy her father left behind. According to the traditions, the Heavenly Master's mansion is duty bound except Achi. Li Xuanxiao drank his tea, finding it tasteless, and remarked, "This is excessive. I am the leader of the Jiandao, yet you ask me to serve as a bodyguard? Leader of what? Don't make me laugh." Zhang Tianyu replied with indifference. "You have already been cast out of your home. I am merely giving you an opportunity to earn your keep. How much money do you have? Between the money for my coffin and the long years of friendship we share, which would you choose as your compensation?" Zhang Tianyu responded, the former without question. Li Xuanxiao did not hesitate, and Zhang Tianyu smirked. "You are truly heartless." Li Xuanxiao chuckled. "Jokes aside, it has been many years since we last met. Helping you with a request is no difficult task. Naturally, I have no reason to refuse. When do we depart? Tomorrow. So soon? Do not wait any longer lest she witness your departure." Zhang Tianyu closed his eyes. "She has already lost enough loved ones. Do not let her see me pass away with her own eyes. That would be far too cruel. You remain, as you have always been, constantly putting others before yourself." Zhang Tianyu was a young man who emerged from the mountains with nothing to his name. The first time Li Xuanxiao met him, he was carrying a colossal bundle of belongings. His exposed teeth revealed signs of childhood malnutrition. His simple clothes were covered in dust, yet he refused to believe in the existence of true malice, possessing a generous spirit devoid of calculation. He always placed the needs of others above his own. At that time, Li Xuanxiao always felt this man was innocent and naive, believing it would be better for him once he experienced the cruelty of the world. Yet, despite weathering countless storms, the young man remained unchanged. Achi packed her small school bag, constantly turning back to look at Zhang Tianyu, who sat on a wooden chair pretending to be old. Achi did not want to leave, she wanted to stay with Tianyu. She suddenly spoke, saying that Xiling was a great city where she would meet many new friends and experience many joyful things. But Xiling did not have Tianyu. Achi lowered her head, and Tianyu replied that he would wait here for Achi. Achi remained silent for a moment before whispering, "Tianyu is lying." That day, Achi secretly unpacked the satchel she had cherished for many years, but she was still taken by the hand by Li Xuanxiao and pulled away, dragged out of the house. This journey spanned 700-800 miles through whistling winds and scorching sun. Achi wanted to look back one last time to see Tianyu. Li Xuanxiao looked down at the young girl, noting that Achi had not yet said goodbye to him. In the dignified town of Shili Chunfeng, he was the only blacksmith. When a neighbor arrived that evening to collect the farming tools ordered 2 days prior, they discovered Zhang Tianyu's remains. The old man lay quietly on his bed, his expression gentle and serene. Having lived his life as a nameless warrior, he had once traversed treacherous paths to enter the earthly crypt and annihilate the demon sect, aiding Meng Chunqiu for half his life. In the end, he had chosen this place, a humble setting, as his final resting ground. Little He did not cry. She quietly helped Li Xuanxiao arrange the funeral rites for Tianyu. She put on her small satchel, which Tianyu had mended, and left the town with Li Xuanxiao. Li Xuanxiao walked a few paces, then suddenly turned back to see the young girl standing at the entrance of the village, looking up. Her eyes were brimming with tears, which fell incessantly. "If I cry here, Tianyu will never know." Li Xuanxiao reached out to pat her head, saying, "Do not cry, do not cry." The distant mountain range soared into the clouds, resembling ancient beasts standing silently upon the earth, witnessing the passage of time. Under the sunlight, the contours of the mountains became even more distinct. Li Xiao used a bamboo staff to tap at the bushes ahead, causing layers of mist to rise in the surroundings. These wisps of mist resembled ribbons of silk winding around the mountainside, evoking the feeling of being in a celestial realm. "Are you a swordsman?" the young girl Achi asked. "If so, where is your sword?" Li Xuanxiao replied. "As I do not possess a sword at the moment, and your master was a blacksmith, surely you must know how to forge one? Forge a sword for me." Mentioning Tianyu, Achi bowed his head in slight disappointment. "I know how to forge a sword, but there are no tools here. Use bamboo to carve one for me." Li Xuanxiao shook the bamboo stalk in his hand. "Can a bamboo sword even be considered a sword?" "Naturally." Li Xuanxiao spoke indifferently. "I heard from Tianyu that you are very strong. I was very strong in the past. And what about now?" "I am still very strong," Li Xuanxiao said with confidence. Achi blinked, not asking any further. The previously tranquil surroundings were suddenly pierced by a miserable scream. A heavy corpse collapsed. The pool of blood began to mingle with the clear stream. A battered horse-drawn carriage came to a halt. The rushing water slowly pushed the corpse away. This is an official government carriage. Usually, bandits dare not touch officials as they do not know what rank of official is inside, and the government will invariably pursue them. It is simply their misfortune. Having encountered a group that fears neither death nor the rules, the bandit leader looked at the shining silver ingots, a sinister smile curling his lips. Robbing an official once is far more profitable than robbing the destitute 100 times. A man in green robes led a young girl of about 6 or 7. They were not government soldiers, and they did not even carry any defensive weapon. "You deserve your bad luck." The bandit released his bowstring and the arrow hissed through the air. Li Xuanxiao tilted his head slightly, narrowly dodging the projectile. Achi looked up at Li Xuanxiao. Li Xuanxiao cast the bamboo stalk in his hand outward. The bandit leader could not react in time. He was knocked off his horse and pinned to the ground, clearly beyond saving. Li Xuanxiao's figure flashed and the bamboo stalk returned to his hand. 7 or 8 bandits froze, and in the next heartbeat they fell to the ground in unison, as easily as picking up a stone from the earth. Li Xuanxiao shook the bamboo in his hand and turned to Qi, saying, "I still must trouble you to carve this into the shape of a sword." As he spoke, Li Xuanxiao paced through the crowd, checking to see. Using a bamboo rod to overturn a corpse, he suddenly discovered a young boy hiding among the bodies. The boy's eyes were tightly shut, his face smeared with blood. He held his breath, clearly feigning death. Li Xuanxiao used the bamboo rod to poke the boy's pressure points. After a few jabs, the boy could no longer hold his composure. "Great Master, please do not kill me. I saw nothing, and I know nothing. The bandits are dead. What is your name?" Li Xuanxiao asked. The boy stood trembling in place, looking at Li Xuanxiao and then at the ferocious bandits lying defeated on the ground. "My name is Lin Delin. I came from my village with my childhood friend to seek discipleship at the Xiling Celestial Master Pavilion." Li Xuanxiao frowned slightly, asking, "And what about that one?" He pointed toward the only other child among the corpses. That child was dressed in fine brocade. One look was enough to tell he was from a wealthy family. Lin Daolin nodded and replied, "Yes, those traveling with us were his second uncle. He had just resigned from his official post and was returning to his hometown in the county. We intended to travel together for a while, but none of us expected to encounter bandits here." Lin Daolin's voice trembled, yet his logic remained remarkably clear. Despite being so young, he had witnessed such a cruel massacre by the bandits, yet he did not collapse into hysterics or wailing. Half an hour later, Li Xuanxiao helped Lin Daolin bury the unfortunate souls who had perished there. Lin Daolin used a piece of wood to carve a grave marker for his friend. "You promised that once you were wealthy, you would find me 10 wives. Now look at you. You must bless me to be safe and sound in the afterlife. When I finally make a name for myself, I will burn you a grand manor. I will burn you plenty of riches, too." Li Xuanxiao watched this boy with curiosity. He was clearly no older than Qi, yet he acted like a wizened old man. Beside them, Qi was using her small knife to carve a sword for Li Xuanxiao. Her handiwork was delicate, and her expression was one of absolute focus and seriousness. It seemed that Li Xuanxiao's display of power, having struck down 7 or 8 bandits in an instant, had left her somewhat shaken. "Make it a bit more beautiful." Li Xuanxiao stroked his chin, but Qi did not look up. "A bamboo sword, even if beautiful, lacks durability. It is fine as long as it is beautiful." Lin Daolin stood up and said, "Very well, let us be on our way." While burying the dead, he had already gathered all the precious items. Everything was now loaded onto the back of the small donkey. "When I left home, my mother gave me only 2 taels of silver and our family's small donkey. Yet now I possess such a vast fortune." Lin Daolin spoke with a carefree demeanor, seemingly having already forgotten the life-or-death crisis he had just endured. He showed no fear of strangers. Facing Li Xuanxiao and Qi, who were close to his own age, he spoke incessantly. "What is your name?" "Li Xuanxiao. And you?" Lin Daolin then turned his gaze toward the young girl. "Qi?" Lin Daolin cupped his hands, mimicking the mannerisms of an elder, and said, "We have a long journey ahead. I hope to receive much guidance from you both. As the ancients once said, meeting by chance is a matter of destiny." Li Xuanxiao smiled faintly, thinking, "With this young fellow around, it seems the journey will not be lonely." And so Li Xuanxiao led the 2 children and the donkey, setting off towards Xiling. As night fell, Li Xuanxiao lit a campfire for the 2 children and leaned against a tree trunk, preparing to rest. Lin Daolin approached him and asked, "Big brother Li, are you very powerful?" Lin Daolin thought to himself, "A person who can handle so many mountain bandits single-handedly must certainly be someone extraordinary, must he not? Could you teach me a couple of moves for self-defense?" Li Xuanxiao shook his head. "You are not ready to learn them yet. Are you looking down on me? Since I was small, I have been able to master anything I studied. Otherwise, I would never have been chosen by the Celestial Master's mansion of Longhu Mountain. Teach me 2 moves so that in the future others will not be able to bully me." Lin Daolin pointed toward the donkey grazing nearby and offered, "If I give you this donkey, will you teach me?" Li Xuanxiao kept his eyes closed, paying no heed to the young boy. If you won't teach me, then so be it. I don't care to learn anymore." Lin Daolin muttered a few words to himself, then cast the matter from his mind and went to find Qi. Qi had already finished carving a bamboo sword for Li Xuanxiao. Li Xuanxiao gripped the hilt, swinging it a few times with a hint of excitement. How many years had it been since he last held a sword? The first sword he ever held was the world-renowned Qingyun sword. Yet after more than 10 years, the sword he now held was but a piece of bamboo. Seeing the bamboo sword, Lin Daolin pestered Qi to make one for him as well. Qi was initially unwilling, but unable to withstand Lin Daolin's constant pestering, she eventually fashioned one for him. Lin Daolin was quite stubborn, refusing to let go of the bamboo sword. "Big brother Li, do you actually know how to use a sword?" "I do." "Then teach me 2 moves and I will give you the donkey." Li Xuanxiao shook his head. "Teaching you 2 moves in exchange for a donkey? That would be far too profitable for a little brat like you." Lin Daolin looked displeased. "I have raised this donkey since it was small. Not only can it turn a millstone, but it also hauls cargo. It is remarkably useful." Li Xuanhao held his bamboo sword, speaking with great self-importance. "Back in those days, countless people clamored to learn the sword from me, and the gifts they offered were far more valuable than this donkey of yours." Lin Daolin looked up at the sky. "Big brother Li, you are truly formidable. But why do I see so many cattle flying across the heavens? For you alone to brag enough to fill the sky with cattle, you are indeed extraordinary." What could a brat like you possibly understand? At that moment, a figure soared through the air on a flying sword, maintaining a rather low altitude. It was clearly visible that the young sword cultivator was utterly inebriated, his black robes billowing in the wind with a blade shimmering with cold light beneath his feet. It hummed with a piercing sound as if declaring its sharpness to the entire world. The precious sword streaked across the night sky like a bolt of lightning, leaving a brilliant trail in its wake. Lin Dowlin's jaw dropped, his eyes fixed intently upon the young sword cultivator soaring above, his gaze filled with yearning as an indescribable excitement swelled within his heart. He imagined himself just like that young master, stepping upon a flying blade and roaming freely between heaven and earth. Lin Dowlin withdrew his gaze and pointed at the figure, asking Li Xuanxiao, "So could you defeat him? Is your swordsmanship as formidable as his?" Li Xuanxiao glanced up briefly before closing his eyes again, stating indifferently, "Too weak." Lin Dowlin pouted, "Read more books in the future. Stop thinking about fighting others all day long. You must cultivate your character." "Cultivate virtue first," Li Xuanxiao said flatly, but at the ages of Lin Dalen and T, such words would certainly fall on deaf ears. "Senior brother, has Li Xuanxiao truly recovered his cultivation? I do not know." As night descended, the last rays of sunlight were swallowed by the encroaching shadows, leaving the earth submerged in a silent, nocturnal darkness. A man and a woman sat there. The man was named Jingli, and the woman Zhongyan, were senior brother and junior sister. Their master was Xuanyuan, a man renowned as peerless for 800 years, the greatest master of the eagle technique under the heavens. Throughout his life, Xuanyuan had taken only 2 disciples, Jingli and Zhongyan. Their sect was small, yet it held great renown. They had been tasked by others to keep watch over Li Xuanxiao. Zhongyan said languidly, "Senior brother, is Li Xuanxiao as powerful now as he was before?" Jingli hesitated for a moment. "He shouldn't be. Even though he has recovered from his grave illness, he has squandered over 20 years, after all. Recovery will require time." Zhongyan seemed lost in thought. "Master and he share a decent friendship." Jingli suddenly stood up and began to walk. Zhongyan said, "Senior brother Li Xuanxiao is traveling very slowly with 2 children. There is no need to follow him so closely. No one knows what Li Xuanxiao might do in the next second. It would be unfavorable to lose his trail when we have been entrusted with this task. Senior brother, what are our chances of victory if we face him in combat?" Zhongyan asked abruptly. Jingli furrowed his brows, and just as he was about to speak, a light breeze swept through the forest, the rustling leaves bringing with them crisp, chilly air. Both Zhongyan and Jingli froze in place simultaneously. A figure suddenly appeared behind them, with 2 hands resting firmly upon their shoulders. Neither Zhongyan nor Jingli dared to move, they only exchanged a glance. Both could feel the nerves of the other stretched tight as a bowstring. It was as if an bone-chilling power had instantly invaded their bodies, seizing control of their nervous systems. An invisible chain shackled their limbs, rendering them completely immobilized. They were each struggling to maintain their composure, desperate not to let fear show upon their faces. "I remember your surname is Jing," Li Xuanxiao said as Jingli's Adam's apple bump. The Jing from the word history. "Who sent you here?" Li Xuanxiao added, "Speak the truth. I suspect it was the second elder of the law enforcement hall, Qing Yun." The 2 remained silent, but Li Xuanxiao, confident in his deduction, patted their shoulders. "I do not care for being followed. In respect of the friendship I once held with your master, I will overlook this. However, there shall not be a next time." The wind, which had been deathly still, began to blow once more, and time within the surrounding space resumed its flow. The backs of Zhongyan and Jingli were already soaked with cold sweat. Without them noticing when he had departed, the figure behind them had vanished, leaving not even a trace of his presence, as if nothing had occurred at all. As the breeze stirred, the rustling of the leaves and the chirping of cicadas in the thicket once again sounded tranquil and warm. Having survived the ordeal, Jingli's chest heaved slightly. "Where were we in our conversation?" Zhongyan seemed unable to regain his senses. After a long moment, he replied, "The chances of us joining forces to deal with Li Xuanxiao. We now have our answer." The sound of a flying sword tearing through the air rang out from above. Jingli started, reacting instinctively as he feared Li Xuanxiao had returned. He worried the man had changed his mind and decided not to spare them. But very quickly he regained his composure. That was not Li Xuanxiao, but a young, soft-spoken sword cultivator. That young sword cultivator was shouting something, even going so far as to undo his trousers to urinate. 2 black lines appeared on Jingli's forehead. He reached out, and with a single slap, the matter was settled. Immediately after, that young cultivator was pulled down by an invisible hand, crashing hard into the ground, falling unconscious. Qi and Lin Dalen had already fallen into a deep sleep. Li Xuanxiao rubbed his forehead with effort and exhaled softly. It seemed he had temporarily intimidated them. The cultivation levels of Jingli and Zhongyan were far from ordinary, and their innate talent was exceptional. Otherwise, the Xuanyuan clan would not have recruited them. If those 2 were to join forces, he feared that even with his current strength, he would be hard-pressed to overcome them. Li Xuanxiao brushed off his sleeves. After this incident, those who doubted him would certainly not dare to act rashly. Li Xuanxiao sat atop his donkey, flipping through a copy of the Xiling records. This was a rather vague map, discovered in the baggage of the unfortunate official who had been killed by bandits earlier. It merely depicted the general shape of the territory, marking the locations of the important provinces and prefectures of Xiling. Xiling's Longhu Mountain was clearly marked on the map. Maps in this era were generally based on the orientation of mountains and rivers. For instance, in local county gazetteers or topographical charts, First, the county seat is drawn in the center, followed by the surrounding mountains and rivers in their relative positions. Finally, villages and towns are filled into their corresponding locations amidst the mountains and rivers. Once that is complete, a county map is finished, and the process for an entire nation is much the same. Li Xuanxiao recalled that it had been a very long time since he last visited Longhu Mountain. Back then, he had traveled with others, but now he must set out on his own 2 feet to find it. It would not be an easy journey. The donkey beneath him let out a bray. Li Xuanxiao looked down at it. In the end, Li Xuanxiao had traded his sword technique. In exchange for this donkey from Lin Daolin, let us rest here for a while. Qi was the first to set down her satchel. Having previously followed Tainu to forge iron, she possessed a resilient body from a young age. Carrying firewood up and down the mountain daily, she never felt fatigue. Very quickly, Qi started a fire and told Lin Daolin to fetch some clean water from the nearby stream. After finishing a piece of flatbread, Lin Daolin approached Li Xuanxiao again, asking him to teach him sword techniques. Li Xuanxiao waved his hand. I will teach you later, I will teach you later, I am a man of my word. Lin Daolin tugged on Li Xuanxiao's sleeve. Teach me now, or you will forget later. He was truly still just a child. Does Qi wish to learn as well? Li Xuanxiao asked. Qi raised her head. Is it truly possible for me to learn as well? It is possible. Qi is not lying. Even without deception, it can be learned. Li Xuanxiao spoke calmly. Qi pondered for a moment. Very well then, Qi shall cook for you. And so Li Xuanxiao taught the 2 children a single sword technique. Both practiced with utmost seriousness, proving to be quick learners. By the second day, they asked Li Xuanxiao to teach them the second movement. Li Xuanxiao, with a blade of grass between his teeth, lay upon the back of the fire beast, gazing at the azure sky and replied, continue practicing. Thus, the 2 children utilized every spare moment to refine their swordsmanship. 5 days later, they returned to Li Xuanxiao, requesting to be taught the second movement. Li Xuanxiao rolled a pastry, stating sternly, haste brings no success, continue your training. Li Xuanxiao assumed an air of profound, unfathomable wisdom. Qi and Lin Daolin believed him implicitly. They strove to contemplate the technique, which in truth was not overly complex. After practicing repeatedly, another month passed before they returned to Li Xuanxiao to learn the second movement. Li Xuanxiao immediately consumed the candied hawthorn that Lin Daolin had purchased, remarking, your standard is still far too low, continue practicing. This time, to say nothing of Lin Daolin, even Qi found her patience wearing thin. Is he perhaps deceiving us? Lin Daolin asked. Qi nodded. That swindler. The next moment, Lin Daolin lunged forward. Return my candied hawthorn. Do not snatch it, do not snatch it. Let me finish one more bite. That day, Li Xuanxiao led the 2 children and the fire beast through a city. Weish City was originally a vital transportation hub, typically bustling with residents, merchants, and a constant flow of carriages. However, since the beginning of this spring, ferocious beasts had begun to wreak havoc. The human race rose to power during the ancient era, but before that ascent throughout the long and desolate Dark Ages, humanity was struggling in agony. They lived in the wild, constantly facing trials of life and death. The indifference and cruelty of nature rendered their lives fragile and fleeting until the first human cultivator appeared. However, to this day, only mankind and demonic beasts coexist. Savage beasts are a distinct branch, separate from demonic beasts. Savage beasts are more ferocious, ruthless, and devoid of intelligence. Slaughter is their only instinct. They assault fortifications, devour humans, and even tear their own kind to pieces. Around Weishui City, savage beasts were once scarce. Recently, however, a massive migration of savage beasts from the north has caused chaos for some time. The city lord of Weishui was forced to mobilize experts to suppress the unrest. Many sect disciples arrived here to battle these savage beasts, honing their combat prowess, while also earning handsome rewards. Among them were disciples from the Qingyun sect. Li Xuanxiao found an inn, checked in, and headed straight for his bed. He slept for a full day and night. Upon waking, he enjoyed a hearty meal downstairs before leaning back in his chair, fully satisfied. Rubbing his belly, he closed his eyes as the sun climbed high into the sky. I continue to slumber. If I am not an immortal, then who is? All of you get lost. And you there, what are you staring at? Inside the inn, a drunkard was causing a scene, his eyes bloodshot. His body trembled incessantly, and as he clutched a wine jar, he stumbled about, hurling insults indiscriminately. The innkeeper stood behind the counter, looking at the drunkard with helplessness. He attempted to persuade the man to calm down, but his words had no effect. The drunkard grew increasingly aggressive, beginning to overturn the tables. Lin Daolin watched the intoxicated troublemaker, recalling the sword technique that Li Xuanxiao had taught him. He felt confident that he had mastered the technique to perfection. Now was the moment to test the true might of this sword art. Ling Daoling drew his bamboo sword, shouting aloud like the chivalrous heroes in the storyteller's tales. The sword flashed, but before the bamboo blade could strike the burly man, it was snatched away and snapped in two. Where did this stinking brat come from? Get lost. With that, he immediately hoisted Ling Daoling up and delivered a slap to his backside. It did not hurt, yet Ling Daoling was filled with both shame and rage. A key witnessed the scene. Though he usually harbored some dislike for Ling Daoling, he felt no joy in this moment. Hurriedly adjusting its sword technique, the child thrust the blade toward the burly man's leg. The burly man grabbed the bamboo sword from the child's hand, snatched it away and tossed it aside as if thoroughly irritated by these two little ones. With eyes bulging in anger, he took a menacing step forward. Qi was, after all, merely a 7-year-old girl. The opponent's massive frame loomed over her like a small mountain, leaving her trembling with uncontrollable fear. Just as the burly man prepared to act, the young man accompanying the two children slowly turned his head. The burly man's gaze fell upon him. He appeared to be a young man devoid of any imposing aura, yet his eyes were unnervingly calm, clear and bright like spring water, without a single ripple. The burly man could not help but clench his fists. His knuckles turned deathly white from the sheer force of his grip. Muttering a curse to himself, he turned and stalked out of the inn. The onlookers watched his retreating figure in astonishment. Why had he suddenly left? Moments ago, their hearts had been in their throats. No one expected the situation to shift so abruptly. The young man had clearly done nothing at all. Li Xuanxiao withdrew his gaze and continued to nibble on his melon seeds. It was as if nothing had happened, and he paid no mind to Qi and Ling Doling, who were both trembling. Ling Doling cursed at the burly man's retreating back, then jumped onto a chair. He slammed his hands onto the table in front of Li Xuanxiao with a loud thud. "What kind of rubbish sword technique did you teach us?" Li Xuanxiao replied indifferently. That man was no commoner. He was a martial artist who breaks techniques with a single punch. With your current swordsmanship, dealing with one or two ordinary people should pose no problem. You fraud, return my little donkey to me, along with the candied haws, the dried beef, and the fish-filled buns, Qi added softly. Ling Doling felt as though his heart had been poured out in vain. I turned my heart toward the moon, yet the moon shines upon the ditch. Ever since Li Xuanxiao taught her this sword technique, she had been diligently practicing, holding hope in her heart, even going so far as to starve herself just to ensure Li Xuanxiao was fed well. Li Xuanxiao had bragged to the heavens, claiming that once this sword technique reached a modicum of success, it could slay a man invisibly. To take a man's head from 1,000 miles away was as easy as turning over one's hand. As for that drunkard who claimed to break all techniques with a single fist, they had chosen the wrong person to challenge. Ling Daoling knew at once that he was deceiving people again. That man in the carriage was nothing more than an ordinary drunken scoundrel. Li Xuanxiao picked at his ear, acting as if he had heard nothing at all. Since then, Li Xuanxiao earned the reputation of a grand swindler, and people from all over responded to his call to cultivate. Many local officials began paying out of their own pockets, providing free accommodations for cultivators who came to deal with the vicious beasts. The original guests staying at the inns were all forced to leave. The innkeeper, seeing that Li Xuanxiao was alone and accompanied only by 2 children, assumed he was not there to hunt. Thus, he had no choice but to refund Li Xiao's room fee and told him to find lodging elsewhere. Just as he stepped out of the inn, he encountered disciples of the Qingyun sect, dressed in their characteristic attire. With the mission to exterminate the vicious beasts, the Qingyun sect, as the leader of the righteous path, naturally dispatched disciples to Tongshan Peak. Leading the team this time was the 3rd disciple, Ling He. Ling He possessed a quiet temperament, and his relationship with the senior brother Li Xuanxiao could not be called close, yet it was not overly cold either. Whether it was 30 years ago, when Li Xuanxiao was at the pinnacle of his life, or 30 years later, when he was at his lowest ebb, Ling He was momentarily stunned, not expecting to encounter Li Xuanxiao here. I have already said, do not call me senior brother anymore. Behind Ling He stood Ningying, Chen Ping, and a group of Tongshan Peak disciples who followed suit and bowed to their martial uncle. Li Xuanxiao could not be bothered to correct them, and waved his hand. Senior brother, we are also planning to exterminate the vicious beasts here. Shall we go together? Ningying frowned and took the initiative to speak. She had assumed that Li Xuanxiao was also aware of the vicious beast outbreak in Weishui City, and had come to Weishui City specifically to help. It seems that senior brother Li's temperament has not changed much, even with the recovery of his cultivation. He remains as righteous as ever, eager to perform acts of chivalry, and even when angered, he possesses a sharp tongue but a kind heart. Ningying could not help but recall the past. Senior brother, I'm sorry, I was wrong. I will make pastries for you. Don't be angry with me anymore. When she was young and made her senior brother angry, a simple act of endearment was enough to let the matter slide, and senior brother Li would never truly, but now Ningying had grown up. A 30-year rift cannot be mended in a single day. Seeing that Li Xuanxiao paid her no mind, Ning did not give up, continuing, senior brother, I have a relative in Weishui City. If you do not mind, you could stay at their residence. Just now, when the group from Qingyun sect reached the entrance, they heard the innkeeper turning people away. It was likely that Li Xuanxiao had no other place to stay in the city, so she thought it wouldn't be a bother. Li Xuanxiao did not look back, walking straight out the door. Ling Doling followed him for a few steps, then turned back to cast a curious glance at the group. After Li Xuanxiao departed, a look of disappointment appeared on Ningying's face. It seems senior brother Li has truly become utterly disillusioned with the Qingyun sect. Senior brother rendered great service to both the Qingyun sect and the world. Yet the Qingyun sect treated him in such a manner. Chen Ping was secretly unconvinced, thinking to himself that she certainly knew how to talk. It was not just that senior brother Li was disillusioned with the Qingyun sect, he was surely just as disappointed with Ningying. In those years, senior brother Li was her lifesaver, yet how did she repay him? However, the way Ningying spoke made it seem as though Li Xuanxiao only wished to cut ties because of his disappointment with the Qingyun sect, rather than with her. The inns in Weishui City were almost entirely occupied by cultivators arriving from all directions. For the moment, there were no vacant rooms to be found. In the end, a dilapidated little temple in the city took in Li Xuanxiao and his 2 companions. The small temple was home to only an elderly monk, and the structure itself was incredibly weathered. Who were those people? Why did they all call you senior brother? Ling Daoling asked curiously while eating noodles. Li Xuanxiao feigned a look of heartache. Only you two little imps would look down upon me. Go out and inquire about the reputation of this Li Xuanxiao. You, fatty, you're still gasping for air. Achi nodded in silence, seemingly in full agreement with Ling Daoling's assessment. Ling Daoling continued, Brother Li, is it because we exposed you and you felt embarrassed, so you purposely hired those people to stage a play for us, just so we would mistake you for someone truly powerful? Sichuan shot his head away, choosing not to dignify the two little ones who were busy scarfing down their noodles with a response. Should I bother bickering with these brats? When we head out, should I feed them to the wolves or toss them into the river? Hearing Ling Daoling's words, He blinked, meeting Li Xuanxiao's gaze with what appeared to be a flicker of pity. Achi, I believe you. Li Xuanxiao narrowed his eyes, sensing a tone that felt as though alms were being tossed to a beggar. Hurry and eat, we must set out tomorrow. The following morning, the old monk, learning they intended to leave the city, urged them to wait for the official departure schedule. Anyone wishing to exit the city gates now is required to register and wait until the designated time to be escorted by the city garrison, otherwise traveling alone risk a lethal encounter with roaming fierce beasts. Li Xuanxiao thanked him for the timely warning. Once they were outside the city, Ling Daoling adamantly refused to let Li Xuanxiao ride her small donkey. Aki, would you like to ride the donkey? Ling Daoling chased after the girl's retreating figure, refusing to mount the beast himself. Li Xuanxiao shook his head. Even at such a young age, the boy had already learned how to curry favor with girls. Qingyun Sect had sent 3 waves of cultivators this time, but the group from Tongshan Peak, led by Ling He, consisted of only 7 people. Though few in number, their combat prowess was formidable. They did not join the main force from Weishui City to purge the fierce beasts at the main peak. Instead, they fell a smaller group toward the far more treacherous Hengjian Peak. The group arranged a formation and quickly scaled the mountain. The winding mountain path twisted upward like a giant dragon coiling around the peak. The cliffs were sheer and towering, with ravines that plunged into bottomless abysses. Along the way, they encountered numerous fierce beasts. The disciples of Qingyun Sect cleared the path, charging forward without a moment's hesitation. The disciples from other sects, trailing behind, could not help but shake their heads with bitter smiles as they observed the carcasses of the beasts littering the path. Truly, Qingyun Sect is worthy of its reputation. Chen Ping's longsword left its sheath, and a giant python blocking the intersection was easily struck down by him. The movement was clean, decisive, and entirely without excess. Sensing the gazes of the other sect disciples behind him, Chen Ping became even more smug. Junior sister, what is the matter? Chen Ping noticed that Ning Ying seemed distracted. No, it is nothing. Since meeting Li Xuanxiao, Ning Ying had been plagued by an unsettled state of mind. Now that Li Xuanxiao had restored his cultivation, she could not stop dwelling on the past, beginning to regret the things she had done. No one is to let their guard down. The fierce beasts on Hengjian Peak are not to be underestimated. Yes, senior brother. Master, the speed of the Qingyun Sect disciples is truly impressive. A middle-aged man looked distraught, while an elderly man with white hair watched them with a complex expression in his eyes. Although he was significantly older than those Qingyun Sect disciples, his cultivation was far inferior. Such is the insurmountable gap in natural talent. Very well, continue onward. We shall mop up the lower-level fierce beasts. It may count as, before he could finish his sentence, had been pulverized into a mass of flesh before the very eyes of the disciples. Gore and shattered bones, scattered in all directions, splattering across the faces and eyes of the surrounding disciples. They stared blankly at the scene before them, completely unable to process what had transpired. Colossal, ferocious beasts descended from the heavens. It was not just the mountain peak, the entire Huangjian Peak was shrouded in thick dark clouds as beasts fell like a torrential downpour. After a momentary silence, the disciples began to scream and weep. Their voices were filled with terror and despair, as if the end of the world had arrived. Some disciples attempted to flee the scene, but in an instant they met the same fate as their master, reduced to a mangled heap of flesh. Little darling, did you hide 2 pastries earlier and refuse to share them with me? Li Xuanxiao, with a foxtail blade of grass dangling from his mouth, looked up at Ling Daoling, who was sitting on the back of the donkey. Ling Daoling turned his head away, ignoring him just as Achi had done. Li Xuanxiao did not give up. Achi remarked, didn't we already give you plenty earlier? I've already finished them. Li Xuanxiao argued with firm conviction. Achi replied, we each only had 2, you had 6 and ate them all, yet you still want our pastries. Li Xuanxiao rubbed his stomach, adults eat more, children eat less, eating a little less won't hurt. Qi was so annoyed that he turned his head away, leaving Li Xuanxiao to feel a hint of regret. Those pastries were delicious. He should have bought more. I'll sneak them from the others tonight while they're asleep. He whispered to himself, but the words were caught by Achi's keen ears, and he shot him a glare. Li Xuanxiao laughed heartily. I'm joking. I'm only joking. Along the path they traveled, there were no signs of any ferocious beasts. Instead, they encountered caravans and various cultivators heading from this direction toward Weishui City. The ground suddenly began to tremble violently. The entire world seemed on the verge of collapse. The people in the nearby merchant caravan looked around in panic, desperately trying to find the source of the tremor. The houses in the already abandoned village collapsed instantly, and the roads were torn asunder. Deep fissures appeared across the earth. Oh my feet. Ling Daoling was shaken so hard he fell off the little donkey. He looked toward the distant forest, intending to curse, but a look of terror suddenly appeared on his face. Massive ancient trees toppled over, and the defensive perimeters, nearly 80% of the cultivators guarding this location were submerged by the tide of beasts. No one understood why Huangjian Peak, a place once considered a desolate wasteland, had suddenly become infested with so many ferocious beasts. The thick fog shrouding the summit of Huangjian Peak finally dissipated, revealing a colossal six-winged golden rock spreading its wings. Its wings glimmered like brilliant golden flames under the sun, each feather radiating an overwhelming aura. With a single, gentle beat of its wings, it unleashed a gale that darkened the entire sky. The city lord of Weishui City stared at this scene in terror. He could not have fathomed that this beast had utilized some form of divine ability to conceal itself within the skies above Huangjian Peak without being detected. Even he himself had been blinded to its presence. Furthermore, it had been concealing these very beasts upon its own body. The six-winged golden rock accelerated with the speed of a lightning bolt, carving a magnificent arc across the heavens. Mid-air, the longsword held by Ling He, a disciple of the Tongshan Peak of Qingyun Sect, was knocked from his grasp as a blade pierced through his chest. A ghastly wound appeared, tearing deep into his abdomen. Had he not been wearing the precious armor of Tongshan Peak, he would have surely perished on the spot. The gaze of the six-winged golden rock seemed to mock the incompetence of the Weishui City lord. The main forces of Weishui City were currently besieging the main peak. By the time they turned back, it would already be too late. The savage herd of beasts would have razed the city to the ground long before then. Ningying clutched a broken sword, kneeling on one knee atop a summit that had been nearly leveled. Had it not been for Ling He just moments ago, all these disciples of Tongshan Peak would have likely lost their lives here. Chen Bing, who had ascended the mountain with such confidence, now lay fallen by her side, the bone of his forearm protruding through the skin. In the distance, the gargantuan form of the six-winged golden rock blotted out the sky. The strength of the Weishui City lord was not considered particularly formidable. He held his position in Weishui City primarily due to his family connections, and secondly, while Weishui City was a hub of commerce and prosperity, it was not a location of strategic geographic importance. The aristocratic families of Weishui City followed the proverb of the 3 clans and 5 sects, and every generation of city lords hailed from these very families, while officials sent by the imperial court held no real power. At this moment, the one defeated by the six-winged golden rock was Ling He of the Qingyun Sect, the strongest cultivator in the vicinity of Weishui City. The pressure exerted by the six-winged golden rock was suffocating, leaving even those cultivators of considerable strength trembling with an unprecedented sense of fear and oppression. Their hearts raced and their breath grew shallow, their bodies unable to suppress an involuntary tremor. Some were unable to even maintain their footing, collapsing to the ground, gazing helplessly up at the heavens, while the violent gale tore wantonly through everything in its path. Ling Dao, Ling, and He stood nearby, yet unlike the other cultivators, they were not so paralyzed by the overwhelming pressure that they could not stand. This wretched day has arrived, and yet I have not returned to my village in glory. Damned Erden, is this how you protect me from beyond the grave? The Erden he spoke of was a childhood friend who perished at the hands of bandits. Li Xuanxiao only heard the roar of the wind. He narrowed his eyes at the six-winged golden pung above, feeling a strange sense of familiarity. It was not until he spotted a massive scar on the creature's left wing that the realization finally struck him. In those years, the Northwest Territories were overrun by ferocious beasts commanded by 6 great beast kings. These beasts ravaged villages and slaughtered humanity. Even heavily fortified cities became targets of their relentless assaults. At that time, the sect master of Qingyun Sect had unfortunately passed away, and the Taoist Wangqing had not yet succeeded him, unable to leave the sect. Thus, they ordered the head disciple of the Yinjian Peak to lead 27 inner disciples of Tongshan Peak, along with 40 outer disciples and members from 2 other peaks, a total of over 100 Qingyun disciples, to the northwest to eradicate the source of the catastrophe once and for all. Who could have foreseen that the Qingyun Sect would suffer such heavy losses in that battle? The head disciple of Yinjian Peak fought with his life on the line to slay 2 of the Beast Kings, but in the end he was overwhelmed and perished in the fray. That battle was also Li Xuanxiao's debut in the cultivation world. At the time, his cultivation was advancing in leaps and bounds, yet outsiders dismissed him as nothing more than a flowery vase with no substance, as no one had ever seen him strike. Thus, rumors spread that he was merely a flashy display without true utility. Li Xuanxiao eventually used the corpses of the 4 remaining Beast Kings to silence all such rumors forever. One of the Beast Kings he had slaughtered was this very 6-winged golden peng. Back then, Li Xuanxiao had charged into their lair, intending to root out the evil entirely. Unexpectedly, at the critical moment, the 6-winged golden peng sacrificed its own life to protect its offspring. By nature, ferocious beasts possess low intelligence and are driven by cruel, murderous intent. Their emotional bonds are virtually non-existent, and they would often kill their own kin for no reason at all. The idea of one sacrificing its life to protect its young was unfathomable, leaving the young Li Xuanxiao momentarily stunned. Nevertheless, he did not hold back, swiftly unleashing a second strike. But at that precise moment, a female cultivator, usually known for her overly sentimental nature, suddenly intervened to stop him. Caught off guard, Li Xuanxiao's sword aura only managed to sever a portion of the young 6-winged golden peng's left wing. The young beast then took to the winds, escaping into the forest and vanishing without a trace. Later, the female cultivator justified her actions by claiming that all living things have spirits and one should not wantonly kill the innocent. Li Xuanxiao, being young and hot-tempered at the time, returned to the city to find that Tang Men had been killed, and the common people had suffered a tragic death. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. He then proceeded to beat that female cultivator soundly. Because of your fleeting moment of weakness, who knows how many more people will die by its maw tomorrow. Ferocious beasts do not care for your concepts of benevolence, righteousness, or moral virtue. Later, both Li Xuanxiao and that female cultivator were punished by the sect. Time eventually proved that Li Xuanxiao had been correct. After recovering from its wounds, the six-winged golden roc traveled everywhere, laying waste to villages and cities. Because its flight speed was peerless and its movements were shrouded in mystery, it remained elusive, allowing it to survive to this day. After years of wandering, Li Xuanxiao had not expected to cross paths with his old adversary once again. The image of Weishui City was reflected within the pupils of the six-winged golden roc, when suddenly its gaze dipped slightly, locking onto a single figure walking along the main street. That familiar aura was something it could never forget for the rest of its life. The six-winged golden roc went into a frenzy, its wings beat incessantly, emitting a cry of furious excitement. Its gaze became infinitely sharper. The flames erupting from its maw burned with an even greater intensity, and its massive body radiated an overwhelming aura, as if it intended to incinerate the entire world. The raging inferno illuminated the sky so brilliant that none dared look directly at it. In this moment, the six-winged golden roc seemed to have transformed into a feral beast. Although it lacked human intelligence, its raw strength and presence left everyone struck with awe. Beneath the terrified gazes of the many cultivators in Weishui City, the six-winged golden roc suddenly altered its trajectory. It was descending upon them. The sobbing voice of Ling Daoling echoed in Li Xuanxiao's ear. This was the largest bird it had ever seen in its life, even larger than the grandest mountain. It grabbed Li Xuanxiao's hand, crying and wailing. Didn't you brag about how powerful you were? Where is your sword technique? Use it quickly. Li Xuanxiao, ears ringing from the noise, remarked, Learn from Aki. Are you even a boy? Aki was standing frozen in place, his mouth slightly agape, before he turned his head, his eyes shining as he looked at Li Xuanxiao. Are we going to die? If we die, will I be able to see Niu again? You braggart, you owe me steamed buns and pastries. Ling Doling collapsed onto the ground. After all, he was merely a child not yet 10 years of age. Not to mention the child, even the experienced cultivators were frightened out of their wits. Li Xuanxiao turned around and said, Then give me the pastries. Ling Doling was stunned. Hurriedly, take it all. Li Xuanxiao held the bamboo sword at his waist with one hand, while with the other he accepted the pastry and stuffed it into his mouth, while Ling Duo watched him with eyes full of anticipation. Li Xuanxiao turned his head and tossed the remaining piece of pastry to her. Eat quickly. Even in death, you shall not become a ghost who died of hunger. Ling Duo's final shred of hope shattered at these words, You wretched creature. Li Xuanxiao drew his bamboo sword. It was not that he was intentionally stalling for time, but that he himself was uncertain if he could handle the outcome, so there would be only one strike. For in the end, there were only two possible outcomes, life or death. Watch closely, for there will be only this one strike. A peerless, surging momentum rose from the ground, crashing into Li Xuanxiao's internal organs like a tidal wave. His heart beat like a war drum, the blood within his body churning violently. As if it sought to shatter the very shackles of his meridians, his aura rising incessantly like a volcano on the verge of eruption, gathering power continuously ready to unleash at any moment. From the day Li Xuanxiao first held a sword, he had seemingly experienced everything from the lush spring gardens to the withered leaves of autumn. From the snow-capped clouds to the flight of birds over spring grass, sword techniques that others labored their entire lives to cultivate, and during thousands upon thousands of repetitions to master, he had grasped with effortless ease. At this moment, Li Xuanxiao closed his eyes. 30 years of a world within a dream, the colossal shadow of the six-winged golden roc enveloped him. He raised the bamboo sword, and the winds shifted, the grass swayed, and the stars moved. The sword technique mirrored the laws of nature, harmonious and beautiful, leaving one unable to do anything but be entranced. This strike was like a divine bird in flight, chasing the wind, carrying the might to split the heavens and establish the earth. The sword intent did not simply cleave the six-winged golden roc in two. It spread rapidly like a grinding mill, crushing it into a heap of minced flesh. This time Li Xuanxiao would not give his opponent any chance to escape. The miserable shriek of the six-winged golden roc echoed across the firmament, as if the entire world could hear its agony and despair. Its body was rapidly torn apart, leaving behind only blood and gore, its eyes filled with terror and pain. This soul-stirring spectacle would undoubtedly become an eternal memory in the hearts of everyone present. That vast sword intent, having shredded the six-winged golden roc, continued onward with its remaining power, soaring through the heavens and earth. On Hengjian Peak, Ning Ying had just administered a medicinal pill to the severely wounded Ling He when the distant sword intent arrived. At that moment, the disciples of the Qingyun sect on Hengjian Peak and the remaining cultivators who had ascended the mountain to slay the beast looked up instinctively, their expressions shifting in unison. Everyone felt only a flash of sword light, and a surge of sword intent was already pressing down upon their heads. Although it was still 3 or 4 zhang away, they could all sense that freezing chill, as if it would pierce their skulls at any given second. The sword aura paused for a moment, lost its momentum, and slowly dissipated. Ningying regained her senses only to hear Chen Bing beside her gasping for air. Why did this sword aura feel so familiar? Chen Bing blurted out his thoughts, and Ningying pondered deeply. It was their senior martial brother. Following this, the six-winged golden rock was cleaved in two. The multitude of ferocious beasts that had suddenly appeared were now all prostrate on the ground, not daring to move. Their bodies trembled violently, muscles rigid, desperate to flee yet unable to even stir. It was a terror that stemmed from the deepest reaches of their existence. A fear etched into their very marrow, impossible to erase. Even for the most mindless of wild beasts, their instincts were powerless against such overwhelming dread. Li Xuanxiao, having unleashed that strike, hovered motionless in the sky. He cast a glance toward Shangwang Sword Peak, ensuring no innocent lives had been harmed, before descending like a streak of white lightning. Ling Doling and Qi both stood with jaws dropped, unable to process the scene unfolding before their eyes. Li Xuanxiao resheathed the bamboo sword at his waist and tilted his head with an air of immense arrogance. And how was that for a real sword strike? You two children truly have no concept of the vastness of the world. Brother Li, you are simply too incredible. Ling Doling's attitude shifted a full 180 degrees. He clung to Li Xuanxiao's leg, gazing up at him with pure adoration. Li Xuanxiao smirked triumphantly. Do you finally realize my greatness now? Will you still call me a fraud? Ling Doling shook his head vigorously like a rattledrum, hurriedly offering the last piece of his pastry with both hands. Big brother, please, eat. Li Xuanxiao stood on no ceremony, accepted the offering, and tossed it into his mouth, muttering, "You know how to behave." He then turned his gaze toward Qi, who blinked repeatedly. Qi couldn't help but feel that Li Xuanxiao's expression was that of a petty man reveling in his own success, bearing no resemblance to a true peerless expert. After all, what kind of true expert would go to such lengths to swindle sweets from children? Shaking his head to cast away these strange thoughts, he pulled out 2 more pieces of pastry and handed them to Li Xuanxiao. A short while later, the city lord of Weishui arrived, flying through the air. Senior Li. The city lord's voice was laced with profound shock. He had assumed the one who eradicated the six-winged golden rock was some reclusive elder, never expecting it to be the renowned Li Xuanxiao. Yet he clearly remembered the rumors stating that Li Xuanxiao's foundation had been crippled and his cultivation completely lost. It appeared those were mere fabrications. You recognize me? That year, during the battle at Guoyi, this junior followed his elders to the front lines. Once from afar, I caught a glimpse of you, senior. Your heroic presence was unforgettable. In those days, the lord of Weishui City was merely a pawn lost in the crowd. Looking at Li Xuanxiao's back from a distance, his eyes were filled with nothing but admiration and reverence. In his heart he fantasized that one day he too could stand on such heights. But as the years passed, he gradually realized that in this lifetime he would never be able to compare to such a figure. This time, the fierce beasts attacked with overwhelming ferocity, yet thanks to your timely intervention, the people of Weishui City were spared. Senior, I humbly implore you to accompany me back to Weishui City, so that the citizens may express their deepest gratitude. The city lord spoke with heartfelt sincerity. Li Xuanxiao waved his hand dismissively. I appreciate your kind intentions, but I still have these 2 youngsters to escort on their journey. Next time I happen to pass through Weishui City, a simple meal will suffice as your gesture of thanks. By then, do not go pretending that you do not recognize me. Senior is surely joking, the city lord replied. The city lord of Weishui watched the departing figure of Li Xuanxiao as the sound of laughter echoed in his ears. Big brother, teach me. Big brother, from this day forward, I am willing to serve you as a beast of burden. Li Xuanxiao's hearty laughter rang out. He seemed to thoroughly enjoy the adoration of the young ones. With the death of the six-winged golden rock, the pressure on the outskirts of Weishui City had dissipated. While a few remnant beasts still lurked in the forests, they no longer posed a significant threat to the city. To prevent the resurgence of the beasts, the city lord organized 2 thorough purges, and while he could not claim to have eliminated every threat, he ensured there were no hidden dangers within 100 miles of Weishui City. The Weishui City lord's mansion was decorated with an unusual level of grandeur both inside and out. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting dappled light, while fresh flowers and greenery adorned every corner. Across the sprawling 7-layered estate, the grounds were overflowing with guests attending the victory banquet. People in fine ceremonial robes mingled throughout the halls. The air was filled with joyous conversation as they celebrated their hard-won victory. Weishui City was already prosperous, and the city lord proved to be exceptionally generous. Even those cultivators who had not participated in the hunt were granted a substantial reward. The city lord and the various high-ranking officials of Weishui City smiled. The disciples of Qingyun's sect have arrived. As the announcement echoed, the gazes of the numerous cultivators within the mansion converged upon them. The city lord and several clan heads hurried forward to extend their welcome. The smiles upon their faces grew significantly more radiant. Ningying bowed his head slightly. My senior brother Ling He has sustained heavy injuries and could not attend personally. He has entrusted us to represent him. We hope the city lord will not take offense. Not at all, not at all. Young friend Ling He was injured protecting Weishui City. Our city is more than willing to bear all the costs for his recovery. You are too kind, city lord. To slay demons and eliminate evil is the bounden duty of our Qingyun sect. The city lord offered a smile that bordered on sycophantic. It is a pity that Taoist Li was occupied and could not attend. Please convey our gratitude to him for his intervention this time. The other clan heads standing behind them nodded in agreement. Indeed, indeed. We hope young friend Ling can convey our thanks to Taoist Li once you return to the sect. The departure of Li Xuanxiao from the sect, orchestrated by the second elder, was originally intended to be announced to the world shortly thereafter. Li Xuanxiao no longer held any connection to the Qingyun sect. Yet, unexpectedly, an unforeseen incident occurred shortly after his departure. The high-ranking officials of the Qingyun sect discovered that Li Xuanxiao's cultivation base had been restored. Considering Li Xuanxiao's extraordinary talent, this development caught everyone off guard, leaving them unprepared. They were forced to change their strategy. They issued a gag order, forbidding sect disciples from discussing the matter, and retroactively fabricated charges, accusing Li Xuanxiao of poisoning others to commit murder. Simultaneously, they ordered the disciples to hunt down Li Xuanxiao and bring him back to the sect. As these past events flickered before his eyes, he realized that the outside world remained entirely unaware that Li Xuanxiao had left the sect. The people of Weishui City merely assumed that Li Xuanxiao and Ning Ying's group had arrived together, and that he had simply departed a step early due to other matters. That six-winged golden cicada was truly unfortunate. It hid for so long, yet the moment it revealed itself, it encountered Taoist Li. Someone remarked with a light-hearted tone, "It is fortunate that Taoist Li was in Weishui City. Otherwise, we would not be here celebrating today." I propose that we all raise our glasses to toast Taoist Li. The people of Weishui City cheered in unison. The city lord had intended to flatter the Qingyun sect disciples, but his efforts backfired, leaving the disciples appearing visibly awkward. They could only sit there as if on pins and needles, forcing smiles as they echoed, "The true essence of heaven and earth is something only the tranquil can savor." The true fortuitous encounters of heaven and earth, he recalled an old monk who once told him, true cultivation does not reside solely upon the mountain. It was not confined merely to the temple. Back then I held a 3-foot sword in my hand, roaming the world to purge evil. As for the words of that old bald donkey, I naturally paid them no mind. Thinking back on it now, it carries a certain flavor of reflection. Li Xuanxiao lay upon the back of the small donkey, hands behind his head, gazing silently at the sky. At sunset, as the sun slowly dipped toward the west, the distant mountain range appeared both mysterious and majestic under the fading light. It was a sensation beyond words, as if nature itself were unveiling its most sublime beauty for all to behold. Beneath the twilight, their shadows stretched long across the earth. Li Xuanxiao lazily let out a yawn and reached out for a fruit. Ling Doling immediately and attentively handed him one. The fruit was still somewhat green, yet with one bite it tasted both tart and sweet. "Big brother, when will I be as powerful as you?" Ling Doling asked with great anticipation. "Learn slowly, cultivate steadily, haste only leads to failure," Li Xuanxiao said in a relaxed manner. Ling Doling nodded firmly. "I understand, big brother." Ever since Li Xuanxiao displayed his prowess by slaying the 6-winged golden cicada, both Ling Doling and Qi had placed their absolute faith in his words. Ling Doling was now not only interested in learning the sword but also fascinated by the stories of Li Xuanxiao. Every day he would cling to Li Xuanxiao, eager to hear him tell his tales. "Where did we leave off yesterday?" Ling Doling prompted. "We were speaking of the great banquet where Prince Yanqing and Zhang Li, the fairy of the Beiluo sect, pledged their love beneath the moonlight." Li Xuanxiao narrowed his eyes, recalling the past of Yanqing and Zhang Li, endured humiliation, harboring great ambitions in his heart. The other was the youngest immortal official of the Beiluo sect. Their encounter was vivid and full of color, much like the protagonists of a novel, yet the happy ending one might expect never materialized. What happened after that? Did they stay together? Did they abandon everything to wander the world as a pair? Ling Doling had heard many stories of this nature, so he could already predict 8 or 9 parts of how the tale would unfold. Li Xuanxiao pondered for a moment and shook his head. In the time that followed, Zhang Li returned to the Beiluo sect, choosing to develop her school. That prince who had endured such humiliation eventually became the emperor, bestowing upon the realm an era of peace and prosperity. Ling Doling exclaimed in surprise, and even Qi, who had been feigning sword practice while secretly listening in, frowned, seemingly deeply dissatisfied with the conclusion of this story. Why are they not together? Had they not already pledged their hearts to one another? Li Xuanxiao offered a faint smile. It was because they both had more pressing matters to attend to. In this world, how many tales of scholar and beauty ever truly reach a perfect conclusion? Most begin with great fanfare, only to end in silence. Ling Doling and Qi were still young, yet their hearts were filled with lingering questions. Li Xuanxiao did not offer much of an explanation. It was a matter from many years ago. He only vaguely remembered how he and Tianyu had forcibly created opportunities for Yanqing to confess his feelings to Zhang Li. In the biting snow, they spent the entire night watching the stars, helping Yanqing decide how to compose a love letter. "I believe using a fine poem is the most appropriate approach," Zhang Tianyu said solemnly, arguing that it was neither too aggressive nor lacking in genuine sentiment. Li Xuanxiao shook his head. Zhang Li was an official of the Beiluo sect, and she favored refined literary prose, so one should write. A year of separation only deepens the longing, implying that after many years apart, the yearning for one's home and for her had only grown stronger. Yanqing and Zhang Tianyu nodded in agreement, simultaneously giving a thumbs up. However, Zhang Li ended up throwing the letter back at Yanqing, stating coldly, "We last met only half an incense stick of time ago. Furthermore, this is already the 107th letter you have written to me this month. You even went so far as to have Li Xuanxiao sneak it onto my bedside? Do you believe I will force you to swallow every single one of them?" Recalling the aggrieved expression on Yanqing's face as he poured out his misery back then, Li Xuanxiao could not help but laugh out loud even now. "Big brother, what are you laughing at?" Ling Dawling asked, full of curiosity. A flicker of emotion appeared in the depths of Li Xuanxiao's eyes. It was nothing, simply the recollection of some amusing memories, the past appearing as if it were right before his eyes. At Qingyun Sect on Tongshan Peak, a thin youth was practicing his swordplay in the forest, the sunlight filtering through the leaves to illuminate his face. His gaze was focused and resolute. The sword in his hand flashed with a cold light. His body moved with agility through the woods, sword following the person, person following the sword. His garments were already drenched in sweat, yet he paid no heed, for in his heart there was only the sword. There was only his unwavering faith in the blade. Mozu wore a simple, elegant robe, her sleeves fluttering as she moved. Her figure was tall and graceful. Her hair was styled simply, secured by a single jade hairpin, with the remainder cascading down her back, swaying gently with every step she took. Her face was delicate and unadorned, devoid of any makeup, yet it exuded a profound natural beauty. "Senior sister." The young man ceased his movements and stood before Mo Zhu, his chest rising and falling slightly. The youth was named Chen Shixi, the youngest among the inner disciples of Tongshan Peak, and also the most exceptionally talented disciple to emerge at Tongshan Peak in recent years. Many years ago, when Mo Zhu descended the mountain to travel, she happened upon Chen Shixi while he was being hunted by his enemies. After saving him, she was astonished to discover that he possessed innate 9 orifices, making him a cultivation prodigy found once in 10,000. Thus, she brought him back to Qingyun Sect. After entering the Qingyun Sect, Chen Shixi, starting with no prior foundation in cultivation, achieved one breakthrough after another, astounding all who witnessed him. A genius destined to rival Li Xuanxiao was about to emerge from within the Qingyun Sect. "Tongshan Peak, give me time, and I will surely surpass him level by level," he vowed. "Step by step I shall ascend to the heavens, the 9 realms of the cultivation path. The first realm, foundation establishment, is to cultivate one's character and nurture the spirit. The second realm, illumination of the yellow court, is the convergence of the 5 elements. The third realm, the gathering of the 3 flowers, involves refining essence into spirit to transcend the mortal state, awakening divine talents and latent abilities. The power of spells begins to manifest, developing divine sense to perceive all things under heaven. The fourth realm, the mastery of magical artifacts, where one's destiny is no longer dictated by the heavens. The path of the golden core begins from here. The fifth realm involves profound insight into Taoist techniques, constructing a Taoist gate within the body. The sixth realm involves cultivating supreme divine powers upon the great Tao's origin sea to build the Taoist gate, where the primordial spirit transforms into the nascent soul. These represent the lower 3 realms and the middle 3 realms of cultivation. As for the upper 3 realms, those who reach such heights of cultivation are few and far between. Despite his youth, Chen Shixi had already entered the 4th realm of cultivation. Having attained the golden core path where destiny is forged by one's own hand, his future was truly boundless. One must understand that apart from Li Xuanxiao, the average age for a Qingyun Sect disciple to reach the 4th realm was over 50 years old. "Let us go, the master wishes to see you." Mo Zhu spoke. Senior sister Chen Shixi murmured, for by the time he had entered Tongshan Peak, the Taoist Wangxing had already assumed the position of sect master of Qingyun. With countless matters to attend to, the sect master naturally had little time for a new disciple such as himself. Thus, Chen Shixi rarely had the opportunity to encounter the Taoist Wangqing in his daily life. For the most part, it was the elders and senior sisters of the sect who guided him in his cultivation. Shortly after, Chen Shixi followed senior sister Mo Zhu to the main hall of the Master Peak. Surprisingly, the Wangtin Taoist exerted no overwhelming pressure. He merely cast a calm glance at Chen Shixi. Chen Shixi bowed his head, lips pressed tightly, his heart filled with indescribable joy. After all, this was the first time his master had ever offered him praise. According to the common wisdom in the cultivation world, those in the lower 3 realms are not truly considered cultivators. Only those who reach the core formation stage are recognized as such. Cultivators below the golden core stage, without the aid of external forces, possess virtually no chance of victory when facing a golden core expert. The Vong Tin Taoist spoke calmly. "You have now essentially entered the middle 3 realms. Starting from the 4th realm, this stage can trap a practitioner for an entire lifetime. You must be cautious and patient." This disciple obeys the master's command. The Vong Tin Taoist then turned to address Mo Zhu. Reports indicate that the traitor of the Qingyun sect, Sheng Tiansong, is currently hiding on the border between Xiling and Dian. The kingdom of Xiling hopes that the Qingyun sect will deal with this individual swiftly to avoid any unnecessary complications. "You shall take Shixi with you on this mission." Upon hearing this, Chen Shixi's heart swelled with even greater joy. To embark on a mission alongside his senior sister. Mo Zhu's eyes flickered slightly. Master Shang Tiansong possesses immense strength. Junior brother has only just stepped into the 4th realm. His foundation is not yet stable. The Vongtin Taoist spoke indifferently. Shang Tianzong's cultivation is at the 6th realm of nascent soul. In the past, Li Xuanxiao slew 2 6th realm cultivators while he was only at the 4th realm. Not to mention, you will be by his side this time. Chen Shixi secretly clenched his fists. Before Mo Zhu could interject, he spoke up immediately. "Master, rest assured. This disciple will certainly assist senior sister. I will bring back the corpse of Zhang Tiansong. You may go." The Vongtin Taoist closed his eyes once more. Mo Zhu glanced at Xin Shi, signaling him to leave first. As Chen Shixi stepped outside the hall, he heard voices drifting from within. Master Lin He's group has returned. The entire incident has been recorded within the image projection stone. The hall fell silent for a moment, as if the images within the stone were being replayed. After a long interval, the voice of the Vong Tin Taoist echoed once more, followed by a heavy sigh. Chen Shixi had never seen his master in such a state. He understood well that all of these events stemmed from the senior brother he had never even met. By the time Chen Shixi joined the sect, Li Xuanxiao's injuries were already beyond recovery, and he had sequestered himself far from the residence of the Tongshan Peak disciples. Thus, Chen Shixi and Li Xuanxiao had little interaction, yet he was all too familiar with the legendary tales surrounding Li Xuanxiao. A senior brother once remarked that if not for the existence of Li Xuanxiao on Tongshan Peak, Chen Shixi would undoubtedly be the brightest star of the Qingyun sect. He entered the Qingyun sect at the age of 8. By 15, he had attained enlightenment in a single strike within the span of a year. He broke through 3 realms in succession, and before he had even reached the age of 20, he had stepped into the 4th realm. All these feats were enough to shine brilliantly, yet looming above him was a presence that burned even brighter. No matter how hard he labored, others would always dismiss his efforts with a casual remark. Back in those days, how was senior brother Li? At this thought, Chen Shixi involuntarily clenched his fists. After a long moment, senior sister Mozu emerged from the hall. Junior brother Mozu waved her hand. Go and prepare yourself. We set out tomorrow. Looking at the increasingly haggard expression on senior sister Mozu's face, Chen Shixi could not help but feel a pang of sorrow. Ever since Li Xuanxiao left the Qingyun sect, smiles had become a rarity on senior sister Mozu's face. He knew what she was anxious about, just as he knew what the other brothers and sisters of Tongshan Peak were fretting over. Li Xuanxiao had been framed and expelled from the Qingyun sect, and now that his cultivation had recovered, it represented the greatest upheaval for the sect. Chen Shixi took a deep breath and suddenly turned back toward the Great Hall. Master, he shouted aloud, leaving Mozu to watch his receding figure in surprise, unsure of what he intended to do. Master, I am not Li Xuanxiao, and I will never be Li Xuanxiao. Give me time, and I will surely surpass him. A storm raged in the mountains, thunder rumbled, and the rain poured down as if the heavens had collapsed. Li Xuanxiao and his group arrived at a dilapidated temple in Lingdoling. Gazing at the ruined structure before him, he saw crumbling walls and broken windows covered in thick dust, the air heavy with the scent of mold and decay. It is better to sleep in a desolate grave than to enter a ruined temple, Ling Doling muttered, though it was clear that Qi and Li Xuanxiao paid his words little mind. Ling Doling immediately changed his tone to a fawning one, but with Big Brother here, there is nothing to fear. Very well, very well. Li Xuanxiao brushed his hands together. How did this temple become so decrepit? Have you been here before, brother? A Qi asked with curiosity. A long time ago. As he spoke, Li Xuanxiao walked toward the toppled clay statue. Immediately thereafter, an elderly man with a benevolent aura appeared before them. This sudden manifestation left Ling Doling and Qi trembling in fear. Earth deity, why has your shrine fallen into such a state of ruin? The earth deity laughed heartily. Rivers shift their courses. Roads and mountains change. Even the mountain gods of old have long since been replaced. I am but a minor earth deity. To have endured until this day is already a testament to my perseverance. To what do I owe the honor of your visit, realized one? Li Xuanxiao replied, I was merely passing by and thought to visit you, intending to impose upon you for a meal. Who would have thought you had fallen into such decline? It seems a meal is out of the question, though I suppose one could still be arranged. The earth deity spoke, however. I must request a small favor from you, realized one Li. Judging by his tone, this matter was certainly no mere trifle. The earth deity smiled craftily and said, to a man of your stature, realized one Li, it is naturally a trivial matter. Would you be so kind as to transport my idol to Luhe County, nestled deep within the mountains? The earth deity, known as Lu Shu, was a destitute scholar in his mortal life. His family fortune had dwindled, yet he had known Su Nian since they were children. In their youth, he would blush at the mere glance of the young maiden and grow flustered at the slightest accidental touch. Though they shared the pure affection of childhood sweethearts, their path was fraught with the tribulations of a cruel destiny. The young man knew well that only through diligent study and success in the imperial examinations could he grant their love a perfect fruition. Yet the heavens toyed with their fate. One day before his departure for the capital to sit for the examinations, the small county was ravaged by a great flood. To save the populace, the young man employed a hereditary water control technique. Under his protection, hundreds of villagers escaped the calamity, though he ultimately perished from sheer exhaustion. To honor his virtues, the local people carved a statue in his likeness, enshrining him as the local earth deity. This was the classic, albeit hollow, tale of a talented scholar and a beautiful maiden. Li Xuanxiao had once resided within Lu Shu's shrine for an entire month. The woman named Su Nian would trek up the mountain every few days to pay her respects to the earth deity. Each time she came, she brought with her the apples that the young man had favored in life. The following morning, as the rain ceased, Li Xuanxiao secured Lu Shu's idol onto the back of his small donkey. What has become of that girl? Li Xuanxiao inquired. In his eyes, Su Nian remained a young girl, yet by now she had reached the twilight of her years, surrounded by children and grandchildren. Lu Shu revealed an expression of profound sorrow. She has fallen ill and has not visited in a long time. I wish to go and see her. Qi turned his head and asked with curiosity, Lord Earth Deity, do you not possess divine powers? But it has been a long time since anyone offered incense to me. Let alone magical power, it is already no small feat that I can continue to exist in this world. This is simply a matter that cannot be helped. The river has changed its course and reaching the mountain has become quite troublesome. Fortunately, I get to eat an apple every so often. Lu Shu spoke these words, his tone filled with contentment. He paused for a moment, then continued, recently a new city deity arrived in the neighboring county, and this city deity acts in a rather overbearing manner. He had some past grievances with the city deity of our county. Now he brings his personal vendettas into his official duties, establishing many bizarre regulations, forbidding the nether officials of our county from stepping into his territory, and even forcibly pushing many wandering souls into our county. Now, the city deities of both counties are preparing to head to the metropolitan city deity's residence to file a grievance. Lu Shu had not spoken to anyone for a long time, so he spoke at length. I have troubled you, Taoist. A simple meal will suffice. Li Xuanxiao replied casually, how could one waste the precious time of Taoist Li on a mere meal? What a pity, for I possess nothing but time these days. Lu Shu narrowed his eyes as he looked at Li Xuanxiao. The Taoist was different from before, very different. Yet this minor deity could not pinpoint exactly where the difference lay. Lu Shu was merely a humble earth deity. He only knew that Li Xuanxiao was very formidable, but the extent of that prowess was beyond his comprehension, and he was even less aware of the greater affairs within the cultivation world. Thus, in this moment, he could truly only perceive how Li Xuanxiao differed from the man of the past. The man who was once full of heavy thoughts and worries now exuded an air of ease and detachment, as if every sorrow had abandoned him. Li Xuanxiao's gait had become lighter, and his presence carried an aura of profound tranquility. He seemed to have found an inner balance, brimming with a newfound love and hope for life. My deepest thanks, Taoist. The mountain breeze swept past, carrying the scent of the forest, evoking an indescribable sense of comfort and joy. In the wind lingered the faint fragrance of pine needles and damp earth. The journey down the mountain took 3 days, and by the forthright, the lights at the foot of the mountain were already visible. Li Xuanxiao coughed violently, his body trembling intensely. His complexion as pale as parchment, his brow beaded with cold sweat. In part because his body had not yet fully adapted to his current state, he required more time to recover. On the other hand, although his injuries were slowly mending, the foundation of his dantian had been destroyed. It was an irreparable trauma, to the point where he could barely withstand the spiritual energy currently flowing through him. If one were to describe the original body of Li Xuanxiao as a vast lake without boundaries, then after being wounded, the lake had been shattered and its contents entirely drained away. And while the current Li Xuanxiao had regained the ability to hold spiritual energy, he lacked that vast, expansive lake, unable to contain any significant amount. Every time he cultivated, he could feel his body trembling, as if it were struggling to resist the intrusion of that spiritual power. Li Xuanxiao looked up and discovered that a Qi, who had been walking ahead, had turned back, gazing at him with a hint of concern. Li Xuanxiao responded with a reassuring smile. The mountain not far away suddenly trembled as if a mysterious power were silently awakening. At first, it was only a slight vibration, but very quickly these tremors grew increasingly intense. In the end, the entire mountain began to shake as a colossal figure rose from within the earth. Upon his body, the divine light of the mountains and rivers radiated outward. The aura was majestic and formidable, leaving one unable to suppress a profound sense of awe. I am the mountain god of Luhe, who are you? Lu Shu clasped his hands and bowed. This humble deity, Lu Shu the earth deity of Zhao County, pays respects to the mountain god. Zhao County. The mountain god let out a cold snort. An earth deity of Zhao County, what brings you to Luhe? My sacrificial power has been exhausted. I wish to return and visit an old friend while I still dwell in the mortal realm. Underworld officials of Zhao County are not permitted to enter Luhe. Lu Shu offered a conciliatory smile. This humble deity knows there has been a slight misunderstanding between Luhe and Zhao County recently, but the mountain god is a being of great magnanimity, and surely would not make things difficult for me over such a trivial matter. I beg the mountain god to be lenient. This humble deity would be eternally grateful. You certainly have a silver tongue, the mountain god replied. The mountain god continued, I maintain a good relationship with the city god of Luhe. If I allow you to pass, how am I to remain on good terms with him? Lu Shu had served as an earth deity for many years. He understood that the officialdom of the underworld was not much different from that of the mortal world. He naturally understood the mountain god's true meaning. Without some form of benefit, why would the other party relent? Lu Shu wore an expression of embarrassment. Mountain god, this humble deity has not received offerings for a long time, let alone anything of significant value. The mountain god had already perceived that the other's sacrificial aura was weak to the point of extinction, and hearing him admit it personally, cease your idle chatter and continue moving. Otherwise, do not blame this deity for being discourteous. But the laws of the netherworld contain no such clause. Although I am merely the earth deity of Zhao County, I still hold the jurisdiction to enter Lu River. Before he could finish his sentence, the mountain deity coldly cut him off. Do you truly wish to lecture this deity on reason? I merely meant. The physical form of Lu Shu flickered and grew faint, seemingly overwhelmed by the oppressive aura of the mountain deity. At this moment, Ling Doling stepped forward. The young boy possessed great courage, showing no trace of fear in the face of such a scene. He reached out to pat Lu Shu's shoulder, yet his hand passed straight through, failing to make contact. Left with no choice, he cast a glance at the other party, as if to say, leave it to me, before drawing 2 osmanthus cakes from his robes and offering them to the mountain deity, saying, these are for you. Though young, Ling Doling was remarkably astute regarding the ways of the world. Knowing it was best to offer a small tribute, he generously produced the osmanthus cakes he had been saving. Just how alluring was this osmanthus cake? Put it this way, Li Xuanxiao had already begged him for 3. In his mind, if even a formidable swordsman like Brother Li desired a taste of these cakes, then surely this cold mountain deity staring intently at the boy would be no different. Yet Ling Doling wore a triumphant expression, as if to say, "You want to eat them, don't you? I knew you couldn't resist." The osmanthus cake in Ling Doling's hand suddenly took flight, caught midair by a palm, preventing it from hitting the ground. Li Xuanxiao consumed half of the cake in a single bite. Sensing the immense pressure radiating from the mountain deity, Ling Doling hurriedly retreated behind Li Xuanxiao's back. Li Xuanxiao slowly closed his eyes, carefully savoring the flavor upon his tongue. The osmanthus cake was soft and delicate like a cloud. As he ate, he patted Ling Doling on the shoulder. "You are still too young. Observe your elder brother. Brother, do you intend to use your sword techniques against him?" Ling Doling whispered in inquiry. Li Xuanxiao shook his head with an air of profound wisdom, speaking seriously to Ling Doling and Che Qi. "Remember, violence resolves nothing. Using violence to suppress violence often only escalates the conflict. It merely leaves the opponent fearful, leading them to either feign submission or rise in defiance. Violence only strengthens the urge to resist within their hearts. It cannot truly resolve the underlying issue." Both children nodded in vague understanding. Li Xuanxiao offered a faint smile to the mountain god and said, "I hope the mountain god will grant us this favor. We shall return immediately and will not disturb you further." "Grant you a favor? And what standing do you have to demand such a thing?" Li Xuanxiao cupped his hands in a polite salute and replied, "The Luha mountain range is vast, and to have ascended to become its guardian deity, you must have achieved significant heights in your cultivation, and surely you are a person of virtue. The city gods of the 2 districts have allowed personal grudges to implicate the officials of the underworld. This is a violation of the laws. You are the mountain god. There is no need for you to be embroiled in this affair." Unexpectedly, upon hearing these words, the mountain god grew even more incensed. "Who are you to speak to this deity in such a tone? How I conduct my affairs? Is it your place to dictate to me? You possess a mere sliver of magical power, and already you do not know the immensity of heaven and earth." As the mountain god's voice boomed like a temple bell, a gale erupted, sending sand and stones flying and bowing the trees in its wake. "My surname is Li. My name is Xuanjiao." The sudden wind ceased abruptly, and the mountain god's expression stiffened. Li Xuanxiao folded his arms across his chest, leaning back slightly. Ling Doling watched the back of Li Xuanxiao with profound admiration. This was a scene that existed only in his dreams. To wander the world alone to eradicate evil and suppress the arrogant, to have a name so renowned that it strikes terror into the hearts of villains. The mountain god pondered Li Xuanxiao. Who is this Li Xuanxiao? The mountain god's ignorance of Li Xuanxiao was like a common bailiff in a local office failing to recognize the prime minister of the imperial court. "I, Li Xuanxiao, speak with my sword." Li Xuanxiao seemed to feel a bit awkward performing this display in front of the youngsters. He gestured with his bamboo sword, signaling the deity, "Do I really need to know who you are to deal with you? You insolent brat, ignorant of the heights of heaven and the depth of the earth." Having lost all patience for further talk, the mountain god prepared to teach this presumptuous boy a lesson. Li Xuanxiao remained expressionless. "Let us move over there to settle this." Ling Doling was perplexed. The mountain god had insulted their big brother so severely. Why did he not respond with a single word? Achi said calmly, "To be berated like this yet remain unmoved, to face humiliation without a ripple of anger, this is the mark of a true gentleman." Achi seemed lost in thought. Her perception of Li Xuanxiao underwent a significant transformation for the first time. She recalled the words Tai Nu had once told her. "A true expert never strikes without cause, and a true powerhouse stands as the boundary that protects the freedom of the weak. Violence has never resolved a single problem. Li Xuanxiao is the most temperate among us. He never resorts to force easily, always maintaining a refined and polite demeanor. He carries the air of a true gentleman, a subtle smile always gracing his lips. Never hurried regardless of the situation, never impulsive, nor is he ever prideful despite his formidable cultivation base." A moment later, the battered and bruised mountain god reappeared. "My lord, look, Xiao has grown so much. If you had just revealed that you were Li Xuanxiao, why would we have needed to cause such a commotion? It is truly a case of the great river washing away the Dragon King's temple, family members failing to recognize their own kin. Come here, follow me, I shall lead you down the mountain." It was a misunderstanding. All of it was merely a misunderstanding. Li Xuanxiao tapped his bamboo ring and muttered, "This artifact is still the most convenient to use." Achi shook his head, casting aside the thoughts he had just harbored. He watched Li Xuanxiao showing off his swordsmanship to Ling Daoling and thought to himself that this man was truly a master of deception. Li Xuanxiao and the others used a shaggy donkey to pull the earthen idol of Lu Zhuo all the way to Luhe County. Because Lu Zhuo's power of incense and devotion was currently too weak, his soul could not remain away from his earthen idol vessel for long. Thus, Li Xuanxiao's group followed Lu Zhuo to the doorstep of the young lady for whom he had pined day and night. "Many thanks, perfected Master Li." Lu Zhuo's form grew increasingly faint, as if a mere gust of wind could scatter him into nothingness. Li Xuanxiao replied calmly, "Go quickly, I suspect that young lady does not have much time left." Lu Zhuo hesitated for a long moment, then fished out a fragment of silver and offered it to Li Xuanxiao. "This is the remuneration we agreed upon." Li Xuanxiao accepted the silver, tossed it into the air, and caught it in his palm. A smile playing on his lips. I wonder if that girl Sunian still remembers me. And convey my regards to her in a moment. Lu Zhuo nodded, his form passing through the stone wall and into the house. Li Xuanxiao casually plucked a foxtail grass blade from the roadside, chewing on it as he looked up only to realize the entire sky had turned into a warm, vivid hue. The sky was saturated with the colors of dusk, like pigment in a dye vat, leaving not a single trace of white. Achi leaned against the wall, tilting his head as he asked, is he intending to bid a final farewell to the one he loves? Indeed, Li Xuanxiao whispered softly. In the Su residence, the elderly Sunian lay upon her bed. Her body was like an oil lamp nearing its end. Slowly, his eyes were sunken deep within their sockets, drained of their former vitality, resembling two dark, lightless wells. Lu Zhuo took a deep breath, standing before Sunian's bed, though she could not see him. Lu Zhuo's face was etched with deep wrinkles, like a crumpled sheet of paper bearing all the marks of the passing years. His lips trembled slightly, as if he wished to speak, yet no sound could escape. His thoughts drifted back to the past, recalling his youth. How he had moved from Luhe County to Zhuo County after his mother remarried. His mother had given birth to a younger brother, and his stepfather had treated him poorly. He remembered the time when his father was still alive, and he remembered the young lady from the Ling family named Su Nian. One day, while he was chopping wood at home, someone suddenly tapped his shoulder and asked, "Are you eating well?" Turning around, he saw Su Nian standing behind him, wearing a radiant smile. Her clothes were heavily soiled. Only later did Lu Zhuo learn that to meet him, she had trekked across a mountain alone to reach Zhuo County. Afterward, Lu Zhuo frequently traveled to Luo County, and eventually he inadvertently became a local tyrant. Then it became Sunian's turn to traverse that same mountain path time and time again. The mud she had stepped through, the mountains she had crossed, the cold air she had inhaled. Alas, despite the vast distance between them like the Milky Way, he was ultimately the one who broke his promise. Lu Zhuo took a deep, ragged breath, using the last of his spirit fire energy to manifest his form before Sunian. "Are you eating well?" The sunset cast its glow upon the river. As the ripples shifted, the river's surface, previously muddied by days of heavy rain, mirrored light and imagery as if countless stars had fallen from the heavens into the water. A gentle breeze brushed past, causing the willow branches to rustle as if playing music for this bittersweet tale. Those deeply etched memories and frantic, passionate loves shattered into fragments beneath the relentless flow of time. Li Xuanxiao's eyes flickered. He suddenly stretched his limbs and said, "Let us depart." "What about old Lu?" Achi asked, "What of him?" "He has already finished his farewells." Li Xuanxiao spoke calmly. "Will he return?" Ling Daoling replied, "He will not. He has finally bid farewell to his past." Achi lowered his head. But in the end, they could not be together. Is that not deeply tragic? A smile touched the corner of Li Xuanxiao's mouth. How could it be? This world is filled with far too many beautiful things. The morning sunlight, the hem of a robe dancing in the wind, the spring soil, the warmth of a winter hearth, plum blossoms in the morning mist, sweet osmanthus in the courtyard, stories told by the campfire, and poems overflowing with moonlight. Do not forget what you have already possessed, and cherish all the more what you could never obtain. Never abandon what is rightfully yours. Let what is lost remain a memory, yet guard it well. Shopkeeper, how do you sell your noodles? The shopkeeper dared not accept the formal title, for he was merely a roadside vendor. The noodle vendor looked up and smiled. Winter was approaching, the air had turned cold, and the morning streets were deserted. The young man before him, accompanied by 2 children and leading a donkey, appeared to be a traveler, and he ordered several bowls of noodles. 3 bowls. A short while later, the bowls of noodles before Li Xuanxiao were completely empty. He licked the corners of his mouth and smacked his lips with lingering regret, the taste of the noodles still haunting his senses. At this moment, before the noodles the vendor had just fished out of the pot could even settle, Li Xuanxiao spoke in a loud and enthusiastic voice. "Shopkeeper, 1 more bowl of noodles with extra chili and scallions." Hearing this, the vendor placed the freshly cooked noodles into Li Xuanxiao's bowl. Li Xuanxiao offered a word of praise. "Delicious noodles. From where does the guest hail?" "From the south. And where are you headed?" "To the north." Gradually, the vendor noticed that something was amiss. This young man had an insatiable appetite. Bowl after bowl was consumed faster than he could cook them. The noodles in his pot were claimed by the customer the moment they were ready. In the blink of an eye, he had already finished more than 20 bowls of noodles. The vendor felt a mix of delight and growing concern. He feared the man might eat himself to death. "Dear guest, please eat slowly. These are not mere snacks, but real needed flour, and eating too much will surely strain your stomach." Li Xuanxiao was still intent on eating more. Achi reached out and tugged at his sleeve. Li Xuanxiao lowered his head to look at her, Achi's round eyes darting about. She opened her small palm and held it out before Li Xuanxiao. Only 15 copper coins remained inside. Originally, they had possessed a significant amount of money taken from the home of Ling Doling's second uncle, who had perished at the hands of the Ma bandits. As it turned out, they had lost their money while in the city previously. Because of this, Ling Doling had wailed and made quite a scene for a long while. "This is the money I saved to take a wife in the future." Li Xuanxiao calculated the cost of the noodles he had just consumed, realizing the 15 copper coins were certainly not enough. "This is all there is. It is finished." Achi shook her head. "It is finished. This is all that remains." Li Xuanxiao turned his gaze toward Ling Daoling. Ling Daoling shook his head. "I have nothing left either. You are the one who likes to hoard wealth." Li Xuanxiao did not believe him and reached for the other's pouch. Big brother, I truly have nothing left. Hearing these words, the merchant's heart skipped a beat. It turned out they were deadbeats. Yet, observing Li Xuanxiao's attire and demeanor, he did not look like a common swindler. Li Xuanxiao scratched his head. Perhaps we should sell the fur donkey? No, that won't do. Ling Daoling immediately jumped up in protest. This fur donkey had been raised by him since it was small. How could he simply sell it? Li Xuanxiao's eyes glanced toward the neighboring shop, a sudden idea striking him, and he stood up to enter. The merchant saw the two youths, and the fur donkey remained there, and he was not afraid of them. The shopkeeper was currently wielding a brush to write. Seeing someone approach, he greeted, "What would the guest like to see? Inkstones, paperweights, or other items from the four treasures of the study?" Li Xu looked around. The inkstones were carved with exquisite patterns, featuring landscapes, flowers, and birds, while the high-quality paperweights were crafted from fine sandalwood, inlaid with cat's eye stones, turquoise, and amber. "Shopkeeper, may I have a sheet of Xuan paper? Do you sell just a single sheet?" The shopkeeper lost interest, having initially thought that since the boy was well-dressed, he might be a wealthy patron, so he casually pulled out a sheet of Xuan paper worth 2 copper coins. "Many thanks. Would it be convenient to borrow your brush for a moment?" The shopkeeper was not a stingy man. Li Xuanxiao expressed his gratitude, placed the 2 coins on the table, picked up the brush, dipped it into the ink, and his fingers gently gripped the handle, feeling the connection between the brush tip and the paper. Li Xiao rolled up his right sleeve with his left hand, gripped the brush with his right, and began with a delicate touch, his strokes fluid like a warhorse galloping across a frontier. Coming and going with speed as the brush moved incessantly, a beautiful painting began to manifest on the paper. It was a landscape painting with overlapping mountains and mist shrouding the path, as if drawing the observer into a celestial realm. The strokes of Li Xuanxiao became increasingly rapid, his right hand dancing continuously, and the lines on the paper grew ever more graceful. He finally set down his brush, inhaled a deep breath, and gently massaged his right fingers. It has been a long time since he last painted. His fingers felt somewhat fatigued. The painting techniques Li Xuanxiao practiced were inherited from the national master of the previous dynasty. Years ago, he had sworn before his master that he would only allow his master's works to circulate in the world, and since then he had been exceedingly cautious. The shopkeeper stood before the painting, his eyes fixed upon it, his mouth agape in involuntary awe. He was a man who knew how to appreciate art. At this moment, he felt as though he had been drawn into the world within the painting, captivated by the delicate strokes. The imagery was so vivid that he was completely entranced. Within the painting, the mountains were majestic and the rivers vast and boundless. The expansive composition allowed the viewer to sense a profound and tranquil beauty. Faintly, it even granted one the sensation of catching a glimpse of the laws of heaven and earth. "What does the shopkeeper think of this piece?" Li Xuanxiao asked. It took a long time for the shopkeeper to return to his senses. "Excellent, excellent, excellent." He repeated the word 3 times, yet feeling that such praise was too hollow, he prepared to voice his deeper understanding of the painting's nuance. Li Xuanxiao interrupted him with a single sentence. "Does the shopkeeper wish to purchase it? Naturally, that would be for the best." Li Xuanxiao calculated that the cost of his noodles was not high, so about 70 or 80 wen would suffice. Only 80 wen. The corner of the shopkeeper's mouth twitched. He had been mentally prepared for the other party to ask for 70 or 80 taels of silver, never expecting a mere 80 wen. Agreed, no problem at all, no problem." The shopkeeper nodded repeatedly, as if fearing Li Xuanxiao might change his mind. He swept a pile of loose silver onto the counter and handed it over without even glancing at the amount. Li Xuanxiao narrowed his eyes slightly, but he did not refuse, accepting the payment with composure. This was in fact the second painting of his to circulate in the world. He had created the first one for a young lady. Back then, he never would have imagined that years later, he would take up the brush again just to trade it for a few taels of loose silver. It was worth it. 1,000 pieces of gold are hard to trade for a moment of joy. Li Xuanxiao took the money and departed with an indifferent air. He did not turn back, nor did he show a trace of nostalgia or regret. He did not even care to note the name of the shop. "This distinguished guest, may you leave behind your name?" Only then did the shopkeeper remember to ask. Li Xuanxiao waved his hand dismissively, leaving the shopkeeper overwhelmed with joy. He rubbed his hands in excitement, his eyes fixed intently upon the painting. The more he studied it, the more he savored its depth, struggling to contain the surge of excitement within his heart. Yet the most pressing matter now was to have this masterpiece properly framed. A famous painting being framed is much like a sick man donning fine robes. If the robe is elegant, the patient recovers with vigor. If it is ill-fitting, the patient remains in peril. Li Xuanxiao leisurely departed from the shop, returning to the roadside noodle stall. In truth, a bowl of noodles cost only a few copper coins. Despite Li Xuanxiao's hearty appetite, the expense was negligible. Upon settling the bill, the total came to 75 coins, though the stall owner ultimately accepted only 70. "Big brother, where did you get all this money?" Ling Doling looked toward the shop with astonishment, whispering, "Big brother, did you go out and rob someone?" Li Xuanxiao tapped him on the head. "What kind of person do you think your big brother is? How could I ever demean myself by doing something so shameful? A simple painting of mine is enough to fetch such a price." He handed the earnings to his young steward, a Qi, who blinked in surprise. This was the first time a Qi had offered Li Xuanxiao genuine praise. In a Qi's understanding, only the learned scholars in the village possessed the skill to write, let alone possess the talent to sell paintings for profit like Li Xuanxiao. It's sold for so much money. A Chi muttered, I wonder how many times one would have to work the forge to earn this much. He carefully tucked the money away, ensuring it would not be lost as it had been in the past. A Chi raised his head to look at Li Xuanxiao. Could you teach me how to write? You two little ones, one wants to learn my swordsmanship and the other wants to learn my calligraphy. What else? Li Xuanxiao shook his head. I will not teach you. Do you take me for a village schoolmaster? Li Xuanxiao was about to continue his lecture when Qi interjected, if you teach me, all of my future pastries will be yours to eat. Li Xuanxiao stroked his chin with his fingers, nodding thoughtfully. That is acceptable. The streets were filled with the bustle of passers-by, with various vendors setting up their stalls and the relentless sound of hawkers calling their wares. Chen Shixi looked left and right. Ever since he joined the Qingyun sect, he rarely descended the mountain, and what captured his attention most was a noodle vendor. The man stood before a large pot, holding a pair of long chopsticks, constantly stirring the noodles within. Once cooked, he ladled them into a bowl and added a variety of seasonings. A bowl of fragrant noodles was complete. The strands were thin and long, soft yet chewy. Simply looking at them was enough to make one swallow hard. Chen Shixi pressed his lips together, his throat bobbing as he watched. Once a cultivator breaks through the lower three realms, they enter seclusion, no longer requiring grains or common food to sustain the body. Yet there are still many cultivators who indulge in fine cuisine to satisfy their earthly cravings. Eat a bowl of noodles. The sect master beside him spoke suddenly. Tranthap too was startled. That is unnecessary, thank you. He knew his senior sister had not touched grains or mixed foods for many years. Having been in seclusion for over 2 decades, he certainly could not allow himself to be tempted by mere food. Moreover, this was his first time descending the mountain on a mission with his senior sister. We shall rest here for the night and depart tomorrow. Huh? The moonlight was clear and bright, and it was not yet time for the curfew. Hearing the commotion outside, Tranthap too walked over to the window. He suddenly felt a strong desire to walk outside with his senior sister, but upon reaching the door he hesitated and stopped. His senior sister must surely be cultivating right now. He took a deep breath. Ultimately, he lacked the courage to knock on her door and instead ventured out onto the street alone. Tranthap too wandered the streets before eventually stepping into a shop called Rongbao Zai. Welcome, distinguished guest. Please feel free to browse as you wish. The shopkeeper did not even turn his head, his eyes fixed intently on a landscape painting newly hung upon the wall, admiring it more with every passing moment. He had not returned home for 2 nights, choosing to stay in the shop for fear that the painting might be stolen. His heart was filled with conflict. He wanted to show it off to others, yet he feared that drawing attention to it might invite unwanted trouble. As Tranthap too strolled around the shop, he found nothing that caught his eye. Seeing the shopkeeper's intense focus, he followed the man's gaze. Tranthap too stared fixedly at the painting. Within the Thanvan sect, many of his senior brothers and sisters were masters of calligraphy, capable of creating paintings imbued with spiritual essence, works of incomparable brilliance. He had initially intended to wander about simply to relieve his boredom, but he found himself deeply captivated by this particular piece. He unconsciously held his breath. To behold the painting was to perceive the artist behind it. The one who had painted this possessed an unfathomable depth of cultivation. The shopkeeper could only vaguely perceive the artistic intent within the work, but Tranthap too, being a practitioner, possessed divine sense far beyond that of an ordinary person. Mulance went to draw him deep into its depths. Before his eyes appeared a vast expanse of green mountains and pristine waters, while the melodic, resonant sound of an ancient zither echoed in his ears. It was as if he had fallen into an ancient world, sensing a power that transcended space and time. After a long while, Tranthap too finally regained his senses and said in a low voice, Proprietor, what is the price of this painting? The shopkeeper grinned. So, you also see that, to be perfectly honest with you, everyone who has visited my shop these past few days has said the same thing. Seeing that the other party did not answer his question, Tranthap too continued. How much for this painting? This item is not for sale. Honored guest. My apologies, but I must keep this painting. On one hand, the shopkeeper vaguely sensed that the person who left the painting behind might well be a master. No, that was not right. It was surely some master he simply had yet to hear of. To pass by this place by chance and leave behind such a painting for him. If he were to sell it cheaply, he would regret it for the rest of his life. This is a treasure capable of begetting more wealth. On the other hand, he himself had not yet finished appreciating it. Even if someone offered a high price, he could not bring himself to sell it. Tranthap too furrowed his brows slightly. You who could produce such a precious painting must be someone of great cultivation. He then asked the shopkeeper about the origins of the painting, learning that someone had traded it merely for a pittance of silver. His brows knit together even tighter. Shopkeeper, you name the price, I will not haggle. In Tranthap too's eyes, having this painting in the shopkeeper's hands, at best traded for a few coins, was a profound waste. Honored guest, this painting is truly not for sale, even for 200 taels. The shopkeeper's expression shifted slightly. Although these are prosperous times, a family of 5 only requires about 10 taels of silver for a year of food. While this painting is worthy of admiration, it lacks a signature and a seal. In a small town like this, if he were to sell it for 200 taels, he would certainly be considered mentally unsound. 300 taels? Seeing that the other party remained silent, Tranthap too added another 100 taels. The shopkeeper's lips twitched and his heart began to race. This was merely the instinct of a merchant telling him that as long as he remained silent, the price could climb higher. He struggled to steady his nerves. Honored guest. 400 taels. He deliberately withheld further words. Tranthap too did not hesitate in the slightest. 500 taels. The shopkeeper's inner composure was rattled, and finally he could not restrain himself from speaking. Very well, is it a deal? Is it a deal? However, I have one condition. I wish to attempt it one last time. The shopkeeper in this small city was known for having top-tier calligraphy skills. After a long while, the shopkeeper looked at his own work and could not help but furrow his brows. The discrepancy was simply too great. Chen Shixi did not say a word. He withdrew a brush from the brush case, took a deep breath, placed the tip of the brush against the paper, and began to paint the first stroke. Excellent, excellent, a smile appeared on the shopkeeper's face. In his eyes, these two paintings were barely any different, but in the eyes of Chen Shixi, the two paintings were as different as heaven and earth. After paying the silver with ease, Chen Shixi took the landscape painting and departed. Distinguished guest, your painting. The shopkeeper grabbed the painting Chen Shixi had left behind and chased after him. Chen Shixi waved his hand, speaking indifferently, I give it to you. The shopkeeper stood agape, then joyfully took the painting and returned to his shop. In his eyes, there was fundamentally no difference between the two paintings, and having gained 500 taels of silver as well, it was truly a blessing falling from the heavens. Upon returning to the inn, the more Chen Shixi studied this painting, the more marvelous he found it. He suddenly remembered that senior sister Mozu was very fond of landscape paintings. Her room was filled with many similar works. Chen Shixi's foundation in landscape painting was also taught to him by his senior sister. It appeared the painting had not taken long to complete, and furthermore, it lacked a signature or seal. An audacious and impulsive thought suddenly sprouted in Chen Shixi's mind, driving him to act quickly. Regarding why senior sister Shang Tinsong had originally betrayed the sect, Chen Shixi used the excuse of cultivation to invite his senior sister to his room. He had prepared the painting beforehand, unwrapping it to reveal the Xuan paper inside and spreading it flat across the table. He then deliberately placed the brush and ink beside it, creating the pretense that he had just finished painting it. Chen Shixi felt a bit nervous, yet thinking of the look of praise his senior sister would have upon seeing the painting filled him with anticipation. A long while later, under the intentional guidance of Chen Shixi, Moju's attention was drawn to the painting on the table. Shixi, you have an interest in painting? I was struck by a sudden whim. I was just about to let senior sister take a look. As soon as the words left his lips, Chen Shixi noticed that Moju's expression did not look right. His heart skipped a beat and he was suddenly struck by an ominous premonition. Moju was silent for a moment before asking, where did this painting come from? Chen Shixi dared not lie, truthfully stating that he had purchased it from a store selling the 4 treasures of the study. Mozu stood up abruptly, her wrist glowed, and the bracelet on her hand emitted a brilliant light as it flew out, transforming into a sword. Mozu naturally recognized that this painting belonged to Li Xuanxiao. Her senior brother had once sworn that in this life, he would only pass on the paintings of his master to the world, and the very first painting he ever created was gifted to that demonic cult enchantress. Later, when the demonic cult was eradicated, that enchantress was slain by her senior brother, but the whereabouts of that painting remained unknown. Mozu had never seen that painting before, yet she was aware of the story, and recognizing the brushwork of her senior brother, she immediately suspected that a remnant of the demonic cult had been hiding here. Chen Shixi observed his senior sister's reaction, completely lost, and fearing she had misunderstood something, he hurriedly recounted the entire story from beginning to end, including the origins of the painting as explained by the shopkeeper. Upon hearing Chen Shixi's explanation, Mozu's brow finally smoothed. Her senior brother had been here and had actually sold a painting simply to acquire a bit of coin. One must remember that years ago the eldest princess of Beimang had begged her senior brother for a painting, insisting at the cost of her own life, and even when the emperor of Beimang offered a sky-high price out of love for his daughter, he was flatly refused by her senior brother. Yet now her senior brother had casually given his own artwork to a mere shopkeeper in the city. Her senior brother had changed. He had truly changed so much that she found him almost unrecognizable. Chen Shixi looked at his senior sister's shifting expression, lowered his head in shame, and felt immense regret. Why had he been so possessed as to come up with such a foolish way to win her favor? She must have surely realized that this painting was drawn by someone she knew. He should have considered that possibility sooner. His senior sister had been renowned for a long time. In a place as vast as Jiayu, one capable of producing such a painting could not be an ordinary person. They were likely an acquaintance of hers. Chen Shixi kept his head bowed, wishing he could find a hole to crawl into because of his earlier actions, yet he remained completely unaware that Mozu, standing before him, was not thinking about the incident at all. Mozu only felt that the person she had once been most familiar with was slowly becoming a stranger. Thinking of this, a trace of sorrow welled up in her heart. After a long silence, Mozu averted her gaze from the painting. Since you have obtained this painting, it is your own destiny. Keep it well. Chen Shixi hesitated for a moment. Earlier, his senior sister had clearly asked him if he was the one who drew it. He had even claimed it was just a spur-of-the-moment whim, essentially declaring perhaps one could offer a strained justification for such actions, yet to do so would appear excessively cowardly. Senior sister, who painted this portrait? Your senior brother. Mozu calmly looked at the senior brother. Chen Shixi had many senior brothers, but seeing the expression on senior sister's face, he immediately understood which one she meant. Who else could move senior sister so deeply if not Li Xuanxiao? Staring at the painting, Chen Shixi felt a complex mixture of emotions. How could such a coincidence exist? Rest early. Having said this, Mo Zhu departed from the room. She did not mention a single word regarding his false claim of authorship, as if the matter had never occurred. Chen Shixi breathed a sigh of relief, though his fists tightened involuntarily as his gaze returned to the painting. When he first entered the sect, Li Xuanxiao's cultivation base had already been crippled, so he had only heard legends of senior brother Li from others, let alone ever seeing his calligraphy. Judging by the shopkeeper's tone, Li Xuanxiao had been capable of creating a masterpiece simply by painting on a whim. A sudden impulse rose within him to tear the painting to shreds. It felt as if by doing so he might finally surpass the insurmountable mountain that stood before him. The path was narrow and winding. On both sides lay dense forests and lush green fields. Typically, the village farmers traveled this path between the fields and the village, using handcarts or carrying harvests across this rugged trail. Bringing his bountiful harvest home, Li Xuanxiao led his small, shaggy donkey, walking lightly while humming an out-of-place tune. The young maiden Achi walked ahead, her mind wandering, appearing somewhat homesick. Ling Dao, on the other hand, was restless. One moment she was catching insects, the next she was molding a snowball, her childish nature unable to let herself remain idle. The further they journeyed north, the colder the weather became. Half a month later, snow filled the sky, blanketing the entire earth. The freezing wind howled, the temperature plummeted, and every trace of birds vanished without a whisper into the vast white world. The wooden door swung open from the wind. Li Xuanxiao sat upon a chair as the hearth beside him blazed brightly. Grease sizzled and dripped from the skewers of roasting rabbit meat. The two children sat beside the hearth, warming themselves. Li Xuanxiao held a small jar of wine, his expression serene as the sun dipped low, revealing a vast mountain range in the distance. Fortunately, they had managed to find this wooden cabin. Otherwise, he would not have known where to sleep tonight. Once they crossed these mountains, they would arrive at Xiling. Li Xuanxiao took a deep draught of wine and bit into a piece of meat while Ling Dao looked on with longing. Big brother, let me have a sip as well. Away with you. What business does a child have with wine? Big brother, just look at the others. Ling Daoling stood up once more, boasting that since the age of 5 he had been soaking in wine jars. There was no vintage he hadn't already tasted. So young, yet his talent for deceitful boasting was second to none. Feeling humiliated in front of Achi, Ling Daoling struggled desperately to snatch the wine. Li Xuanxiao held him back with one hand, while with the other he used a branch to sketch in the snow, teaching Achi how to write. Achi sat beside him in silence, his eyes shimmering with a profound sense of longing and curiosity. His small hand gripped the branch tightly, as if grasping the very weight of knowledge. He studied every stroke and character with absolute earnestness, as if etching Li Xuanxiao's teachings into his very soul. Amidst the vast white expanse in the distance, an old man wearing a straw raincoat and a conical hat approached. Achi looked up at the newcomer. For some reason, the sight of this man filled him with a subtle unease. I wonder, might I be permitted to warm myself by your fire? The old man's voice was raspy and weathered. It is no trouble. Li Xuanxiao replied calmly. My thanks. Is your excellency heading towards Xiling? The old man asked. The old man glanced at Achi, who was sitting beside Li Xuanxiao. Does your excellency know of Zhao Lingxuan, the man who once held the most renowned legacy of Longhu Mountain? Achi's brow furrowed slightly as he silently ceased his movements. I do not. Perhaps you could enlighten me? Li Xuanxiao seemed to take an interest in the tale. That Zhao Lingxuan was a mere mortal who had yet to step onto the path of cultivation even in his 30s. Had it not been for his father connections, he never would have attained his position at Longhu Mountain. He spent his days in idle debauchery and sloth. No one spared him a second glance, nor did anyone suspect he was a late-blooming genius. Despite his standing at Longhu Mountain, he wielded the 12 Longhu talismans, sweeping away the demons beyond the northern pass. He expanded his circle of followers and established his own prestigious estate, accomplishing feats that even the celestial masters of Longhu Mountain throughout the generations could not achieve. All of it was his doing. He achieved the impossible, but as the saying goes, excess in all things brings misfortune. His existence did not only threaten the demons of the northern pass, even Longhu Mountain grew resentful of him, ultimately plotting to eliminate him. Longhu Sun's artistic legacy was originally established by the sect itself to address a shortage of manpower. Yet over time this place overshadowed the very reputation of Longhu Sun. People knew of Zhao Lingxuan but knew not of Longhu Sun. The demons beyond the pass could not tolerate him, and Longhu Sun could not tolerate him either. How could a man such as this possibly survive? In the end, with the tacit consent of Longhu Sun, the demons beyond the pass joined forces to execute Zhao Lingxuan. Furthermore, the demons swore a collective oath. Should any descendant of the Zhao family ever appear again, the demons beyond the pass would spare no cost to eliminate him. The elderly man wearing the conical hat paused before continuing. In truth, the entire Zhao family was slaughtered at that time. Only his youngest daughter was fortunate enough to survive, taken in by a reclusive senior cultivator. It was only then that the demons dared not act rashly. Ling Daoling looked left and right, then back at him, keenly sensing the shifting atmosphere. He gripped his sword tightly as Li Xuanxiao took another gulp of wine, a life of heroic spirit, yet it met such an end. What a pity, such a pity. The old man laughed heartily. That Zhao Lingxuan always used to say, I have not won against the righteous path, but what of it in the end? If your excellency has no ties to that Zhao Lingxuan, and are merely acting upon the commission of another, without truly knowing the origin of this tale, perhaps you should simply hand the girl over. What do you think? Li Xuanxiao scratched his head. Oh dear, how should I handle this? The demons beyond the past truly make one feel uneasy. The old man frowned deeply. Why did he detect a hint of mockery in the other's voice? A moment later, a massive black shadow rose from the ground. The young man who had been sitting on the ground sprang up, launching himself into the air toward his opponent. The bamboo sword at his waist slashed downward. With a single strike, he hammered the massive black shadow back into the earth. Before even a breath had passed, Li Xuanxiao's figure returned to the ground. He caught the wine flask that had fallen from his hand before it even touched the soil. Before them lay a colossal black python, its body coiled and pressed against the earth. Its scales shimmered like obsidian, and its eyes flickered with a cold light, exuding. Fresh blood poured from its black scale-like armor, and a pungent metallic stench quickly filled the air. Ling Doling and Qi stood frozen in astonishment, staring at a python that dwarfed every other serpent they had seen in their entire lives combined. In contrast, the small donkey watched on with complete composure. Logically, a beast lacking in intelligence should have been terrified, fleeing in a chaotic panic driven by primal instinct. Even when they encountered the six-winged golden rock previously, the little donkey had remained just as calm, grazing by the roadside. Li Xuanxiao sheathed his bamboo sword back at his waist, casting a distracted glance at the colossal python writhing on the ground. The old man revealed his true form, lying prostrate on the earth while his body spasmed uncontrollably. The mere mention of this sword spoke volumes. He cast a glance at the ordinary bamboo sword the other had wielded moments ago. His own 500 years of cultivation were not even the match of a bamboo blade in the hands of his opponent. It seemed that only when he attained the Tao would he possess the strength to fight even a single battle. I was blind to the presence of an expert. Please, pass word to the spirits beyond the borders that this young girl is under my protection. The python's pupils rolled, sensing from the other's tone that there might still be a path to survival. A moment later, the python vanished from the mountain range, its massive body quickly sinking into the earth to make its escape. Li Xuanxiao placed his hands on his hips and stood before the two children with a smug expression, as if to say, "Impressive, is it not? Why are you staring so blankly? Hurry up and praise my handsomeness." Qi looked at him, remaining motionless and intentionally keeping silent. Li Xuanxiao lifted his head. Hearing no praise, he furrowed his brows and added, "It was very impressive." Qi then spoke, "Is there nothing else?" Qi pondered for a moment, "Is that all? Very impressive? Are there no other words?" Li Xuanxiao frowned, looking in the direction where the giant python had fled, wondering to himself if he should hunt it down. Having given these two children quite a scare, Qi watched Li Xuanxiao's demeanor, and instinctively recalled the words Ti Niu had once told her. Li Xuanxiao is very humble. He is never prideful despite his formidable strength. Qi shook her head. Ti Niu lied. Xuanxiao is not humble in the slightest. He is actually quite fond of showing off. Ling Doling clapped his hands excitedly. Big brother, if I train hard in swordsmanship, will I be as formidable as you?" Li Xuanxiao smiled with confidence, perhaps, though it depends on your innate talent. After all, there are not many as formidable as your big brother here. Ling Doling put on a thoughtful expression and muttered to himself, if someone as foolish as Big Brother still had to train for so long, if I were to train, wouldn't I become formidable much faster? Li Xuanxiao gave him a light rap on the head. What is this brat babbling about? The Great Yi and Westling dynasties were adjacent to one another, and it was inevitable that the two nations would encounter friction, frequently igniting battles of significant scale. Eventually, the Mingguan was established as a boundary, known as the region beyond the pass where none hold jurisdiction. Since the two nations were no longer adjacent, the pervasive tension finally began to subside. At this moment, in a grand tavern within Fuan City, the sound of drums and gongs erupted, shaking the tavern that had remained silent all day. As night fell, it was suddenly ablaze with lanterns. The five-colored lights shimmered, illuminating the tavern as if it were broad daylight. The main hall of the tavern was filled with an intoxicating fragrance, the aroma of the food enough to make one's mouth water. The tavern seemed to awaken from a long slumber, now bursting with vitality and vigor. A waiter was busy cleaning the bowls and chopsticks, preparing to welcome the evening guests. Soon enough, the guests began to arrive. The first to enter was a beautiful lady. Her gait was graceful as a bird taking flight, her steps light as she moved with a willow-like elegance. A small figure scurried by. It was a two-headed ginseng spirit, possessing a clumsy yet peculiar posture, accompanied by a mountain-crushing two-legged beast and a red-faced wolf demon of adorable appearance. Looking closely, one could see white tigers, wild dogs, fox demons, snake spirits, and various other monsters and ghouls from beyond the pass gathering here. The tavern's main hall was exceptionally raucous, filled with a cacophony of sounds as one demon loudly proclaimed, "Our master was also present when the oath was sworn all those years ago. That Zhao Lingchuan tormented our kind relentlessly. Now that his daughter has appeared, how can we possibly allow her to survive? Indeed, hand that girl over to me. We must make her wish for death, making her suffer until she can neither live nor perish. Give me a turn at her." As it turned out, the demons had gathered here today to conspire against the descendant of Zhao Lingchuan. The demons drank their wine and feasted while shouting clamorously, burning with indignation. An elderly man sat in the midst of the crowd, his legs trembling as he remained silent. A young man dressed as a scholar stepped forward, gesturing for the demons to fall silent. "Gentlemen, the blood feud between Zhao Lingchuan and us is as deep as the sea. We swore a blood oath together to see his very bones turn to ash. Now his own flesh and blood has appeared and even intends to join Long Hu Shan. Do they truly believe that we, the demons beyond the pass, are already dead? A single statement stirred the crowd into a frenzy. That is right, no matter who they are, kill them all. If Long Hushan is truly pulling the strings behind this, we shall turn the 3 provinces of Xiling and the regions beyond the pass into mountains of corpses and rivers of blood. This was no idle boast. 100 years ago, the demon forces beyond the pass were immensely powerful, wedged between the factions of Xiling and the Great Empire, with both sides desperately seeking to recruit them. The demons beyond the pass grew increasingly arrogant, regarding human lives as mere blades of grass, killing as they pleased, breaking into homes with impunity, even executing the local magistrate without hesitation. Some have even seized entire cities, establishing themselves as the sole masters. Although the demons beyond the pass have become much more reserved of late, if they truly decide to turn against Longhu Mountain, they could poison the water sources or unleash plagues to breach the embankments. These treacherous schemes, every single one of them, would be devastatingly effective. I suspect there is a greater power orchestrating this from the shadows. Perhaps it is time we deal with that mastermind as well. I agree. If we do not show them the consequences of their actions, they will surely forget our formidable reputation. The old man lowered his head to drink, but as he recalled the man holding the bamboo sword, a cold sweat broke out across his back. At this moment, the scholarly young master stood before the demons and spoke. Brother Liu, your Liu clan possesses the swiftest intelligence network. I hear you have already crossed blades with that escort. Why not share the experience with everyone? The gazes of all the demons immediately converged upon the old man. The old man offered a bitter smile, licked his lips, and rose with a complex expression. Old Liu, who exactly is that escort? A burly demon, growing impatient with the other's hesitation, asked, could it be a great Luo immortal? No sooner had he finished speaking than the demons erupted in laughter, yet the old man could not bring himself to join them. At that time he did not know the identity of his, but after inquiring in many places, he eventually confirmed the truth. To have exchanged a single blow with that person and emerged alive, there is no need for further explanation. That alone is enough to boast of with absolute confidence. Li Xuanxiao of the Qingyun sect. As the name was spoken, a deathly silence fell over the room. Who is Li Xuanxiao? Then, the expressions of the demons shifted into suspicion. The absurdity of this situation was akin to 2 underground gangs clashing where one side seeks reinforcements. The other side asks who was invited to prepare a countermeasure, only to learn that the opponent had invited the emperor himself to assist. The demons stared at one another, casting bewildered glances back and forth. Li Xuanxiao? Are you referring to Li Xuanxiao of the Qingyun sect? One demon asked, unable to believe the claim. Just how many Li Xuanxiaos are there in the Qingyun sect? The old man retorted. A man slammed his hand against the table and stood up, his body reeking of alcohol. He had clearly consumed far too much. 30 years ago, Xuanxiao's cultivation was crippled. With his cultivation destroyed, even if he has recovered from his wounds, if we all rush him together, he cannot possibly kill us all. The demon stared at the speaker as if looking at a fool. Do you not hear what you are saying? What kind of character is that Li Xuanxiao? To a man like him, demons from beyond the borders are likely not even worth a glance. What of the demonic sect of those years? A single demonic sect celestial master was enough to unify all the demons beyond the borders. In their eyes, a celestial master is a lofty, untouchable figure, yet in the demonic sect they were nothing. At that time, Li Xuanxiao stood alone with a single sword, fighting a bloody battle against the demonic sect. Of the 8 great protectors, 6 were slain, dying by his blade. Figures like the celestial masters were too numerous to count. It is said that when a tiger falls to the plains, it is bullied by dogs, yet these creatures are not even the equal of dogs. At best, they are merely a group of insects gathered together. Elder Liu, is this story true? The young scholar asked with a skeptical expression. It was not that he doubted the other party, but rather that the story seemed far too absurd. The old man nodded, then cupped his hands and departed the tavern without another word. The demons present were now all contemplating retreat. Since the enemy has found such an heaven-defying figure, to persist would be to lack self-awareness. It would clearly be courting death. But at this very moment, a laugh rang out. It was incredibly piercing, like a sharp blade stabbing directly into the ears of the demons present. The laughter came from a tall, imposing man. His laughter immediately drew the attention of every demon present. You stranger, what are you laughing at? The tall man spoke. I am laughing at you, demons from beyond the borders, for being as cowardly as mice, only capable of bullying the weak and fearing the strong, terrified out of your wits the moment you hear a name of minor renown. What did you say? You have quite the audacity. Today I will cut out your tongue. Hearing these words, the demons were instantly incensed. If they could not provoke that Li Xuanxiao, did they have to fear the likes of him? A moment later, those present stood rooted to the spot as if struck on the head by a heavy club. The terrifying aura radiating from the tall man caused the clamoring demons to fall into an immediate deathly silence. Everyone, allow me to make an introduction. The scholarly young master gestured and said, this is Zhang Tiansong, Sect Master Zhang Tiansong, a traitorous disciple of the Qingyun sect. Zhang Tiansong was originally a disciple of the Silver Sword Peak, but since his youth, he possessed a volatile temperament and frequently disregarded the sect's rules, stirring up constant trouble. Not many years after he was admitted into the sect, Zhang Tiansong committed the heinous crime of violating a fellow female disciple. For the sake of the sect's reputation, and unable to bear casting aside a disciple with such exceptional talent, the leadership chose to intervene. They quietly resolved the incident for Zhang Tiansong. and thereafter every time he caused trouble, the Qingyun sect would step in to clean up his mess. Once while on a mission with his fellow disciples, he unexpectedly discovered a rare treasure and sought to prevent the other disciples from reporting it. According to the rules, any treasure obtained during a mission must be surrendered to the sect. Driven by greed to possess the artifact, Zhang Tiansong slaughtered all the disciples who were on the mission with him. Upon returning to the Qingyun sect, he lied, claiming they were attacked by fierce beasts, and that the other disciples had been severely wounded or had gone missing. However, his actions were not meticulous enough. The discipline hall quickly uncovered evidence of his massacre of fellow disciples, and even his own master could no longer protect him. Consequently, Zhang Tiansong was forced to flee the Qingyun sect and was subsequently placed on their most wanted list. Though his reputation is foul, his strength is beyond dispute. Having reached the sixth realm, manifesting a nascent soul from his primal essence, he is a being capable of establishing his own sect. Therefore, it is not incorrect for the scholarly young master to address him as Sect Master Jiang. To call you all cowards is giving you far too much credit. And what if Li Xuanxiao's reputation is grand? I have long desired to test my skills against him. Zhang Tiansong glanced at the gathered demons, his expression filled with disdain. Leave the task of killing Li Xuanxiao to me. You need only stand back and watch. The demons stared at him in unison. Zhang Tiansong wore an arrogant expression, appearing to hold the one known as the leader of the Sword Dao in no regard at all. Naturally, Zhang Tiansong had his own calculations. He is currently being hunted relentlessly by the Qingyun sect, with nowhere to turn, having barely managed to escape beyond the pass, yet he lacks a foothold. Killing Li Xuanxiao would solve this. Firstly, it would serve as revenge against the Qingyun sect. After all, even if Li Xuanxiao's cultivation has been crippled, his fame still echoes across the world. Everyone under the heavens knows of the Qingyun sect Li Xuanxiao. Slaying Li Xuanxiao would be nothing less than a direct slap to the face of the Qingyun sect, serving both as an act of vengeance and a tribute to prove my loyalty to my backer. The remnants of the demonic cult, as the world calls them, have now become my final sanctuary. More importantly, in the eyes of outsiders, the reports regarding Li Xuanxiao's cultivation being crippled remain a mix of truth and rumor. After all, since annihilating the demonic cult, Li Xuanxiao had not stepped foot off the mountain for 30 years. Zhang Tiansong is an intersect disciple of the Qingyun sect. Having gained deeper access to the sect's internal affairs, he knows that the relationship between the Silver Sword Peak and the Heaven-Reaching Peak, two of the 7 peaks of the Qingyun sect, has always been cordial. Naturally, Shansong is well aware of Li Xuanxiao's true situation, that Li Xuanxiao has long since become a cripple, his body tainted by demonic souls, and is now considered an omen of misfortune. Even before he left the sect, the elders were already dissatisfied with him. Surely, he must have been expelled by now. It is the perfect opportunity for me to reap the benefits at the frontier pass. The Hengduan Canyon is the only path from the exterior to Ziling. The demonic beasts from beyond the pass have long since laid an ambush here. Though their bloodlust is high, no one dares to be the first to charge. What kind of character is Li Xuanxiao? Even if he were a dying tiger, not everyone dares to provoke him. Yet now a traitorous disciple of the Qingyun sect is willing to take the lead, and he speaks with absolute conviction. Zhang Tiansong stood atop the mountain peak, surveying the magnificent panorama of the canyon. The mountain range stretched endlessly, the gorge plunging into depth so vast the peaks coiled like a colossal slumbering dragon. The river within the canyon surged violently, its churning white foam creating a sound like a thunderous roar. Zhang Tiansong drew a deep breath. The spiritual energy within the canyon was incredibly dense. This is precisely why the lands beyond the pass are home to so many demons and monsters. Today, right here in this place, I shall strike Li Xuanxiao down. To say I am not nervous would be a lie. Although Zhang Tiansong had personally witnessed Li Xuanxiao's cultivation being crippled, and saw him defeated on the arena floor by a practitioner of the lower 3 realms, he also vividly remembered the man before he was even 20 years old, wielding the Qingyun sword to single-handedly eradicate the demonic forces. When all is said and done, he and Li Xuanxiao share a history. He had caught a glimpse of him the very day Li Xuanxiao first entered the sect. Li Xuanxiao's father had been so exhausted from climbing the long stairs of the Qingyun sect that he could barely draw a breath. Although Zhang Tiansong was also a new initiate at the time, he was born into a family of cultivators and had trained from childhood, leading him to look down upon mortals. It is just that Zhang Tiansong could never have imagined, all those years ago, that the boy of that day would become the most dazzling existence. The wind blew ceaselessly through the canyon, creating wails like the cries of ghosts and wolves in the distance, as several figures began to enter the gorge. Big brother, the story about the halberd expert and Yanqing is not interesting at all. Tell us a different one. Li Xuanxiao held a blade of weeds between his teeth, his eyelids lifting slightly as he gazed toward the canyon ahead, the corner of his mouth curving into a faint smile. What kind of story do you want to hear? I want to hear a love story. Ling Doling remarked. A little brat whose hair hasn't even fully grown yet, what could you possibly know about love? A Qi who was walking in front suddenly turned his head. A Qi wants to hear Xuanxiao's love story. Ling Doling nodded. I want to hear it too, I want to hear it. A flash passed through Li Xuanxiao's eyes and the smile on his lips slowly faded as if he were recalling a distant memory. I am a swordsman. A swordsman does not need women, only his sword. Behind the small donkey trailed a 2-wheeled cart piled high with bags of dried tea. A man smoking a pipe and a young man walked alongside the cart. The two were father and son. Li Xuanxiao had met them on the road after their donkey had gone astray. The old man intended to take his son to Xiling to sell all this tea and use the money to pay for his wedding. Thus, Li Xuanxiao decided to accompany them for a stretch of the journey. Li Xuanxiao ate some of the sausage that the old man's family had dried themselves. Fearing that the two children would keep pestering him for love stories, Li Xuanxiao took the initiative to strike up a conversation with the old man. If you can take your goods to Xiling to exchange for coin, why do others not do the same? The old man slowly exhaled a cloud of smoke. Everyone knows it can be exchanged for money. While Xiling and Day have not been at war these past few years, these borderlands remain treacherous. Demons and malevolent spirits run rampant. If it were not for the desire to secure a wife for my son, I would not dare to risk this journey, even in the face of death. After speaking, the old man looked at Li Xuanxiao again. Young man, what is your purpose in bringing these two children on such a journey? I am fulfilling a friend's request to take them to school. School is good, school is good. The old man nodded. As the group walked and conversed, they entered the depths of the canyon without realizing it. Zhang Tiansong stood atop the mountain peak, watching the silhouettes below. A smile played on his lips, for they were so close, yet the target remained completely unaware. However, the appearance of the father and son had caught Zhang Tiansong's attention. But after confirming that they were merely ordinary people, the weight in his heart finally settled. Once he finished killing Li Xuanxiao, these borderland demons would serve as his witnesses. At that time, he offered Li Xuanxiao's head to the demonic sect in exchange for a 7th realm breakthrough pill. Tiansong entered the 6th realm at the age of 30, but had remained stagnant for half his life since, unable to achieve any true breakthrough. He had already consumed 2 breakthrough pills, yet the effects were negligible. The 7th realm breakthrough pill held by the demonic sect was rumored to have been left behind by the sect's second elder after he surpassed his own bottleneck years ago. The gazes of the gathered monsters converged upon those within the canyon. Who among them is Li Xuanxiao? Is it that old man smoking from a pipe? Or perhaps the young man wearing a hat, or the one chewing on a blade of grass? Surely it could not be those two children? He was a figure who once shook the very heavens and earth. A single stomp of his foot was enough to make the world tremble 3 times over. Such a legendary figure was enough to pique their curiosity. They longed to see him with their own eyes. Hung Tiansong let out a cold snort, his aura swelling continuously, like a climber whose cultivation had previously been suppressed. The 3rd realm, he surged upward, passing the 4th realm, reaching the peak of the 6th. To evade pursuit, Hung Tianzong had not exerted his power to its peak in a long time. Even though he was certain that Li Xuanxiao was nothing more than a piece of trash, he dared not lower his guard. Feeling the boundless power surging through his body, it seemed as if everything had become effortless. The blood in his veins was boiling, and every meridian was pulsing with excitement. The monsters felt this power simultaneously. Realizing Hung Tiansong was about to strike, they could not help but feel a sense of dread. He was just about to shout the name, when the traitorous disciples of the Qingyun sect, who had been so confident in their own strength, suddenly stiffened, the murderous intent in their eyes rapidly dissipating, replaced by a flicker of bewilderment. Do not provoke me. A familiar yet strangely distant figure stood before him. That person stood with hands on his hips, a faint indifferent smile upon his face. Hung Tiansong stepped back, his life essence erupting, muscles coiled tight. He poured all his strength into his fist, his blood boiling as if it were about to burst forth. His fist carved an arc through the air, accompanied by a whistling wind as it lunged toward his opponent's chest. In close quarters combat, no Dharma treasure was as effective as one's own fist. When Li Xuanxiao appeared before him, Hung Tiansong sensed that something was amiss, yet he still harbored a shred of delusional hope. With the outer border monsters present and his own cultivation at the 6th realm, he convinced himself that Li Xuanxiao must have long since become a cripple. Vahan suddenly fell silent as the bamboo sword slowly pierced through Hung Tiansong's heart. It is true that my cultivation base has been crippled and I am indeed weaker than before, but I am certainly not weaker than you. As Li Xuanxiao drove that ordinary bamboo sword into Hung Tiansong's body, the battle reached its conclusion. Sharp sword intent erupted, instantly obliterating his heart. The 6th realm is divided into 3 stages: the spirit platform, the primordial embryo, and the transformation into a nascent soul. The spirit platform is formed, and the primordial embryo refines into a nascent soul. Zhang Tiansong had already reached the peak of the 6th realm years ago, having successfully condensed his nascent soul. True to the saying, the primordial ocean surges to nurture the spirit platform, upon which the primordial embryo gathers Tao light, tempered by lightning, to form the nascent soul. Theoretically, even with his heart destroyed, Zhang Tiansong should not have perished immediately. Yet Li Xuanxiao had poured every shred of his remaining sword intent into that strike, granting his opponent no opportunity to resist. After the sword intent tore through Zhang Tiansong's body, save for a small portion that had dissipated, the entirety of the remaining sword intent was reabsorbed by Li Xuanxiao. A swordsman's sword intent is not inexhaustible. It requires day and night of arduous training to cultivate even a sliver, and once spent, it is lost forever. Li Xuanxiao brushed the dust from his knees and let out a quiet sigh. It was truly not like the days of old. Zhang Tiansong's body collapsed. Drawing its final breath, his nascent soul was destroyed, and not even the great Luo immortals could save him now. Li Xuanxiao withdrew his bamboo sword and scanned his surroundings, causing the gathered figures to scatter and flee in terror. At that moment, the demon spirits from beyond the border had only one thought in mind, while simultaneously cursing Zhang Tiansong's ancestors to the 8th generation. That man Qiansong, that arrogant fool, boasted to the heavens, calling the demon spirits from beyond the border mere insignificant insects, claiming Li Xuanxiao was nothing to fear, and promising he would personally take Li Xuanxiao's head. Damn it, we were truly brainless to have placed our faith in that bastard. After that single strike, Li Xuanxiao watched the demon spirits flee in disarray, choosing not to pursue them further. His wounds were yet to fully heal, his foundation remained damaged, and his remaining sword intent was scarce. He had to reserve his strength for more critical moments. A short later, Li Xuanxiao's silhouette reappeared within the canyon. Upon seeing him return from afar, Ling Dao asked, "I wish to accompany you as well." Li Xuanxiao, in a fit of annoyance, delivered a swift kick to the lad. "Good heavens, big brother, stop kicking. My backside is practically bruised to the bone." Ling Doling clutched his buttocks and scurried away in a hurry. The old man, puffing on his pipe while gazing into the burning campfire, spoke in a low voice, "I only hope this journey remains uneventful. Let us pray we do not encounter any demons or malevolent spirits." Li Xuanxiao, resting his head on his interlocked fingers, tilted his head to tease the old man's son sitting nearby. "Once we reach Xiling and trade for money, what kind of wife do you intend to marry?" The young man chuckled, looking bashful. "Is it Ling from the east side of the village?" Qingran nodded, his face turning an even deeper shade of embarrassment. Ling has dark sun-kissed skin and a slender frame, but she is quite shapely. Whenever she bent over to work the fields, he could never help but steal a glance. They were childhood sweethearts who had grown up together. Once they reached the age of marriage, he had pestered his father to find a matchmaker and propose. Because his family was poor and lacked the means for a dowry, he had no choice but to travel to Xiling to earn the silver. Before he left, Ling had clutched his sleeve, unable to bear the parting, terrified that her beloved would never return. "I imagine Ling stands at the edge of the village every single day, keeping a vigil for her beloved," Li Xuanxiao teased, causing the young man's sun-bronzed face to flush red. "That is truly wonderful." Li Xuanxiao sighed with sincere sentiment. 5 days later, Li Xuanxiao's party emerged from the canyon and reached Cao City, the province closest to the frontier of Jiling. After resting for the night, the old man and his son took their leave. They had to hurry to sell their tea, for if it sat too long, it would lose its value. The young man gifted Li Xuanxiao half a bag of tea as a token of gratitude for the journey. The old man's lips twitched and his expression darkened as he cast a sidelong glance at his son, clearly pained by the loss of the tea. He peered at Li Xuanxiao with calculating eyes, waiting for him to offer a polite refusal so he might seize the chance to reclaim the tea. "My thanks, I shall not stand on ceremony." Li Xuanxiao accepted the tea with a faint smile, causing the old man's face to turn even sourer, a few dark veins of frustration bulging on his forehead. Before they parted ways, Li Xuanxiao unfastened the bamboo sword from his waist. "I will not take your tea for nothing. Consider this blade a return gift." Li Xuanxiao handed the bamboo sword to the young man. "It has not been with me for long, yet it possesses a trace of spiritual energy. Common demons and malevolent spirits will not dare to approach you while you carry it." The old man furrowed his brows, utterly unable to comprehend why the other party would spout such nonsensical words. Had the stranger been a Taoist priest or a monk, such talk might not have seemed so peculiar. Furthermore, throughout the entire journey, the man had shown no signs of extraordinary ability. Being so young and his words carrying no weight, the old man's son stood stunned for a moment before solemnly accepting the bamboo sword. Once they had traveled some distance, the old man could not help but scold, "You little fool. To trade half a bag of tea for a mere bamboo sword." The young man scratched his head and replied, "Father, that man did not appear to be an ordinary person. Why would you say that? Just look, he dared to lead 2 children from the south, traveling all the way past the border to reach this place. They have journeyed all the way to Xiling for such a long time without meeting a single mishap. Could someone like that truly be an ordinary mortal?" The young man added, "All the storybooks are written in just such a manner." The old man snorted in disdain. 5 days later, the father and son left Xiling in their donkey cart, heading toward the lands beyond the border. This time, not only had they sold the tea for a handsome profit, but they had also acquired a donkey at a bargain price. The two were beaming with joy when the skies suddenly opened, pouring down rain in torrents. Hurriedly, the father and son drove the cart into a dilapidated temple to seek shelter. "This old one is too withered, his flesh will surely taste bitter. That young one will do nicely, we shall take half each." Hidden from where the father and son could see, 2 hungry ghosts lurking within the clay statue were already plotting how to divide their prey. The donkey nearby seemed to sense something. It let out a terrified bray, causing the old man to shiver involuntarily. A bone-chilling cold permeated the air, and the donkey stomped its hooves against the ground, emitting sounds of pure terror. In the dead of night, flashes of lightning illuminated the old man's pale face, and a sudden sense of unease welled up within his heart. With throats twitching, the 2 hungry ghosts stared hungrily at the pathetic pair, who remained completely oblivious. They crept slowly toward the father, the son, and the donkey, their eyes glinting with a malevolent light. The old man's eyes suddenly widened. Though he could not see the spirits, he could feel something approaching. Goosebumps broke out across his entire body. Lost in his dreams, the young man was envisioning his wedding night with Ling looking at him shyly, and he could not help but grin foolishly. It was his father's panicked shout that jolted him awake. Over these past few days, he had wondered if this bamboo sword truly possessed miraculous properties. Even though the weather was bitingly cold, he had not felt the chill at all while carrying the bamboo sword at his waist. Instinctively, the young man reached for the bamboo sword at his hip. "Father, nothing is the matter." Outside the temple, thunder continued to roar, but the fire had fallen silent. The old man broke into a cold sweat, his eyes darting around in terror, yet he found nothing. The suffocating pressure that had felt like a blade against his throat had vanished. The old man patted his own cheeks, glancing at the clay statue in the temple, then at his son, before his gaze finally settled on the Qingzhou sword at his side. "Father, what is wrong? Did you have a nightmare?" "No, it is nothing. Go back to sleep." The next day, the rain cleared and the father and son led their donkey away from the dilapidated temple. Neither of them noticed that inside the ruined temple, the clay statue had begun to develop fine cracks. The two evil spirits that had been parasitizing within were long since slain, forming the path to Xiling, the territory of Longhu Mountain, the Celestial Master's Diodou office, and the end of the Taoist path. "Taoist Chen, please take a seat." Lu Dojian of Cao City raised his wine cup and Moju and Chen Shixi raised theirs in return. Inside the cup was not ordinary wine but spirit nectar. Highly beneficial to cultivators, Lu Duijin set his cup down, wondering how many representatives the Qingyun sect would eventually send. Mozu replied indifferently, "There are only the two of us." Lu Dujian was well aware of the true strength of Zhong Tiansong. Since the opponent had arrived outside the pass, he had caused Lu no small amount of trouble. Several attempts to surround and eliminate him had ended in failure. And now the Qingyun sect had sent only 2 disciples. Chen Shixi noticed the other skepticism and spoke with a composed tone. "With my senior sister here, you may rest assured. Zhang Tiansong is nothing to be concerned about." Lu Dujin nodded awkwardly. The Qingyun sect is peerless under the heavens. Who does not know this? Who has not heard of it? Pausing there, Lu Dujin hesitated for a moment. "It is not that I intentionally pry, but I inadvertently learned that the true person Li of the Qingyun sect had appeared in Cao City, so I had assumed true person Li would be coming in person." Chen Shixi remained silent, staring intently at his counterpart, who clearly did not know when to hold his tongue. Moju's face turned cold as ice, and seeing this, Lu Dojian hurriedly explained, "Naturally, it is not that I do not trust the two of you, it is just that true person Li would not come in person for a mere Zhang Tiansong." Correction to line 98 mapping. It is impossible for them to come in person for a mere Zhang Tiansong. Lu Dujian swallowed hard, realizing he had spoken out of turn, and hurriedly punished himself with 3 cups of wine. At that moment, a Longhu Mountain bailiff. "What is the meaning of this?" Lu Dojian instinctively looked toward Moju and the two, Chen Shixi, only to see the same bewildered expressions on their faces. Not long after, the corpse of Zhang Tiansong was carried into the supervisor's mansion. The body remained perfectly intact. Ordinarily, when a life ends, the light goes out, and given its location deep in the mountains, it should have been long devoured by demons and ghouls. After all, a cultivator of the 6th realm is no ordinary corpse. To the demons, spirits, and beasts of the mountain, such a body is no different from a precious treasure. Yet Zhang Tiansong's remains had been lying in the ravine for several days, still completely unscathed. The reason was the lingering razor-sharp sword left upon the corpse, which forbade any monster from stepping even half a step closer. Lu Dujian furrowed his brows tightly, observing the sword marks on his palm. The sword Shika was truly formidable. He himself possessed the aura of dragon and tiger, serving as the local supervisor of Mount Longhu, tasked with guarding the city. His own cultivation was naturally far from weak, yet this residual sword chi, though appearing fragile, like a candle flickering in the wind, felt like bone-piercing poison the moment it made contact with his body. Just as he was deep in thought, he saw Moju of the Qingyun sect use a mystical technique to lift Zhang Tiansong's body. "This man was killed by my senior brother. I must return his remains to the Qingyun sect. Pardon me for the intrusion." Having spoken, she did not wait for Lu Dujian's reply and vanished from the hall. Shixi stood dazed for a moment before rushing after his senior sister. Moju bowed her head slightly, the corners of her mouth curling into a faint smile. That smile was like the first ray of dawn, warm and gentle as if it could disperse all gloom, or like the first cherry blossom blooming at the arrival of spring, exquisite and heart-stirring. Chen Shixi was inadvertently stunned. His senior sister was smiling. The senior sister, who was always dubbed the Ice Mountain by the disciples of the sect, had actually smiled. In Chen Shixi's memories, his senior sister's smile was truly precious and unforgettable. Whenever he thought of her, a deep sense of nostalgia and longing would always well up in his heart. Yet, no matter how hard he tried, he could never quite describe the exact image of that smile. "Senior sister, it is nothing. Let us go." Moju retracted her smile. After realizing that Zhang Tiansong had been slain by her senior brother Lu Xuan, she understood everything. It turned out that her senior brother had not changed at all. Her senior brother had never abandoned the Qingyun sect. Chen Shixi had received the token left by his senior brother, and though he and Mozu had both been uncertain as to its purpose, she now understood that it had been left intentionally by her senior brother. Her senior brother had never been one to easily leave behind items. Why would he sell himself to work for a shopkeeper for a mere pittance of silver? It is certain that senior brother had calculated beforehand that Tranthap II would arrive at that shop. Finally, I received senior brother's protective talisman. Tranthap II is the disciple with the greatest natural talent on Thongthian Peak besides senior brother, and senior brother intends to nurture him. Furthermore, senior brother slew Hung Thien Tong for colluding with the demons beyond the pass to prevent Tranthap II from facing danger alone. Senior brother has truly exhausted his efforts for our sake. Upon realizing the truth, knowing that senior brother is still silently protecting Thong Thien Peak, Mac Truck lowered her eyes, a warm sensation rising within her heart. At this moment, Mac Truck suddenly glanced at Tran Thap Tu, and after a moment of hesitation, she recounted the entire situation to him. In the past, whenever senior brother acted, he never sought any reward, to the extent that those who were helped in the shadows ultimately never knew it was senior brother who had assisted them. Since senior brother met with misfortune, have we ever seen these people show any gratitude toward him? Naturally, among them there is no lack of ungrateful wretches like Nin An. After hearing the senior sister's explanation, Tran Thap Tu remained silent for a while before looking into her expectant eyes and responding, "Senior sister, rest assured, Thap Tu will carve senior brother's kindness into his heart." Mac Truck nodded in approval. Li Xuanxiao rubbed his nose and muttered, "Who keeps mentioning me? The first time someone thinks of you, the second time they curse you, and the third time they mention you. You sneeze twice. It is not that someone is thinking of you, but rather someone is cursing you." Lin Daolin spoke thus. Li Xuanxiao kicked him in the rear. Lin Daolin was already accustomed to clutching his backside and running ahead. Big brother, look at that tallest peak. Is that Long Ho Mountain?" Ling Daolin pointed at the majestic mountain ahead and said excitedly, "Yes, that is correct." Li Xuanxiao nodded. He had visited Long Ho Mountain once many years ago, and he had not yet forgotten it. That bowed her head, walking slowly behind, clearly in a somber mood. "What is the matter?" Li Xuanxiao's large hand suddenly rested upon the young girl's head. That looked up, her large teary eyes darting around before glancing at Lin Daolin in front. That does not want to go to Long Ho Mountain. After delivering Lin Daolin to Long Ho Mountain, that wishes to follow you. My fate is like the wind, destined to wander for a lifetime. Why would you follow me? That said nothing. Her father was Triu Ling Shuyan, and the entire Triu family was massacred by the collusion of ill-intentioned figures at Long Ho Mountain and the demons beyond the pass. Now she must travel to Long Ho Mountain to seek a master and learn the arts. As if he had already divined the thoughts swirling within the young girl's heart, Li Xuanxiao stroked her hair. "In this world, where is there truly so much justice and fairness to be found? If you desire justice and righteousness, you must go and seize it for yourself, learn the arts from your enemies, then exact your vengeance. There is nothing more glorious than that." Chi blinked, her lips pouting slightly. "The people of Long Hu Mountain are no fools. Why would they ever teach the child of their enemy?" Li Xuanxiao replied, "I understand Long Hu Mountain quite well. They do not choose wicked men, and by no means are all the Taoists of Long Hu Mountain your enemies. As for your true enemies, they would not dare to lay a hand on you." Chi asked, "Why? Because the world's foremost swordsman is protecting me?" Li Xuanxiao spoke calmly. "To the west lies the Celestial Master's mansion of Long Hu Mountain. The upcoming initiation ceremony for the old Celestial Master's disciples is being presided over entirely by the 5 lords of the Celestial Master's mansion. Of the 3 capitals and 5 lords of the Celestial Master's mansion, those who oversee the 3 capitals generally refrain from interfering in the internal affairs of Long Hu Mountain thereafter. The 5 red-robed lords of Long Hu Mountain were currently within the chamber, deliberating the details of the initiation rite. This is the list of descendants from various regions who have rendered great service to Long Hu Mountain, possessing a heritage spanning 3 generations or more. Bing Yangzi furrowed his brow slightly, his gaze lingering on the name at the top of the list, the descendant of Zhao Lingxuan. Back then, Zhao Lingxuan was peerless in demeanor, vaguely threatening to surpass even Zheng Tong of Long Hu Mountain, which had stirred dissatisfaction among certain members of the sect. It was Bing Yangzi himself, along with Du Lao, one of the 3 capitals of Long Hu Mountain, who had manipulated the surrounding demons to orchestrate the death of Zhao Lingxuan. Seeing this name again after more than a dozen years, Bing Yangzi's eyelids twitched involuntarily. According to the regulations, their descendants must be direct blood relations, and they must still be serving in local administrative posts to be eligible for selection. Yet, regarding this descendant of Zhao Lingxuan has been dead for many years, and none of his kin remain to hold administrative titles for Long Hu Mountain. The other 4 understood Bing Yangzi's intent. Among them, a red-robed Taoist who had been keeping his eyes closed finally opened them. Zhao Lingxuan rendered great service to Long Hu Mountain in his time. He protected the people of Ziling, ensuring their peace. After his death, he was granted the honor of burial at Long Hu Mountain. The entire Zhao household was decimated, leaving only a single daughter who survived. Now she arrives holding her father's If we are turned away at the gate, who knows what the world will say about us? Bing Duangtu had nothing more to say, and the others voiced no further objections. Judging by their attire, one would think a group of beggars had ascended the mountain. Disciples of Long Hu Sun sat upon the white stone steps on both sides, watching Li Xuanxiao and the others with amusement, as if observing mere pack donkeys. That followed behind Li Xuanxiao, walking in silence. Ling Daoling rolled up her sleeves, ready to lash out, but was swiftly hoisted into the air by Li Xuanxiao. "Big brother, let me go. I must teach these blind dogs a lesson." "Hey, you are Zhao Lingxuan's daughter, aren't you? Do you realize how many disciples of Long Hu Sun your father caused to perish? Yet you still dare to come to Long Hu Sun? What is your name? Are you mute? Beggars have come to the mountain. Beggars have come to the mountain." Li Xuanxiao cast a glance. Most of them were outer sect disciples of Long Hu Sun, barely 13 or 14 years of age. It was clear someone was behind this. Inner sect disciples would not deign to perform such trivial tasks, so they had deliberately gathered these young outer sect disciples. Reflecting on this, Li Xuanxiao could not help but smile, shaking his head in realization. The scheme was insignificant, yet it was truly effective at causing annoyance. Get lost, go back to wherever you came from. Long Hu's son does not welcome you. Are you playing deaf? Father. You are. That clenched her fists, remaining silent. Li Xuanxiao looked down at the young girl and said with a gentle smile, "You are very angry, aren't you?" That did not speak. She nodded, then shook her head. Anger only harms oneself. That will simply remember them. Not bad. Li Xuanxiao patted the girl on the head. Just then, a young disciple clad in Taoist robes appeared ahead, using his gaze to silence the crowd of disciples. These outer sect disciples are young and ignorant. I beg you not to take offense. Please follow this humble Taoist. They followed the man until they reached a dilapidated shack before the entrance ceremony hall. Please, make yourselves comfortable here. Ling Daoling covered her nose, looking at the heap of filth in the corner of the room and could not help but curse. What on earth is this? Is this a place for humans to stay? This is clearly a place meant for beasts. Is this how Longhu Mountain treats its guests? The young Taoist smiled indifferently and left behind a single sentence. Ling Dao and Ling Shi were so furious they stomped their feet, cursing the young Taoist ancestors to the 8th generation under their breath. Li Xuanxiao simply collapsed onto a rock by the entrance, yawning lazily. But she began to tidy up the dilapidated house, and the small donkey sneezed. The disciple entrance ceremony was set to begin in 1 month. Li Xuanxiao intended to stay at Longhu Mountain for a few days, but certain individuals at Longhu Mountain were determined to make things difficult for them. Not only were they denied meals, but in the dead of night, people would sneak up and pelt their home with stones. Upon learning that the other incoming disciples were arranged in the spacious, comfortable main halls of the East Palace, Ling Dao and Ling Shi were so incensed they jumped up in rage, standing before the palace to shout insults, though Li Xuanxiao dragged them away before they could be reprimanded. Big brother, at least let me vent my anger. These Longhu Mountain Taoists are behaving like monsters. They look down on everyone with eyes like dogs. Since no one would provide food, Ling Dao and Ling Shi went to fetch it themselves. Each time they had to traverse a long and arduous path to do so, and naturally this journey was never smooth. Either the outer disciples of Longhu Mountain, who were of similar age, would intentionally collide with them, or they would invent excuses to provoke and curse at them. Ling Dao had a fiery temper, and within a few exchanges of words they would be locked in a brawl. The opposition was numerous. When Ling Dao was overwhelmed by 4 opponents and knocked down, Qi set down the food box in his hands, rolled up his sleeves, and charged into the fray. Although these Longhu Mountain practitioners were merely outer disciples, they were of similar age to Qi and Ling Dao. Despite being from cultivation families, they were in the end only children. Having grown up brawling in the streets, Ling Dao's combat instincts were naturally seasoned. Having spent his youth forging iron with Ti Niu, Qi found dealing with these arrogant peers as easy as turning over his hand, and soon enough, the 5 or 6 youth were beaten into fleeing in tears. However, the next day an even larger ambush awaited them. Ling Dao and Qi fought their way back, covered in food and broth. Ling Dao rubbed his reddened cheek, and seeing his pathetic state, Qi said, "What are you crying for? You were beaten, so just strike back tomorrow." The following day, the 2 children went to retrieve their meals again. This time, Ling Dao and Qi were prepared. One threw a handful of sand they had prepared into their opponent's eyes. The other struck with a bamboo sword, seizing the advantage, though by the next encounter, the opposition had armed themselves with weapons as well. Ling Dao was beaten black and blue. With his face stained with tears and mucus, he grabbed the sleeve of Li Xuanxiao's robe, begging his big brother to seek vengeance for them. Li Xuanxiao sat upon the rock and spoke indifferently. "I helped you strike back this time because you were defeated. But when you are beaten next time, who will be there to fight on your behalf?" Li Xuanxiao simply turned his attention back to sleeping in the dilapidated house. Qi and Ling Daoling had no idea what was constantly occupying his mind. "Big brother, the sword techniques you taught me are useless," Ling Daoling said, frustrated. He had attempted to use those stances previously, only to find the results inferior to his own reckless flailing. "That is only because the 2 of you do not know how to wield them. Keep practicing and do not be lazy." Li Xuanxiao lazily rolled over. For an entire month, Ling Daoling and Qi did not see Li Xuanxiao step foot outside the dilapidated shack. The 2 of them had been beaten for a month, but their adversaries fared no better. Even when bruised and battered, Ling Daoling and Qi would desperately grab onto their opponents to land a few blows in retaliation. Finally, the month drew to a close. As the day of the disciple initiation ceremony arrived, true trouble came knocking at their door. Ling Daoling and Qi had just finished changing their robes early in the morning, preparing to head out to attend the initiation ceremony, when they saw the area outside teeming with people. The outer sect disciples of Longhu Mountain, whom Qi and Ling Daoling had dealt with previously, had not only returned in full force but had brought their elders along with them. Li Xuanxiao stepped out of the house, letting out a long yawn. "What is the matter, gentlemen? Why such a great commotion?" "It is them." One of the youths, his face covered in bruises, pointed directly at Qi and Ling Daoling. His eyes flickered with intense rage. Within the crowd stood an elderly man. His gaze rested upon Qi, his long, narrow eyebrows furrowing slightly. In both appearance and demeanor, the boy was truly identical to Zhao Lingquan. Years ago, during the plot to assassinate Zhao Lingquan, those present and the Longhu Mountain clans they represented had all played a part. Otherwise, they would not have come here today to root out the weeds. Since matters had reached this point, they could not be left unchecked. A descendant of Zhao Lingshuan has ascended Long Hu Mountain. You have failed to discipline those under your charge, condoning these children's violent behavior. We have come here today to demand an explanation. No sooner had the elder named Qian finished speaking than Ling Doling shouted back. Lies, nothing but lies. It was clearly your children who provoked us first and cursed us. A whole gang of you attacked the two of us, and after we beat you into such a state, you still dare to come here demanding an explanation? You are truly shameless. The elderly man surnamed Qian's face darkened. You are but a child still smelling of mother's milk, yet you dare speak to my master in such a manner. He then turned his focus toward Li Xuanxiao, adding, It is surely your lack of discipline. Why have you not yet apologized to my master? At this moment, Bing Yangzi, one of the 5 masters of Longhu Mountain, remained within the hall, yet he could perceive the situation unfolding among Li's group at any time. He used the skirmish between the children as a pretext to arrange for everyone to arrive and demand an explanation. Dispute between the two sides was inevitable, and amidst the heated confrontation, a young disciple lost his temper and struck. The accidental death of Zhao Lingshuan's daughter, A Qi, while she was at Longhu Mountain to seek tutelage, in the eyes of outsiders, this was merely a tragic accident. As for the young disciple who committed the deed by mistake, the crime was not worthy of death. Once the storm passed, he would naturally be granted a reprieve. Even if the old heavenly master were to pursue the matter, they would simply have the young disciple commit suicide as a gesture of atonement. For the sake of its reputation, Longhu Mountain would certainly bury this affair. Zhao Lingshuan's family had no descendants, so naturally, no one would persist in seeking justice, and in the end, the matter would remain unresolved. Bing Yangzi recited the Sutra of Purity. To him, this was no grave matter, akin to weeding a garden. Since Zhao Lingshuan was already dead, killing his daughter was merely a precaution against future trouble. Even if this scheme failed today, there would be countless ways to ensure her death either within or outside the gates of Longhu Mountain later. Yet why did he feel a vague sense of unease? As one of the 5 masters of Longhu Mountain, Bing Yangzi firmly believed that such feelings were never groundless. He simply could not fathom what could possibly be causing this agitation, and was forced to chant the Sutra of Purity to steady his heart, unaware of how he should offer his penance. Li Xuanxiao asked, Kneel and kowtow twice to my master. I am not adept at kowtowing. Li Xuanxiao shook his head and spoke. He then looked up at the sky, appearing entirely indifferent to the young man speaking before him. Snow fell like goose feathers. Qingyun Sect had never seen snow, enjoying spring all year round. It lacked a certain poet charm. A gust of wind blew, causing his robes to billow, and his hair danced in the air accordingly. Li Xuanxiao narrowed his eyes, finding it amusing. Kowtow? Kowtow to whom? Ling Daling said in a fury, a beautiful woman protecting her own. She sneered. The two of you have fathers but no mothers to raise you, yet you dare come to Longhu Mountain to stir up trouble. You are the ones who have fathers but no mothers to raise you. The beautiful woman glared. You little rabbit, say that again if you dare. Ling Doling suddenly fell silent, tugging at Li Xuanxiao's sleeve and whispered, Big brother, why do I feel that something is not right? You are quite sharp. Ling Doling had once seen bandits kill, and the gazes of these people were no different from those of the bandits. They intend to kill us. Ling Doling could hardly believe it. It would seem so. Ling Doling's lips turned deathly pale. This is Longhu Mountain. Eldest brother, there is no point in stalling for time. It is useless to call for help. Why? Li Xuanxiao watched the snowflake melt rapidly in the palm of his hand and spoke calmly. If it were of any use, they would have arrived long ago. The disciples of Longhu Mountain have been instructed today to avoid this path and take a different route. Inside the deacon hall, the elders sat aloft, discussing the matter as if it did not concern them. If things truly escalate, Bing Yangzi will naturally bear the burden. Another, younger elder appeared somewhat anxious. If it were merely that, I would not be so concerned. It is only that this Li Xuanxiao happened to appear on Longhu Mountain at this very moment. He is already a cripple. What is there to worry about? Although he is a cripple, Li Xuanxiao's reputation is renowned, and he remains a disciple of the Qingyun Sect. If he dies at Longhu Mountain, rest assured Bing Yangzi knows his limits. His target is the descendant of Zhao Lingshuan. He will not lay a hand on Li Xuanxiao. The elder took a sip of his tea and continued, furthermore, that Li Xuanxiao has long been loathed by the Qingyun Sect. Even if he were to die at Longhu Mountain, the Qingyun Sect might even thank us for it. Indeed, is this tea the white horse Mao Jian from the Shaohan Forbidden Area? It is exactly that. There was only this much this year. We shall try to acquire more in another 10 years. I pay my respects to the elder. As the two men spoke, their expressions suddenly tightened. Qi Cheng, teach them a lesson. The beautiful woman spoke indifferently. The servant named Qi Cheng nodded slightly, looking at the youth opposite him, having already decided that he and the other boy only needed to be handled lightly, but that girl must die, though it was somewhat contemptible to raise a hand against a child. Amidst the dilapidated house, Li Xuanxiao slowly rose to his feet amidst the falling snow, and the eyes of all present were drawn to him. They seemed to sense something, as if a signal of lethal danger emanated from the figure before them. Instinctively, they shielded the children behind them, silently circulating their internal energy, prepared to strike at any moment. Yet, the young man opposite them suddenly smiled. Rest assured, I have no intention of laying a hand on you. You are not even worth the effort of such an action. To raise my hand against you would be an affront to my status as a swordsman. He looked up, extending a hand, and commanded, "Lend me your swords for a moment." Li Xuanxiao's voice was not loud, yet it carried an unwavering weight. Every Taoist of Lone Mountain, each carrying a longsword, drew them in unison as the blades took flight toward him. The atmosphere grew turbulent, black clouds choked the sky, fierce winds howled, and the world plunged into gloom. The flying swords streaked across the sky like rainbows, their brilliance tearing through the darkness. In an instant, the entire firmament of Lone Mountain was illuminated by the radiance of swords. The clouds were shredded by the sword intent, revealing the deep blue sky beyond. Sunlight pierced the clouds, casting a golden halo as if a deity had descended upon the mortal realm. Massive trees upon the mountain were severed by the sword energy, emitting groans of splintering wood. Mountain boulders were shattered by the blade light, sending jagged debris scattering in every direction. The greatest river of Longhu Mountain, which flows throughout Xiling, churned violently. At this moment, the entire river was cast in the glow of the swords. The river water was stirred by the sword intent, forming a colossal whirlpool that drew in everything nearby. Spray erupted, shimmering like transparent scattered pearls. The river was carved open by the sword energy, leaving deep gashes as if canyons had formed in the water. In a heartbeat, every living soul on Longhu Mountain was bathed in the light of the blades. The spirit beasts in the garden fled in terror, desperately seeking shelter from the overwhelming sword intent. Birds scattered into the air, letting out shrill, piercing cries. The onlookers stared in horror at the rain of swords, unable to comprehend what was unfolding. Those gathered before the dilapidated house felt a surge of unparalleled power. This force seemed to originate from the very heavens and earth. Before such power, all existence appeared as insignificant as ants. "This is not good, Li Zhenren, please show mercy." Several voices rang out in succession as figures emerged from all directions, rapidly converging on the scene. The chief elder of the disciplinary hall, mid-sentence and mid-stride, arrived at the mountain peak. He stared at the rain of swords. Bin Duang too, one of the 5 masters, drew a deep breath. He muttered rapidly under his breath, and the whisk in his hand began to radiate a peculiar light. "No, it is too late. It is moving too fast." The remaining 4 masters of Longhu Mountain, save for one who practiced dual cultivation, reacted swiftly, yet they could only watch the sky fill with a torrential rain of swords. In an instant, he abandoned any thought of resistance. The Longhu Qi, how is he capable of commanding the Longhu Qi? The 18 banners of the main hall fluttered violently in the wind. On the chessboard, the topographical map of the 18 provinces of Xiling was drawn, accompanied by mysterious talismans. These banners were crafted by the founding celestial master of Longhu Mountain to suppress the 18 provinces of Xiling. In that bygone era, the founding celestial master could command all 18 Longhu banners. Yet since then, no subsequent celestial master had been able to wield the full set of 18 banners simultaneously. Many years ago, Zhao Lingxuan, the Taoist physician of Longhu Mountain, managed to master 14 of them. Several dozen people had broken through the barriers, men and women, young and old alike. They had originally come with a premeditated plan to stir up trouble. They sought to slay the daughter of Zhao Lingxuan, and many Longhu Mountain disciples had gathered to witness the spectacle, over 100 people in total. At this moment they stood frozen, gazing upward as the rain of swords descended upon them. They were certain they would perish. To them, this was an unchangeable fate. They would fall beneath the sword intent in an instant, perhaps without even feeling the pain of death. Thousands of swords plunged into the earth, humming in unison. The sword intent did not dissipate, but as each flying sword fell, it transformed into a downpour of water, drenching the world. A bone-chilling cold struck them, causing them to tremble involuntarily. Everyone stood dumbfounded, realizing, "I am still alive." This thought surged through the minds of everyone present simultaneously. The rain of swords had fallen across the heavens, yet it had not inflicted a single wound. The beautiful woman who had been hurling the harshest insults just moments ago was now pale as a sheet, her soul shattered by terror. The elderly man who had appeared the most composed among the crowd fared no better. And not only them, but what of the external clan disciples of Longhu Mountain? High in the air, the 5 masters of Longhu Mountain, along with the countless disciples from various Taoist sects who had arrived upon hearing the rumors, what of them? In that brief moment, their swords had all unsheathed themselves beyond their control. Li Xuanxiao looked up and proclaimed in a booming voice, "Old Celestial Master, the final strand of Longhu Qi has been returned to Longhu Mountain. From this day forth, we owe each other nothing." Li Xiao brushed the snow from his robes. The sky was now densely packed with the figures of Longhu Mountain Taoists in their traditional attire. Ling Daoling gave a thumbs up, while Qi's large shimmering eyes remained fixed upon Li Xuanxiao. "Truly formidable." Li Xuanxiao nodded. If his memory served him correctly, this was the first time this young girl had ever praised him. "If you are bullied, strike back. If you are defeated by someone of your own age, do not mention my name. I would lose face." The young man in green robes gently patted the small donkey, his aura surging instantly. He turned his head to speak to Ling Doling. "Ling Doling, the small donkey is yours now." In an instant, his figure transformed into a pillar of light, ascending straight into the heavens. Everyone instinctively looked upward as a voice descended from the 9 heavens. "These 2 children are under the protection of me, Li Xuanxiao. I ask that you, the masters of Longhu Mountain, look after them." The tone was light, as if he were merely jesting, but feeling the lingering pressure that had yet to dissipate in the air, everyone present understood the weight of those words. "Big brother, when shall we meet again?" Ling Doling shouted at the top of his lungs. "The path of the world is not far. If fate wills it, we shall meet again. Farewell." A Qi whispered softly. He seemed to know that Li Xuanxiao could hear him. A long while later, the many descendants of the various families who had gathered to watch the spectacle quietly led their children away from the area. Numerous Taoists of Longhu Mountain also began to reclaim their swords one after another. Everyone remained silent, saying nothing. Some even sat cross-legged on the spot, carefully sensing the remnants of the sword intent. Bingyangzi took a deep, steadying breath and exhaled a long, heavy sigh. Such a display, sword energy that blanketed the sky and covered the earth, with thousands of flying swords of varying types and levels, even those not belonging to sword cultivators were controlled so perfectly that not a single trace of energy leaked out, nor did it harm anyone present. Painting on a canvas is not difficult, but to create a beautiful, exquisite masterpiece on a fingernail, that is truly extraordinary. Li Xuanxiao commanded 10,000 swords without harming a soul, much like painting on a thumbnail. Li Xuanxiao is truly worthy of being the pinnacle of the sword Dao. Bingyangzi's gaze fell upon the dilapidated house, then toward the girl with braided hair, and he suddenly spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. He let out a bitter smile. To have withstood a single sword strike from Li Xuanxiao, this life has not been in vain. In the cave dwelling behind Longhu Mountain, the old heavenly master slowly opened his eyes, sensing that the Longhu Qi, which had been depleted for over 70 years, had finally been replenished. Years ago, for the sake of destroying the demonic sect, Li Xuanxiao had borrowed more than half of the Longhu Qi from Longhu Mountain. Because the Dragon Tiger aura is inextricably linked to the nation's destiny, only a select few are aware of this truth. In recent years, the Dragon Tiger aura has returned to Longhu Mountain piece by piece. This final wisp of aura remained, though there was little hope left for it. After all, when Li Xuanxiao eradicated the demon sect years ago, it was not for personal gain but for the sake of the entire world. Consequently, Li Xuan suffered grievous injuries, and the Dragon Tiger aura possessed unique healing properties. Keeping the Dragon Tiger aura by his side was therefore a matter of course entirely reasonable and justified. One could even argue that, due to certain circumstances, the entirety of Longhu Mountain owes Li Xuanxiao a debt. Little did anyone expect that after so many years, Li Xuanxiao would ultimately return the Dragon Tiger aura to Longhu Mountain. 1 month later, in the town of Yong'an Jiling, the divine doctor of ghost hands Li Yong'an was busily tending to his jars and vials. His fingers danced nimbly across the various medicinal ingredients, as if he were performing a magnificent piece of music. These containers held medicinal ingredients that Li Yong'an cherished as if they were priceless treasures. Each one had been carefully selected and refined by his own hand. He regarded these ingredients like his own children, treating them with immense love and meticulous care. Li Xuanxiao, lying on the bed, cast a faint glance toward him and asked, "Tell me, old Li, where is the medicine you were brewing? How long has it been? Less talk. If you don't wish to die, keep your mouth shut." Li Yong'an hunched over, took a small black pill he had just finished rolling and shoved it into Li Xuanxiao's mouth, grumbling incessantly. "You tell me, your injuries have already improved. Can you not simply rest and recover? You insisted on heading to Longhu Mountain to unsheath your blade, and fine, you drew your sword, but why return the Dragon Tiger aura to them as well?" Li Xuanxiao replied, "Looking handsome is a lifelong commitment. Besides, that Dragon Tiger aura was never truly mine. I promised them long ago that I would return it to Longhu Mountain. If I had not given my word, that would be one thing, but once a promise is made, it must be kept. Only a man like you could be so reckless yet hold such deep regard for integrity." Li Yong'an poured a green liquid from his hand into Li Xuanxiao's mouth. He patted his back and said, "This dragon-soaring pill of mine is something countless powerful sect masters would kill to obtain. Remember, back when I was concocting this medicine, I went through more than 81 trials. I sought out 3 master alchemists, moved heaven and earth, and endured countless hardships just to refine these 3 dragon-soaring pills. I had already used the first 2. I intended to save this third one to extend my own lifespan in the future." Li Xuanxiao offered a wry smile. "You stingy old man. Rest well. Your cultivation foundation has been destroyed. Do you still think you are the man you were in your youth? Even if your injuries heal, your foundation cannot be restored. You must find a new foundation compatible with your own as soon as possible." Li Xuanxiao gave a lazy yawn. A high-quality cultivation foundation is not like a vegetable in a garden. Where is one supposed to find such a thing? Li Yong'an smiled warmly and said, "Return to the Qingyun sect or pledge your allegiance to any powerful faction. As long as news of your recovery spreads, they would not only provide a foundation, they would even carve their own bones out to give to you. How exhausting. While I am still alive, I wish to travel and see the world." Li Xuanxiao stretched his limbs. "As for a foundation, they are not easily found. Let fate take its course. Enough of this talk. Go get some wine and meat. It is rare for us to meet like this. Tonight we shall drink until we are satisfied. We do not leave until we are drunk." Night fell, and Li Xuanxiao and Li Yong'an drank together in the countryside under the moonlight, surrounded by the medicinal garden of the ghost hand divine doctor Li Yong'an, where a single herb plucked at random would be enough to make external cultivators fight to the death. No one would expect such a miraculous field to exist not in a sect, a noble clan, or the imperial gardens, but within a small, ordinary town. Yet at this moment, a field of such heaven-defying value had become nothing more than a roasting pit for Li Xuanxiao. "Do you remember the first time we shared a meal? It was meat roasted over this very fire." Li Xuanxiao narrowed his eyes, staring intently at the meat sizzling over the flames. Li Yong'an stroked his beard. He could never forget the Longan of those years before he was known as the Ghost Hand Divine Doctor, when he was merely a blind man wandering from place to place, desperate to heal his own eyes, as if time itself had folded, bringing all the memories of the past back to the surface. Though his heart was surging with emotion like thunder, he eventually uttered only a simple phrase. It has been a long time. After the wine brought their spirits to a peak, they recalled the past, the triumphs, the regrets, and the heartaches of many years gone by, drinking until the vessels were empty, until they fell into a deep stupor, sleeping soundly together, still deep in slumber when the sun rose, wondering if the next time they met it would be I burning incense for you or you for me. Li Xuanxiao spoke with a laugh, and a smile appeared on Li Yonggan's weathered face, carrying with it a touch of bitterness, for the world changes and the stars shift. Everything had been seen. Li Xuanxiao rolled over to sit atop the small donkey and waved his hand farewell. The last time he had said farewell, it was 40 years before they met again. Who knew how many years it would be this time? Li Yong watched Li Xuanxiao's receding figure for a long, long time. They say that as people age, they become more prone to nostalgia. He had never believed it before, but now he suspected this might be their final meeting. Yonggan sighed softly and turned back toward his home. He dispelled the restrictions surrounding his garden, revealing its true appearance. He then saw his patch of land, which he had tended to so meticulously. Every single precious medicinal herb had been stolen. To be able to plunder his garden without his knowledge, and for the thief to have so nonchalantly taken only the finest herbs, there was certainly no one in this small town capable of such a feat. Any stranger appearing in the vicinity of the town would surely have been detected by him. Thus there could only be one person in this entire world, the only one who would dare to steal from the divine physician Li Yonggan. Li Yun stood frozen for a moment, then reacted, erupting into a string of curses. Li Xuanxiao, you blind, shameless wretch. Li Xuanxiao rubbed his nose and smiled with satisfaction, thinking old Li is surely missing me already. Such profound brotherly affection. I've barely left, and he is already longing for me so deeply. Li Xuanxiao patted the sack used to store the medicinal herbs. It was a beautiful sunny day with crimson flowers and verdant grass. Li Xuanxiao held a small wooden stick in his hand, with a string tied to one end, and a carrot dangling from the string. He sat upon the donkey, positioning the carrot just before the small creature's eyes. He used this method to urge the small donkey forward. The small donkey could not reach the carrot to the left, nor could it reach it to the right, letting out an annoyed bray before shaking its body and tossing Li Xuanxiao to the ground. Li Xuanxiao was caught off guard and took a miserable tumble, the stick in his hand falling away. The small donkey hurriedly lowered its head to snatch the carrot and eat it, making Li Xuanxiao so angry he kicked it in the rump. You heartless beast. I provide your food and drink, yet this is how you treat me? The small donkey shot him a sideways glance, as if to say, if I didn't work, who would be carrying you around every day? Li Xuanxiao brushed the dust from his backside and, with a casual gesture, pulled a medicinal herb from his sack as if it were a common roadside weed and tossed it into his mouth. If other herbalists or alchemists were to witness this scene, they would likely stomp their feet in rage, screaming, a waste of heaven's treasures, an absolute waste. In the 3 provinces of Fengye, the cultivation levels of a practitioner are divided into 9 realms, and the herbs and elixirs of this world are categorized in the same manner. Unlike refined elixirs, these naturally grown herbs are nourished by the spiritual energy of the sun and moon. This 3-leaf maple is a 7th-grade precious herb of immense value. Countless alchemists and apothecaries have traversed the lands, searching every blessed cave and hidden realm, desperate to find even a single stalk, yet they return empty-handed. Yet here is Li Xuanxiao consuming it as if it were a common snack. Not a cloud marred the sky, nor was there the slightest breeze. The sun hung high, radiating an intense, sweltering heat. All the vegetation appeared listless, wilting in the stagnant air. Li Xiao gazed into the distance. Before him lay an expanse of verdant mountains, with white clouds weaving through the peaks like a hidden fairyland. He drew a deep breath, his thoughts drifting back to his former self, back to the reckless days of his youth and the uncertainty that had once defined him. From afar, the rhythmic thundering of hooves echoed along the main road, drawing steadily closer. Li Xuanxiao tilted his head slightly to see a troop of soldiers clad in heavy full-body armor approaching. The war horses beneath them were unnervingly massive, resembling ferocious beasts. The ground trembled violently under their charge, as if an earthquake were imminent. Li Xuanxiao hastily guided his small donkey to the side to avoid a collision. Following behind, the rumble of carriage wheels surged forward like a rushing tide. The white jade carriage shimmered brilliantly under the sunlight, elegant and adorned with exquisite gold trim. Li Xuanxiao held a piece of soft-baked bread in one hand, taking a hearty bite. At that moment, the carriage curtain was pulled aside, revealing a beautiful and charming face. It was a young girl of about 16, possessing delicate, refined features. Her eyebrows were arched like crescent moons, and her eyes sparkled with the brilliance of stars. Her nose was straight, her lips a soft pink, and the slight curve at the corner of her mouth betrayed a hint of sweetness and mischief. She observed Li Xuanxiao and the small donkey he was riding, before her gaze settled upon the piece of bread in his hand. She couldn't help but purse her lips and ask, "Could you spare me a piece of that?" Li Xuanxiao chuckled. He tore off the untouched half of his bread and tossed it toward her. The young lady's face lit up with joy, and she reached out with her small hand. But in the next second, a flash of sword light struck the bread, sending it falling to the dirt. A swordsman in white robes, riding alongside the carriage, had intercepted it. "Young miss, such bread is food for the unrefined. If you are hungry, there are pastries inside the carriage. Furthermore, one should not randomly consume food from strangers." Having said this, he cast a cold, sharp glare at Li Xuanxiao, clearly issuing a warning. Li Xuanxiao shrugged helplessly. The young lady looked at the bread lying on the ground, her face full of regret as she remarked, but he looked like he was enjoying it so much. Besides, if you didn't want me, the swordsman in white ignored the young girl's incessant murmuring. Li Xuanxiao found the scene rather amusing. He reached into his robes, retrieved a wild fruit he had gathered earlier, and took a bite. After a few mouthfuls, he noticed a pair of eyes fixed intently upon him. Li Xuanxiao turned his head to see the same young lady from the carriage, her gaze locked firmly on the wild fruit in his hand. Li Xuanxiao found this truly intriguing. Observing the surrounding entourage, he knew this carriage certainly did not belong to a destitute family. How could a simple wild fruit or a piece of flatbread fascinate her to such a degree? Do you want one? Mm-hmm. The young girl nodded like a chick pecking at grain. Li Xiao cast a sidelong glance at the swordsman in white, saying, "I wish to eat a wild fruit." The swordsman in white felt a flicker of helplessness. Seemingly worried that his young mistress would continue her muttering, he tossed a gold ingot toward Li Xuanxiao. Hand over the fruit. His tone carried an undeniable air of command. Li Xuanxiao's expression remained unchanged as he tossed the fruit over, accompanied by the gold ingot he had just received. A wild fruit picked from the mountain is of little value. Consider this a gesture of friendship. The swordsman in white furrowed his brows, eyeing Li Xuanxiao with a hint of surprise. However, he quickly let out a cold snort. Do you truly think a wild fruit is enough to establish ties with my Wei clan? Unlike the swordsman, the young girl took a bite of the fruit, her face blossoming into a satisfied smile. Once she had finished, she looked at Li Xuanxiao with a smile, as if asking, "Are there any more?" Li Xuanxiao found the situation entertaining. "What is your name, young lady?" "Wei Yingying." Li Xuanxiao searched his memories. Judging by the formation of the entourage, this was likely the Nanyang Wei clan, and the carriages behind were filled with gifts for a celebration. Thus, Li Xuanxiao asked a follow-up question. Is it for the celebration of the master of Tungyun Pavilion and the son of Tungwu Daxi? We are heading there to attend the banquet." At the mention of the banquet, Wei Yingying's eyes lit up. "Then, as you are traveling alone on your donkey, what is your purpose there?" Wei Yingying asked with curiosity. "I am wandering the world to observe the scenery, but I have also decided to visit Tengyun Pavilion to share a celebratory cup of wine." "That is perfect. We are heading in the same direction." The swordsman in white spoke coldly. "You are also acquainted with the master of Tengyun Pavilion?" Yes, in a manner of speaking. He was familiar with the man's cultivation level. The flow of energy within his body and the spiritual essence in his internal organs were laid bare, fully revealed to his senses. Ignoring his appearance, the swordsman in white immediately used his divine sense to probe the youth's true age. Although it is impossible to pinpoint the exact date, one can roughly estimate his age. With such mediocre cultivation, he has no future to speak of. He is merely a man of shallow knowledge and little talent. How could he possibly be an acquaintance of the pavilion master? The white-robed swordsman remained skeptical, assuming that seeing this group's imposing aura, he simply wished to follow them to Tengyun Pavilion to try his luck. He is certainly a man who knows how to adapt to the situation. Before acting, the white-robed swordsman cast a glance at his young mistress. Seeing that she was conversing with the other party with great interest, he remained silent, harboring a secret hope that this would keep her from bothering him. Sending the fellow away, once they arrived at Tengyun Pavilion, would be a trivial matter. Li Xuanxiao and Wei Yingying found they were getting along quite well. The young lady was still of a tender age and possessed a curiosity for everything. As for Li Xuanxiao, he simply had no one else to converse with and was feeling rather bored. "Do you know the master of Tengyun Pavilion?" Wei Yingying asked if he had known him previously. Wei Yingying then asked, "Then how is the cooking of his personal chef?" It was evident that Wei Yingying truly attached great importance to this banquet. Li Xuanxiao was left between laughter and tears by the young girl's erratic train of thought. "I truly do not know. I have never dined at his estate, and moreover the last time I met him was many years ago." "Then is there food inside the sack on your back?" Wei Yingying stared fixedly at the sack strapped to the donkey's back. You could say that." Li Xuanjiao gave a vague reply. His response only piqued Wei Yingying's curiosity further. "What is it? I will trade you something for it. Any single medicinal herb in that sack is likely worth more than this entire carriage fleet." "Not trading, I will not trade. Besides, you would not be able to consume these items." Li Xuanxiao laughed and said that herbs and elixirs cannot be consumed at will. It is not that the higher the grade, the better the effect. Rather, it must be suited to the individual condition of each cultivator. If the body cannot withstand the medicinal potency, it will be harmed by the medicinal essence. In mild cases, one suffers injuries, and in severe cases, one loses their life. Wei Yingying's face was filled with disappointment, but after a moment of reflection, she brought out a priceless jade pendant. "I will trade with you." The swordsman in white glanced over, his face filled with helplessness. The young lady's habit of trading precious artifacts for mere food was a flaw he could never correct. Fearing that she might casually give away items of true value, the old matriarch had intentionally provided her with trinkets of little worth. Even so, the jade pendant in the young lady's hand was likely enough to sustain the young man before her for 3 lifetimes. To the Wei family, however, it was hardly considered a treasure of any consequence. While this person seemed clumsy, he was truly fortunate to have encountered their young lady. It could be considered a stroke of luck for him. "Will you trade or not?" Wei Yuan asked, filled with expectation. Li Xuanxiao hurriedly waved his hands. No trade, no trade. You cannot eat this item anyway." The swordsman in white standing nearby let out a cold internal laugh. He concluded the boy was a fool. A heaven-sent opportunity had arrived before him, only to be rejected. Yet from beginning to end he remained silent. He acted like an observer from on high, watching in silence as an ant struggled to move its food. The caravan continued its journey under a somber, overcast sky. Dense, heavy clouds gathered, bringing with them a gray, muddy rain. A bitter northeasterly wind howled as it swept across the wilderness. It felt as if it held a sharp blade, capable of piercing through thick leather garments. Fortunately, more than half of the people in the caravan were cultivators, so they had no fear of the roaring northern gale. Li Xiao brought his small donkey to a halt at a graveyard ahead, having no intention of traveling further. The snowfall was so heavy that the road ahead was obscured, yet the Wei family's caravan seemed entirely unconcerned by this. Before moving on, Li Xuanxiao built a fire, shivering as he jumped to keep warm. This graveyard had been established by a prominent local family. It was specifically used to house those who died with unknown identities or those who had perished from injustices. There was no one to maintain or clean the site. Li Xuanxiao cast a glance at the few coffins scattered within the grounds. Nearby there were also some basic supplies of grain. Li Xuanxiao searched the surroundings and discovered an earthenware pot in the corner. He used snow to scrub the pot clean, added some water and a portion of rice, and placed it over the fire to cook. As the fire intensified, the snow melted, and before long the fragrant aroma of porridge filled the air. Li Xuanxiao narrowed his eyes and took a sip of wine, listening to the whistling of the wind and snow outside. He felt quite content, though his peace did not last long before a sound arose from outside. Li Xuanxiao turned his head only to see a familiar, adorable little face poking through. The entire Wei family carried. "Come inside quickly, it is much warmer within." Wei Yingying called over several maidservants dressed in flimsy attire. Wearing so little in this weather, she could not bear to leave them outside the carriage where it was warm. "Look for yourself, just see how cold they have become." The swordsman in white spoke coldly. "Young miss, if servants were to board the carriage just as the master does, would that not be a violation of the rules?" "What rules? They are not cultivators. What if they freeze to death?" These maidservants possessed stunning beauty, yet they lacked the natural talent for cultivation. "Eat first. We shall rest for a moment before continuing our pursuit." The swordsman in white held his long sword horizontally across his chest and sat cross-legged. Once he had finished speaking, he had no desire to say anything more. In his view, the life or death of these maidservants was of no concern to him. As they had all signed contracts of indenture, their fates were entirely their own, and the Wei family was certainly not lacking in servants. This was not merely his own outlook. What great family did not view such servants as mere tools rather than people? "Young miss, you are but a young girl. This firewood belongs to you. Could you perhaps sell us a little?" Wei Yingying asked, perplexed, why there was so much firewood left here in such a desolate place. It was left behind by others for the convenience of travelers. Why? Li Xuanxiao explained, there is no particular reason. To help others is to help oneself. Travelers make use of the firewood, and the next day they conveniently replace what they have used for those who follow. Wei Yingying blinked, while the swordsman in white offered a cold, mocking laugh in his heart. He believed these weaklings were simply clinging to one another, though he had no desire to explain his cynical view to his young mistress. "This porridge of yours looks quite delicious." Wei Yingying pursed her lips, then handed all the sweets she carried to Li Xuanxiao. "I will trade with you." Li Xuanxiao looked at the exquisitely wrapped pastries in his hand, took a small bite, and chewed slowly, savoring the delicate flavor melting in his mouth. "These are the pastries from the Wangji shop in Chang'an." Chang'an was located in the Great Yi dynasty, and to seek the pastries of Great Yi while here in the western lands, the price would likely be several dozen times higher, though for the Wei family such a cost was naturally of no consequence. Wei Yingying's face showed astonishment. "You have tasted them before?" "I have. In the past, a friend of mine loved to eat them." "Beautiful women share the same tastes. Your friend must be just like me." "She was indeed a great beauty." Li Xuanxiao nodded. "Yes, she was truly a peerless beauty, the greatest beauty under the heavens. And just how beautiful was she? It is difficult to describe. In short, she was very beautiful, though certainly not as beautiful as my elder sister." Wei Yingying said, "My elder sister is the greatest beauty under the heavens. One day, call your friend over so she can compete with my sister." "That I am afraid is impossible, for she is already dead." Li Xuanxiao said coldly, "And why is that?" "I killed her." Wei Yingying's movement of eating porridge paused. She raised her head, her amber pupils staring fixedly at Li Xuanxiao. "Why?" "Because she was a madwoman who sought to slaughter everyone under the heavens." Li Xuanxiao rested his head on one hand, his tone as casual as if he were discussing trivialities. The members of the Wei family nearby, hearing this statement, could not help but feel a touch of amusement. They did not pay much mind to it, and even the servants tending the fires merely assumed this was idle talk within the family. The only person who truly believed him was perhaps the little girl sitting before Li Xuanxiao. Wei Yingying asked then, wasn't she very formidable? Quite formidable and quite confident too. She would always say, "Unless I choose not to win, no one can defeat me. Whether you live or die rests entirely upon a single thought of this deity." Li Xuanxiao mimicked her tone. "This deity has witnessed the rise and fall of kingdoms, the birth and extinction of races. In the endless river of time, only the stupidity of mortals is eternal and unchanging. You are protecting a world destined for destruction. Your efforts are utterly meaningless. Flee, for only then might you prolong your wretched lives." I am the harbinger of the apocalypse, the shadow that veils the sun. The tolling bell of my existence signals this very moment. Witness the suffering and the despair. The mortal Li Xuanxiao, mimicking her, could not help but laugh at himself. Those around them could no longer suppress their laughter, but as they were of a family with status and breeding, they felt that laughing so openly would be a breach of etiquette, so they merely covered their mouths and chuckled softly. A thought occurred to everyone simultaneously. Does this person have something wrong with his mind? Most of the Wei family members were cultivators. At this moment, they looked at him as if watching a child by the roadside who, filled with a sense of inadequacy, was merely pretending to be a great general who had fought 100 battles and won 100 victories. Even the white-clad swordsman, who had been meditating with his eyes closed, could not help but open them, casting his gaze upon the young man once more. Every time he felt this person's behavior was ridiculous, the man would always perform something even more absurd the very next moment. Wow, how impressive. Wei Yingying's mouth fell agape. The white-clad swordsman sighed in silence. His own young mistress would believe even such blatant nonsense. Given her age, she was hardly a child of 3 or 4 years, yet here they were. Your friend is truly remarkable. Wei Yingying trusted Li Xuanxiao's words without a shred of doubt, feeling utterly defeated, for she believed she had encountered someone far more formidable than herself. At times, Li Xuanxiao wondered if the heavenly Tao had intentionally sent him into this world solely to eliminate her. Once he killed her, perhaps the heavenly Tao would reclaim everything, restoring the balance of power to the world. The heavy snow showed no sign of stopping. The heavens and the earth were filled with snowflakes that refused to melt. It had been a long time, over 30 years, and yet, in his dreams, he still could not clearly see her face. I'm letting my thoughts wander again, Li Xuanxiao muttered, shaking his head. He stepped outside, intending to gather more snow. The wine was finished, which was a pity. Wei Yingying puffed out her cheeks, her eyes darting back and forth, thinking, so she is actually that impressive. The white-clad swordsman finally could not hold his tongue and offered a reminder. Young mistress, do not listen to his nonsense. He is nothing but an incompetent sword cultivator who does not even possess a natal sword. Wei Yingying retorted, her voice firm. You claim he is lying, but why? You yourself are quite fond of boasting, are you not? It is just that someone who boasts as grandiosely as he does is a rare sight. Then how do you know for certain that he is boasting? Wei Yingying remained perplexed, while the maidservant named Yinger by her side chuckled softly. Young mistress, even I can tell. This man nearly blew his own skin off with his words. Yet, despite the biting cold wind blowing against her, her expression remained unchanged. Yinger's father had been a loyal servant to the family for generations, and while their status as family servants was not low, her father was a cultivator who had grown up alongside the young mistress, Wei Yingying. Naturally, their relationship was far closer than that of a typical master and servant, had an ordinary maidservant spoken such words, with the white-clad swordsman standing by. Once the young mistress had departed, the beautiful Wei On frowned slightly. I have witnessed the rise and fall of kingdoms, the birth and extinction of countless species. Throughout the infinite passage of time, only the ignorance of mortals remains eternal. This person speaks most interestingly. Having said that, Ni could not help but purse her lips and smile. But I do not believe he is lying. Wei On spoke, Miss White-clad Swordsman. A con artist would not carve the words liar upon his own face. Do not let yourself be deceived without even realizing it. Ni chimed in, that is right, she is right. Riding a donkey, carrying a sack, and dressed in such rags, he is surely a fool. Just moments ago, Miss wished to trade her jade pendant with him, yet he refused. While he is away, let me see what kind of treasures he hides in the sack. Saying this, she opened the sack that Li Xuanxiao had been carrying throughout the journey. The sack was of the most common variety, usually used by peasants to store grain, and possessed no restrictions or protective seals. Ni pulled a flower from within, her eyes brightening. This sack actually contains quite beautiful flora. The petals were layered, soft and supple to the touch, and the petals were dotted with numerous small golden seeds, releasing a fragrant scent even from a distance. Anji rummaged further. This is quite strange. The sack is filled with flowers. They truly are beautiful. Wei Han leaned in to observe, while the white-clad swordsman glanced over indifferently. The flower seemed unusual. The white-clad swordsman's divine sense swept over it involuntarily, and he found himself even more intrigued. Something is wrong. This is not quite right. Although he did not understand medicine, nor did he possess extensive knowledge of rare herbs, his divine sense could perceive the spiritual essence contained within the flower, sensing a strange energy radiating from it. Master Dian, please look at this flower. The Master Dian he addressed was an apothecary for the Wei family, who was blind in one eye and possessed a somewhat eccentric temperament, yet was highly respected within the Wei family due to his exceptional medical expertise. Upon hearing the call, a disheveled, one-eyed old man with white hair approached, his entire being emanating the distinct scent of one who spent their life surrounded by herbs. You wretched brat, what do you want with me? Looking at a flower? What kind of nonsense is that? Is there anything of value in this place? Despite his dismissive tone, Uncle Ding couldn't help but steal a glance. Uncle Ding leaned down, his clouded eyes fixated on the beautiful blossom. Almost immediately, his expression shifted drastically. The Thousand Deep Spirit Flower? It truly is the Thousand Deep Spirit Flower. His exclamation was so sudden and sharp that it startled those standing nearby. A 7th grade spirit flower, the Thousand Deep Spirit Flower. It is a spirit flower that only grows upon the peaks of the Snow Mountain. The swordsman in white instinctively gripped the hilt of his blade. No wonder the flower looked familiar. Years ago, in his attempt to break through to the middle stage of the sixth realm, he had accompanied an elder of his sect to a secret realm in search of this very plant. The result was a failure. Not only did they fail to find the spirit flower, but he was also severely wounded in the process. Having stagnated in his cultivation for over a decade since, the swordsman in white felt a turbulent surge of emotions upon seeing it once again. This was quickly followed by suspicion. Why would such a rare spirit flower appear in a place like this? Firecore, seven-leaf flower, blood essence grass, blue rock crystal. Damn it, what a waste of heaven's treasures, to keep such precious items in a mere burlap sack. In all my years, I have never laid eyes on such a collection of rarities. Uncle Ding's voice echoed in their ears. The swordsman in white, who had remained expressionless throughout their journey, now saw his face cycle through a myriad of colors. These were all 6th and 7th grade spirit herbs and flowers, and among them there was even an 8th grade specimen, a treasure that had long since transcended the mundane. These spirit herbs and flowers were likely enough to purchase several cities. If word of these were to leak into the Jianghu, one could only imagine how many would slaughter each other for the chance to possess them. The heart of the swordsman in white hammered against his ribs, and his face flushed a deep crimson. He drew a deep breath, struggling to temper the rising tide of excitement and agitation within his heart, yet his heartbeat only quickened, as if his heart were desperate to tear itself free from his chest. These medicinal herbs were beyond anything his family possessed. It was unlikely even the Xiling royal court could boast such a collection. How could a mere rogue cultivator possibly possess so many rare and precious treasures? Could it be that this individual is truly a peerless expert? Yet his divine sense scanned the man and found nothing extraordinary about his physical form. Unless that person's cultivation is so unfathomably high that this is merely a concealment technique, one that I am utterly unable to perceive. At this thought, a cold sweat broke out across the back of the swordsman in white. With an individual of such caliber, how could his family ever hope to survive if they offended him? Give that here. The swordsman in white hastily snatched the spirit herb from Yinger's hand, carefully tucked it back into the burlap sack, and returned the sack to its original position. Watch your tongue regarding what just occurred. The swordsman in white spoke coldly. Everyone present belonged to the Vi family, and naturally, they were aware of the strict rules governing the household. He gave a stern warning to those remaining. The swordsman in white then spoke earnestly to Vi On. Young mistress, you must take care not to let any slip of the tongue occur later. He was not concerned about the others, but only for his young mistress and her lively, impulsive nature. Li Xuanxiao entered the room, chuckling to himself while carrying a small snow-covered bowl. A heart as clear as spirit and hands of unmatched skill, these words were surely coined for me. Even with no one to offer praise, he felt no shame in commending himself. Everyone in the room fell into a momentary silence, not daring to speak. Li Xuanxiao brushed the snow from his clothes at the door, closed it, and sat back down by the fire. V11 had finished her porridge. She now sat upright on the meditation cushion, her bright eyes blinking as she watched Li Xuanxiao. From behind his back, Li Xuanxiao produced a snow-white rabbit. Nothing complimented a snowy day quite like roasted rabbit meat. Simply marvelous. The rabbit's fur was as soft as a ball of fluff. Its long ears stood erect, twitching from time to time, as if it were listening to the sounds of the surroundings. Its eyes, like two rubies, glimmered with the light of intelligence and wit. Such an adorable rabbit, how could we possibly eat it? Vi-On felt a pang of reluctance. Can we not? Vi-On shook her head vigorously like a crashing wave. Look at it, it is so precious, we cannot possibly eat it. Not long after, Vi-On took a bite of the rabbit meat, crispy on the outside and tender within. The rabbit is adorable yet truly delicious. Li Xuanxiao nodded with a chuckle. I told you it would be excellent. The swordsman in white glanced at his young mistress and the youth in blue. No matter how he tried, he could not settle his mind to cultivate the sword Dao, especially knowing that the sack in the other man's possession was filled with rare spirit herbs, yet he dared not harbor any greed for them. He was no fool, nor was he an idiot. Were he a fool or an idiot, he could not have maintained such a prestigious position within the Vi family as an outsider. I have truly misjudged him. I never imagined that someone like this could be a peerless expert. A person of such caliber cannot be a mere nobody. Could he perhaps? That is not right, although I have never met Li Yonggan. I have often heard the medicinal master of the manor, Uncle Ding, mention the portrait of the ghost hand divine physician hanging at the head of his bed, a portrait he bows to 3 times every single day. In his youth, Uncle Ding received medical guidance from him. Therefore, if this person were truly the ghost hand divine physician, Uncle Ding would certainly recognize him. The white-clad swordsman suddenly recalled the story the man had just recounted to his young mistress. That young man in green spoke of a female friend of his who was incredibly beautiful, referring to her as the most beautiful woman under the heavens, yet this supreme beauty was ultimately killed by his own hand. Moreover, this peerless beauty possessed profound cultivation, and only such a person could utter such arrogant words. Unless I wish it, no one can touch me. You are all protecting a world that is destined for destruction. Your efforts are entirely in vain. Flee now. Only then might you survive, and beneath these heavens, only the demon sect enchantress who was killed over 30 years ago fits this description. The sea of blood sweeps across the world, freezing the continent with 1,000,000 swords. It is correct. The most beautiful woman in the world wanted to slaughter everyone under the heavens. Aside from that demon sect enchantress, there is no second person in this world who fits that description. The white-clad swordsman felt a buzzing sensation in his mind. If this is truly the case, could the person standing before him be none other than the leader of the sword path, Li Xuanxiao? The white-clad swordsman's eyes widened to the size of brass bells. If Li Yonggan, the ghost-hand divine physician, is a medicinal master whom the world must admire and worship, then Li Xuanxiao, the leader of the sword path, is a living legend in the eyes of every swordsman. The white-clad swordsman took a deep breath, trying to force himself to remain calm. For a moment he could not process the revelation. In his eyes, the man's identity had transformed instantly from a lowly, talentless sword cultivator into the peerless master of the sword path. The next day, as the wind and snow subsided slightly, the Wei family group and Li Xuanxiao set out on their journey once more. The white-clad swordsman maintained a distance neither too near nor too far from Li Xuanxiao, observing him with great caution. Before he had discovered the man's true identity, he had listened to him humming those off-key melodies, but now he analyzed every word the man spoke. Seeing him pick flowers for the young lady, he scoffed. What he once thought were the trivial actions of a commoner, he now perceived as deep insights into cultivation within the smallest details, truly befitting the path of the sword. Whenever he saw the man speaking to his young mistress, he would inevitably prick up his ears to listen carefully. Yet the young mistress only ever asked him about matters of food. The white-clothed swordsman grew anxious, nearly shouting out loud, "Young miss, are you asking about such trivial matters? Standing before you is the pinnacle of the sword Dao, the #1 person in the 9 provinces, and the chief disciple of Tongshan Peak of the Qingyun sect." The white-clothed swordsman contemplated secretly preparing a list of questions for his young mistress. First, there are rumors that after that battle, your cultivation was crippled. Is this true? Second, there are rumors regarding you and the demon sect enchantress known for her sea of blood, who swept across the world, brought cold to the 9 provinces, and wielded 1,000,000 swords. Was there truly a romantic entanglement between you two? Could you tell me the details? Third, after that battle, the whereabouts of the demon sect enchantress's remains became unknown. Where did she go? The white-clothed swordsman silently calculated the important questions he wished to ask in his heart. A few days later, Tengyuan Pavilion. Today was the wedding of the Tengyuan Pavilion master's son. The entire Tengyuan city was buzzing with excitement, with countless guests pouring in from all corners to offer their congratulations. The streets and alleys were filled with the fragrance of flowers and wine, banners fluttered, and drums echoed to the heavens. It was even more festive than during the New Year. The master of Tengyuan Pavilion is a legendary figure. Back in the era of chaos where demons ran rampant, there was neither the Western Ling nor the Great Imperial Cause. Yet, the Pavilion Master managed to allow Tengyuan City to persist amidst the warring powers. Because of this, the citizens of Tengyuan City lived in peace, unlike the lands outside, which were filled with mountains of corpses, seas of blood, and demons at every turn. During that time, countless refugees fled to Tengyuan City. And this was the very reason. The master of Tengyuan Pavilion protected every citizen in the city single-handedly and performed many acts of benevolence. One must ask, among the people of Tengyuan City today, who has not once received his favor? Outside Tengyuan Pavilion, lanterns were hung, and a red carpet stretched from the entrance to the end of the street. Massive red lanterns were suspended high throughout every alleyway. Upon them were inscribed words celebrating the grand wedding of the Pavilion Master's son. Inside the building, laughter was incessant as guests gathered joyfully. The protagonist of the wedding, the son of the Tengyuan Pavilion Master, was dressed in an ornate long robe holding a paper fan, smiling as he welcomed the guests arriving to offer their blessings. Li Xuanxiao led his small donkey, walking slowly through the low city gate. The sunlight was gentle, yet blinding. The small donkey let out a soft whinny. Li Xuanxiao squinted as he gazed at this ancient and prosperous city. The houses lining both sides of the street were packed tightly together, with soaring eaves and antique architecture. The red brick walls and green tiles covered in creeping vines exuded a sense of history and profound weight. There were refined scholars in long robes, wealthy merchants in extravagant attire, and common folk dressed in simple linen. "That is enough for now." Wei Ongong asked curiously if you were not coming with us. Li Xuanxiao replied that he had to prepare a celebratory gift. One could not simply eat and drink without offering something in return. Li Xuanxiao sat at a roadside tea house, sipping his tea while pondering what gift he should present to the master of Tengyuan Pavilion. He drained his cup and withdrew a crimson leaf from his sack. He examined it carefully. The veins upon it were distinct and the leaf's color was as vibrant and scarlet as a beating heart. Dragon blood leaf. Li Xuanxiao placed the dragon blood leaf into his teacup and signaled for the shopkeeper to pour him a cup of boiling water. The boiling water surged, bubbling incessantly, and the clear liquid transformed into the color of fresh, vibrant blood in an instant. If the steward of the Wei family were to witness this scene, he would surely beat his chest and stomp his feet in agony at such a flagrant waste of heaven's bounty. A waste of heaven's bounty indeed. Li Xuanxiao slowly savored a sip of the tea infused with the dragon blood leaf. He felt the spiritual essence within. The tea house was located on a bustling street, and its prime location meant the prices were slightly higher than those of ordinary establishments. He sat in silence by the lake, soaking in the tranquility of the night. The lake water rippled gently under the soft breeze. The lotus leaves swayed in the night wind, emitting a faint rustling sound. Within his body, a stream of warmth flowed violently like a great river, coursing through his meridians and blood vessels, as if bestowing a vitality that filled his entire being with energy. Every single one of his cells was greedily absorbing this warm current, letting it circulate throughout his form. He closed his eyes, surrendering himself to this exquisite sensation. After a long while, Li Xuanxiao exhaled softly. The effectiveness of this dragon blood leaf in cleansing his marrow and meridians was truly remarkable. His method of absorption would be considered absolute heresy to an ordinary cultivator. Regardless of whether it is spirit herbs or spirit medicine, it must pass through the hands of an apothecary. Only after an alchemist has refined it can it be consumed. Furthermore, the higher the grade, the greater the caution required, as the slightest negligence could result in the backlash of the medicinal potency. True masters understand the rarity of spirit herbs. Therefore, during the refining process, they pour their entire heart and soul into the work, carefully researching the properties of each spirit herb to discover the optimal refinement method to preserve the medicinal efficacy at its highest level. During the refining process, the apothecary will utilize various tools and techniques such as cauldrons, refining arrays, and the extraction of active ingredients within the spirit herbs through constant adjustments and testing, ensuring the quality and efficacy of the medicinal pills. Alchemists focus more on the harmony and condensation of the medicinal properties extracted from the spirit herbs. Spirit medicine is not a simple matter. Apothecaries and alchemists must face many difficulties and challenges. The selection of tools for refining spiritual herbs and the precise control of the refinement process are paramount. Therefore, when alchemists and pharmacists refine spiritual herbs and medicinal plants, they must always remain as cautious and meticulous as if they were treading upon thin ice, ensuring that every spiritual herb and plant is utilized to its absolute maximum potential. It is precisely for this reason that alchemists and pharmacists, whether within a sect or an imperial dynasty, command an exceptionally high status. For regardless of one's innate talent,